The story begins when a woman was heard screaming from a musty house. She was screaming that if Zhou Wufeng was a man, he should beat her to death. At the same time, a man was sleeping peacefully on the bed. A disgusting liquid was pouring out of his mouth. The place where he lived was not a good place. There were only cans and bottles of booze, used cigarettes, and a pile of garbage. At the same time, the woman was on her knees and told to go to her and beat her until she died. Suddenly, the man's hand trembled. The man's face tensed. He was clearly feeling far from his best. All of a sudden, he woke up and immediately threw up on the bed. Out of surprise, the man started waving his head around as if he didn't know where he was. At the same time, another city filled with many skyscrapers was glowing from the outgoing light. The two men began congratulating the protagonist and offered to drink a toast in his honor. However, Zhou Wufeng, after barely taking a sip, let the shot glass out of his hands, and it shattered with a clatter. Zhou Wufeng grabbed his throat. The man looked like he was in incredible pain. Suddenly, the man fell unconscious. People began to gather around him and asked if he was okay. In a panic, they talked about calling an ambulance. Suddenly, the man opened his eyes. He started screaming furiously, instantly getting out of bed. After the man shouted, he tried to catch his breath. In contrast to the protagonist's mood, the room looked completely normal, with only the curtains swaying in the breeze. Zhou Wufeng looked out of the window and was very surprised at what he saw. Putting on his slippers, the man tried to get out of bed. Fastening his shirt, the man walked out of the room and tried to figure out where he was. And then it hit him. Memories began to surface in his eyes. However, along with the memories came incredible pain. He remembered that he had been married to Jiang Xiaoduo for 2 years. Both of his parents died when the equipment was misused. The man tried to get out of his shock, but he couldn't calm down so easily. His hands kept shaking. Suddenly, the man realized that those memories were not his own, and it was as if he had been reborn. Zhou Wufeng remained in shock for a while longer. He couldn't utter a single word. A woman's crying sound brought him out of this state. Zhou Wufeng obviously did not expect it, and turned to the source of the sound. There he saw a woman sitting on the floor next to a lot of broken bottles and a pile of alcohol. She was crying, either from unhappiness or despair, and called the protagonist a bastard. Seeing her, Zhou Wufeng said hello as if nothing had happened. The woman didn't expect it. Jiang Xiaoduo couldn't utter a word and merely looked at the protagonist as she continued to cry. Zhou Wufeng tried to turn around, for he was extremely embarrassed by the woman's revealing dress. Averting his eyes, Zhou Wufeng tried to apologize. Jiang Xiaoduo clearly did not expect this outcome of events and looked at the protagonist in surprise. Just then, someone knocked on the door. Zhou Wufeng turned around to the source of the sound. Walking over to her, he took hold of the doorknob and opened it. Yuna and little Zheng appeared outside the door. Zhou Wufeng greeted them politely. Zhou Wufeng noticed the bruise on her face and angrily asked who hit her. He also assumed that she had been hit by one Huhan. That's when he remembered the scene of a man slapping Yuna's face while yelling that she was the reason his parents were dead. The same man told her to get away and stop talking nonsense. A high school girl with a sullen face asked why he was asking if he already knew the answer. She continued that they had run out of food. She said that little Zheng hadn't eaten for a few days and she came to ask for some money. Zhou Wufeng said to go in first. He asked Jiang Xiaoduo how much money and food they had left. She replied that they only had 5 yuan left, but they had 10 kilograms of rice and 2 kilograms of flour. Zhou Wufeng asked Jiang Xiaoduo to do him a favor. When he approached her, he asked her to give 5 yuan and 10 kilograms of rice to Yuna. He said they would have enough flour for a couple of meals, and he would think of a way to solve the problem. Jiang Xiaoduo held out the bill to the protagonist. Walking up to Yuna, Zhou Wufeng held out the bill and told her to take it. The girl was surprised at this outcome of events. Immediately after the girl took the bill, Zhou Wufeng turned around to leave. Everyone was surprised at this decision. Nervous, Jiang Xiaoduo asked where he was going. Opening the door, Zhou Wufeng said that he went to deal with Huhan. As soon as Zhou Wufeng left the house, he heard joyful shouts outside. Someone was trying to sell metal products, scissors, and knives. Although the house Zhou Wufeng lived in was far from the tidiest, the street was the most ordinary. The noise and clamor were typical of this kind of place. After walking a bit more, Zhou Wufeng stopped in front of some unfamiliar house. He looked up and wondered. Walking up the stairs, Zhou Wufeng thought that this was really strange. The main character's parents had worked in the steel mill for almost 20 years, so how did they die from a machine malfunction? Leaning against the wall, Zhou Wufeng thought that being the director of the workshop, Huhan could achieve fame and a good name if he gave consolation. The money would be paid by the factory anyway, and the man had no reason to reject the offer. Meanwhile, night had fallen. The moon was arched high in the sky. Some 2 men came to the door. One of them was biting his fist while the other pulled out his keys. After putting his keys in the keyhole, the man tried to open the door. However, suddenly both of them were startled by an unexpected sound. They abruptly turned around at the sound from behind them and furiously asked who it was. Zhou Wufeng happened to be there, who asked Huhan with a calm smile if he had just returned. The second man tried to push the protagonist away and nearly knocked him to the floor. He furiously asked what his problem was. Huhan approached the protagonist and asked why he was here. Putting his hands together, Zhou Wufeng said that he had come to make a request. Squinting his eyes, Huhan asked how he could help. Clapping his hands, Zhou Wufeng said that it was about his parents. He said that it was really their fault for being careless with the car. He also apologized for his sister who kept giving him trouble. Huhan did not expect such repentance from the protagonist and was greatly surprised. Suddenly, the man clapped his chest and started crying. Huhan said that he was really so caring, and that he was really sad about what happened in the factory. He said that Yuna keeps blaming him for the death of the main character's parents, and isn't it absurd? Scratching his head, the protagonist agreed with the man. Zhou Wufeng said that he came to ask for comfort, because his family was in a difficult situation. Squinting his eyes, the man had already started to talk about the situation. However, Zhou Wufeng interrupted him and started shouting that if the factory did not agree to give him compensation, he would riot. He even said that since he would starve to death anyway, he would riot at his own pleasure. Huhan tried to calm the protagonist down. He told him not to act rashly, because if he made a fuss in the factory, the bosses would still repress the workers, he might be detained, and he said to think about his family. Zhou Wufeng lost his temper and said he couldn't be bothered anymore. He gave an ultimatum. If the factory didn't give money, he would have to revolt. He also said that he would see if his parents had really made a mistake driving the machine. The man visibly tensed up. He said that Zhou Wufeng would not be able to get any money if his parents were guilty of negligently handling the car. However, he said not to worry. Huhan said that he had been friends with the protagonist's parents for a long time and he would give him money instead of the factory. However, Zhou Wufeng immediately asked how much he would give, because if he gave very little, he would prefer to riot in the factory. Clapping the protagonist on the shoulder, the man said that the payment was usually 600 yuan, but he couldn't give more than 500 since he needed the money too. He told the protagonist to wait a while and let him get the money. While Zhou Wufeng leaned against the door arch, Huhan started rummaging through a pile of papers looking for money. Handing the protagonist the money, the man said it was for him. It was still night outside. A black cat ran across the road. Walking out of the house, Zhou Wufeng said that he would definitely make the man pay for his sins. That's when he saw a Chinese candy vendor walking by. Walking up to him, Zhou Wufeng saw that the man was selling 6 pieces of such. However, it wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng went home. Zhang Xiaoduo heard someone opening the door and turned around to the source of the sound. There stood Zhou Wufeng, who was wishing her happy birthday with a joyful smile. The woman clearly hadn't expected such a move on his part, was greatly surprised. Zhou Wufeng said with a soft smile that he was sorry that he could only give this. He was still making excuses that when he left Huhan's house, it was already quite late. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng held out 2 servings of sweets. Zhang Xiaoduo decided to try one stick. After tasting a piece, Zhang Xiaoduo's eyes seemed to light up. She turned to the protagonist and asked if he wanted to take a bite. Zhou Wufeng said that he had already eaten, and it was all for her. Smiling softly, the man thought that after he left, he hoped that the real Zhou Wufeng would treat the woman well. Looking at his watch, Zhou Wufeng realized that it was already later than 10 o'clock. Zhang Xiaoduo called out and asked if Zhou Wufeng was going to bed. It was late at night. The moon was shining in the wide sky. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng and Zhang Xiaoduo went to bed. Even though Zhou Wufeng was spinning on the edge of the bed, he still casually touched his wife's breast with his hand. Zhou Wufeng blushed and repeated to himself that she was someone else's wife. He still couldn't fall asleep. Soon it was morning. The rooster crowed at dawn. Along with him, Zhou Wufeng literally jumped out of bed. With bags under his eyes, Zhou Wufeng thought that someday he would kill this Aunt Wang's rooster. Quite soon, Zhang Xiaoduo walked out of the bedroom. She was surprised to find a pleasant odor spreading through the apartment. Placing a couple of chopsticks and another plate on the table, the protagonist turned to his wife. She said it was longevity noodles and he had made it to celebrate her birthday yesterday. He said to eat the egg first. He went on to say that he borrowed it from Aunt Wang, but she doesn't know about it. The woman was extremely surprised at such a bad act on the part of the protagonist and asked how he could steal. Zhou Wufeng said that he really just borrowed it and promised that he would return it. Here he placed a stack of bills on the table. The woman was surprised at such a huge amount of money. Zhang Xiaoduo, thinking about how Zhou Wufeng dared to steal the egg, asked where he got so much money from, and if he stole it too. Waving the bills, Zhou Wufeng said not to worry because it was compensation for mom and dad. However, the woman did not believe this explanation. Zhang Xiaoduo started asking, didn't the factory say it was his parents' mistake? She thought it was illogical that they compensated for it. Zhou Wufeng revealed that he got it from Huhan. He thinks he must have been afraid that Zhou Wufeng would cause a riot in the factory, so he gave the money instead. The woman was surprised by this action of the protagonist and asked what his plan was. Standing up from the table, Zhou Wufeng said that he will try to gather evidence. He thinks that Huhan can hide everything from him, and since Zhou Wufeng took the money, he must have let his guard down. The man said that with that money they wouldn't have to worry about food for a while. After the couple finished their food, Zhou Wufeng collected the plates. The woman looked at him in surprise. She remembered that her husband had never done this before and asked her if he was really Zhou Wufeng. Zhou Wufeng flinched at such a question. Coughing, Zhou Wufeng turned to the woman and asked what she was talking about since it was really him. Trying to change the subject, he started talking about money. He said that she would take 200 yuan and the man himself would take 100, also giving 100 yuan to Yuna. He also said that the remaining 100 would be exchanged for food and asked if that was okay. Zhang Xiaoduo agreed with this division. After that, Zhou Wufeng said that he would go look for Yuna. As soon as Zhou Wufeng came out of the house, he saw a woman feeding the birds. Aunt Wang asked if he had seen her eggs. Zhou Wufeng passed by her and said that yes, he had seen and borrowed one while she was away. Aunt Wang raised her head with displeasure on her face. She became furious and furiously asked how he could have borrowed it if she didn't agree, and if he didn't think he was being inconsiderate. As she spoke, Zhou Wufeng immediately took out a single bill. With a calm face, he held it out to the woman and said, "Here are the 2 yuan he will pay for the eggs." At the same moment, a woman with a happy face told me not to hesitate to take it next time. The man continued on his way to the children. However, behind one of the pillars stood Nike Liu. The man was holding some grass in his mouth, and he asked where Zhou Wufeng was going. Zhou Wufeng said hello to his buddy. With grass sticking out of his mouth, the man said that there would be a gambling match with Chen Chura tonight. He said that they could team up and win his money. Zhou Wufeng averted his eyes, trying to remember the identity of that Chen Chura. He remembered that his father was the former head of the Linshui steel factory, and was currently working there. Continuing his conversation, Nike said he would come to his place tonight and asked if Zhang Xiaoduo would be with them. After averting his eyes, Zhou Wufeng thought that he would really need to meet with Guoda, however. He decided to do things his own way. Waving his hand, he said he would go to Nike's house instead while he was out. While Zhou Wufeng was pacing, Nike Liu thought that Zhou Wufeng was a real coward. And sighing, he thought about how he had managed to marry such a beautiful woman. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng approached Yuna and little Jen's house. Pushing the door open, he realized it wasn't locked. Zhou Wufeng was extremely surprised by this and even asked aloud. There he saw a child, little Jen. Turning around to his sister, little Zheng said, "His big brother is here." Zhou Wufeng finally went inside the house after all. At the child's voice, Chou Yuyue came out and asked him what was wrong. Little Zheng pointed at the protagonist with a joyful expression and said that big brother had come. The girl, however, was far from pleased at this arrival. The protagonist went into the kitchen and told her to rest because he would do everything himself. Chou Yuyue was very surprised at the guy's behavior. Just then, Zhou Wufeng began to knead the dough. Chou Yuyue watched his movements and was surprised at the protagonist's diligence. Suddenly the door opened and someone walked into the house. It was Yuna. She asked with a happy expression if Chou Yuyue had cooked the noodles. However, it wasn't the girl who answered her, but Zhou Wufeng. He said that he was working on it, and it would be ready soon. The girl clearly didn't expect the guy to come and, pointing at him, asked what he was forgetting there. Meanwhile, the noodles were already coming into readiness, and Zhou Wufeng turned towards the source of the smell. Taking his hands of the dough, Zhou Wufeng said that he had started cooking here and they would talk a little later. After cooking the noodles, Zhou Wufeng used almost all of the flour. This was very quickly noticed by a schoolgirl, and with a disgruntled look on her face, she asked why he did that. However, Zhou Wufeng said with a smile on his face that everything was fine now because their family now had money. However, the girl didn't believe the guy and asked where he could get it from. With a furious expression on her face, she asked, what could Zhou Wufeng do besides changing houses, selling things, playing cards, and beating his wife? Zhou Wufeng had not expected such fury from his relatives. He lowered his hand to his pocket, pulling out something. Taking them out of his pocket, a wad of bills, and he told his sister to look at them. The girl was surprised that the guy wasn't lying. Zhou Wufeng said that they would take it. He also said that since it was important for them to pass the exams, they should eat more healthy food, and he wouldn't deny himself anything. However, the girl was unpleasantly surprised by such money because she thought her brother was going to lose it. She, as Zhou Wufeng, tried to calm her down and said that they should talk about it after dinner. He also said there that he had roasted some meat that he hadn't eaten in so long. Finally, the whole family gathered for a family dinner. The man started talking about where he got the money from. However, the whole family was unpleasantly surprised by the fact that he had taken them from their parents' murderer. After dinner, the family decided to get together and talk about what was going on. Zhou Wufeng started to say that he believes that their parents could not have died due to their carelessness, and he is sure that it was Huhan. Zhou Wufeng is certain that he knew he had purchased faulty equipment. However, Yuna didn't see how this would help avenge their parents. Zhou Wufeng that this was why this old dog was involved in the death of their parents, because he didn't want to check the equipment. Zhou Wufeng said that he would gather evidence first. Yuna asked what he meant. Zhou Wufeng explains that they need documents to buy the equipment. He says he'll find them when he contacts the seller, and then Huhan won't be able to escape. With fury, Zhou Wufeng says that the boys won't have to worry about all of this. He will handle it himself and prove their parents' innocence. Both Cho Yuyue and Yuna are extremely surprised by this attitude of the protagonist, so they looked at him in a stupor. Zhou Wufeng averted his eyes and gave little Zheng some change for candy. He wished Yuna good luck in her exams and told her not to worry about tuition fees, because he would take care of everything. Walking down the street, Zhou Wufeng heard about someone selling ice cream. Walking up to the shop, Zhou Wufeng said that he would buy one. The salesman took a popsicle. Giving it to the protagonist, he quoted a price of 2 fin. Zhou Wufeng took a bite and immersed himself in memories. Looking at the bench, Zhou Wufeng said that what they say is true. Every era has its own characteristics. That someone clapped the protagonist on the shoulder. Zhou Wufeng turned around to the source of the sound. There was a group of people standing there, namely 6 people. One of the girls waved at him in a friendly manner. Mentally, Zhou Wufeng scanned who approached him. Among the 6 people, he identified Fu Dahai and Zhang Zijui. The protagonist got flustered and waved back, saying they hadn't seen each other in a while. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng realized that one of the girls was Shen Zijian, and she was Zhang Xiaodo's best friend. Looking at the girl, he noticed that she was decently dressed, thinking that it was usually the richest in any group who dressed well. Suddenly, one of the men pointed at the protagonist and angrily asked why he was staring at the guys. However, another buddy in the group asked why he started up since everything was fine. However, he was unable to stop his comrade's fierce fervor. He started shouting that Zhou Wufeng was acting tough when Shen Zijian was around, and he still did not know how Zhang Xiaoduo had fallen in love with him. One of the girls giggled and said that maybe Zhang Xiaoduo likes bullies. Zhou Wufeng took the ice cream again. He swallowed it whole and whole, suddenly started waving his hands and said Xiao Shan misunderstood everything. He said that how could he act like a bully in front of his wife's friends? After the man spoke out, they tried to calm him down. The girl watched the situation with a calm face. She turned her head to the guy and said that everything was fine and they were just in the same class. She also told them to go now. After the group left, Zhou Wufeng continued to stare at their backs. Squinting his eyes, Zhou Wufeng thought that his carefree life would not last long. After Zhou Wufeng had purchased everything he needed, he would return home with 2 bags in his hands. He walked past one building and turned a corner. Zhang Xiaoduo was there. The girl clearly didn't expect a guy to come. She began wiping the remnants of her food off of herself, as if afraid he would notice. Zhou Wufeng asked if she had eaten ice cream. Zhang Xiaoduo didn't know what to say to him and only stammered. She began to explain that she hadn't had ice cream in a long time and decided to try it. She also said that she had bought him a watermelon. Zhou Wufeng smiled softly as he looked at Zhang Xiaoduo. He lifted his hand and began stroking her head. He said that they had enough money to buy whatever they wanted, and there would be even more in the future. Zhang Xiaoduo blushed and agreed with the man's words. And Zhou Wufeng offered his help. He offered to carry the watermelon because he thought she was tired. The woman denied it. Taking the girl's load, he said it was fine, and he would deliver. The woman was extremely surprised by such an act on the part of the man. She blushed and called his name. Closing her eyes, she sank into reminiscing. There's Zhou Wufeng, 2 healthy thermoses. Apparently the man decided to carry the thermos for the girl as well, while she was walking nearby and talking to the man. Turning around, Zhou Wufeng looked at his wife. He asked her why she was in the clouds and if it was time for them to go home. The woman snapped out of her stupor and opened her eyes wide. She ran up to the man and said she was on her way. So it was like they were coming home again. Suddenly there is a loud scream in the middle of the street. Someone is cursing the man to die in the street. Someone knocked insistently on the door. Suddenly opened and a man came flying out of the house. Zhou Wufeng asked Nika what really happened. The man patted the boy's shoulder and said that they should step back first. The man started to say that he had lost some money in the morning, but his wife, whom he called very insultingly, was already buzzing his ears. The man was indignant that she didn't realize that people win and lose in casinos. That man approached the protagonist and asked if he knew the principal's son. He hugged the protagonist and started saying that he was very rich, and therefore it would be easy to get him hooked on casinos. The man already started dreaming about what would happen if they teamed up. However, Zhou Wufeng shook off his hand and asked how much money he had brought. The man said he hadn't received his wife's paycheck yet and asked to borrow some money. He said he would pay her back when he got even. Zhou Wufeng scratched the back of his head and said that Nika owed 3 more yuan. He also said that he only had 1 yuan with him today. The man yelled at the protagonist and asked if that was really the case. However, Zhou Wufeng also looked at the guy strangely, for he didn't have any money either. The man had nothing to say. Zhou Wufeng had already started to ask if he should do it next time. However, the man grabbed the protagonist by the arm and said that since they were already packed, he would lend some. Unexpectedly, Nika lifted his foot and started digging into his shoe. Zhou Wufeng looked at him in bewilderment. However, it wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng opened his eyes in surprise. The man from the soul took out a few bills. It wasn't long before the company approached another house. They were met on the doorstep by another man walking with his dog. He asked if it was really Niki. Nichai said that Zhou Wufeng had also come. A man, apparently the owner of the house, asked them to pass. Nika suddenly asked the man where he had brought them to. After all, they only wanted to play. Smoking a cigarette, Brother Chen said that he had been carrying fruit for Grandpa all day today and would have to do it again tomorrow, so they could only play here. Nikai smiled and asked the man what his new game was and asked him to teach them. Chen told everyone to sit down, he's about to teach them everything. After picking up a card, the man began to explain that a standard deck of cards is used. 3 cards are placed face up on the table, and the rest are dealt equally to the 3 players. The first player to bet is the player who first received the card when it was dealt. The man continued that the highest bidder takes the cards from the table and becomes the landowner. Showing the cards, man says this is a really good game. He says the remaining 2 become peasants playing against the landowner. The man says that both peasants win if at least one of them wins. Chen continues that the combinations are simple as usual, along the lines of a pair of 3s, a pair of 4s, and so on. Holding his head with his hand, Zhou Wufeng realizes that it is Du Diju. Chen shuffles the cards and says they're about to start, and he's the landowner. And that we could hear shouts of joy. Someone shouting that he had won. Chen looks at his cards. He has a pair of 7s and a 10. The man throws the cards on the table and says he has a pair of 7s. Nisai smilingly looks at his opponent. Chen says he has 2, still smoking his cigarette. He is clearly confident of his victory. Zhou Wufeng thoughtfully says that he has a pair of 8s. Nisai takes another look at his cards and says he passes. Chen happily throws his pair of 10s. He apologizes to the guys and says he's won one more time while Zhou Wufeng goes over the cards. Chen looked at what kind of deck he had. Smiling, he says he has a pair of 6s and 2 combinations again. Zhou Wufeng thoughtfully throws a pair of kings on the table. Then suddenly Nisai says it's his turn and furiously throws his 2 cards. It turns out to be a pair of aces, the highest suit. However, Zhou Wufeng looks at him with bewilderment. The guy belatedly remembers that he is supposed to go for the landowner, not the protagonist. Chen passes and says the guys are cool, lighting a cigarette. Nikai, looking into his deck, says that he has nothing else to go around and can only throw senior cards. Chen happily picks up on his opponent's idea and shows a jack. Chen asks the protagonist if he passes. After agreeing, Chen says that he has won again. Nietzsche gives Cheng a thumbs up and praises him for playing well. Zhou Wufeng squints his eyes as he looks at the 2 of them. The guy looked into his deck. There was a rack of 2s. Zhou Wufeng scratched the back of his head and said that he had bullshit again, not cards. His 2 opponents looked up and laid out their cards. Nika took another look at his cards and asked if it was his move, then said he had a bomb of 6s. That's when Zhou Wufeng pulls out his rack of 2s. The protagonist pompously threw his cards down on the table. At the same time, Niki opened his eyes in surprise, because he didn't expect such a combination. Clearly agitated, Chen said that he was passing. Zhou Wufeng was starting to get excited about his winnings. He had 3 bombs and a black joker. Then Zhou Wufeng looked at Nikai and asked where his money was. However, the boys didn't end there. Someone posted a pair of 2s again. Chen yells for more throws when the other 2 pass. Showing a deuce, Chen winced once again. He exhaled the smoke left from the cigarette. Nietzsche was already angry, throwing the cards on the table. I guess he had no luck at all. Zhou Wufeng says that he owes the protagonist almost 100 yuan already, to which the protagonist angrily says that a couple more games and he'll break even. Shuffling the cards, Zhou Wufeng says that Nisai has nothing at all to bet, and asked if he had stashed any more money in his socks. The man completely freaks out and says not to talk to him like he's cheap since they're not done yet. After Zhou Wufeng shuffled the cards, he throws them onto the table with fury. Approaching the man, Zhou Wufeng says that how he wants to talk to him. He starts to say rudely that if he wants to play, let him get the money, and if he has no money, let him go home. However, he moved even closer and began to speak a threat. With an angry look on his face, he said that if he touched his wife again, he would bury him alive. Turning around to Cheng standing in a stupor, Zhou Wufeng clearly softened his face and thanked him for playing. He also said that they should probably stop here. He said that he had won quite a bit, so he would treat tomorrow at his expense. Chen only stood silently by the side smoking a cigarette. The protagonist was already walking home at dawn. He thinks that Chen Goda's father is a former factory director and has quite a few connections, meaning he will definitely be able to help the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng finally made it home after all. The man straight up spat on the bed from exhaustion, unable to do anything else. However, Zhou Wufeng turned around at the shout. He listened with bags under his eyes as someone accused them of losing all the money and how they would survive. Hearing a groan, the protagonist sighed and went back to sleep. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng found himself in the Wuet Chaikana. He went to the table and asked the boss for a cup of tea. He was quoted a price of 5 fines. After Zhou Wufeng paid, he was poured some fragrant tea. Suddenly, he turns around at an unexpected voice. Someone asks how Wu Liu's son is doing. It was a conversation between two men. One of them said that he had just picked up and quit when the other had absolutely no idea what was on his mind. Zhou Wufeng took a sip of tea, thinking about how the 80s were difficult. However, he also recalled that many millionaires started their businesses around this time. Zhou Wufeng turned around and looked at the views from the window. Zhou Wufeng thought that if he went back to the 2020th year, he would be very foolish to miss a great opportunity. Zhou Wufeng still remained in the Wu Weiqian tea house, immersed in his thoughts. The boy clutched his head and wondered if his thoughts were right. He has a hard-earned career that he doesn't want to give up. Opening his eyes, the protagonist made a decision for himself. Looking up, Zhou Wufeng thought that once he dealt with Huhan, he would go back to where he came from. Pretty soon the rumble from the motorcycle engine could be heard from the street side as well. Watching Chen park, Zhou Wufeng thought that he had finally arrived. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng came out of the tea house and called out to the man. The man turned around at the source of the sound and asked if it was really Zhou Wufeng. The main characters only said what a coincidence it was as Chen scratched the back of his head and said that he had just finished helping his grandfather and was very tired. Zhou Wufeng started to say that he was very timely because they should have lunch together and that it was a small compensation for yesterday. Chen spread his hands and said that it was just nothing. Zhou Wufeng said no, it was not nothing, and invited him to the restaurant. After the guys sat down at the table, a waitress came over and asked them what they wanted. Zhou Wufeng asked for a menu. Looking at the prices on the menu, Zhou Wufeng was very surprised. Everything was very expensive. Mao Tai vodka cost 7 yuan, fish stew almost 3, when ginseng chicken cost 4.5 yuan. After the order came, Chen turned to the protagonist and asked that it was indeed very polite of him. But wasn't it too expensive? Zhou Wufeng patted the protagonist on the shoulder and poured him a drink and said it was fine. He says that he was lucky to have lunch with him so he can enjoy himself. Unexpectedly, the same group of friends of the protagonist's wife also entered this restaurant. They noticed that Zhou Wufeng was eating there too. One of them pointed at the protagonist and asked if he had come here to waste money. Zhou Wufeng calmly chewed his food without paying attention to such provocations. The same man started shouting as he didn't hear the main character's answer. He called him a freak and asked what he thought Zhang Xiaoduo was eating. "You're the one girl said she lost her appetite and told the guys they'd eat somewhere else." Our new one had to be calmed down, and the whole group headed for the exit. Chen, listening to the conversation between the protagonist, asked about the protagonist's relationship with Huhan's son. Zhou Wufeng replied that they used to be in the same class and often quarreled. The man lit himself a cigarette and only said he understood. Changing the subject, Chen said that Zhou Wufeng gave in to him yesterday and asked if he really thought he wouldn't notice. Zhou Wufeng apologized for the counter-question, but he also asked what his relationship with Huhan was. Nu also said that when he asked this earlier, he seemed displeased. The company continued their conversation in the restaurant. Chen said that he would tell you about it, and he began to talk about how when the director of the factory was chosen, he gave his vote to Xu Changjiang, which was the reason why Chen himself did not become the director. He said that he was only one vote short. Remembering the events that had happened, Chen only became more annoyed. He began to say that his father had been the director before him until he retired. Slamming the table, he started calling Huhan a traitor. Zhou Wufeng, seeing his comrade's tense mood, approached him and tried to calm him down by pouring wine. Zhou Wufeng began to calmly ask who Xu Changjiang was and if he was the son of the director of Linshui Steel Factory. Chen drank all the wine in a gulp. After he took the glass away from his mouth, he said it wasn't true, as he was just a guy on good terms with a foreign supplier. Zhou Wufeng began to say that there was no point in him working hard in this factory if he could go to the sea. Chen said he thought so too, but his father was against it. Chen put his finger up and decided to tell the protagonist something. He said that a friend of his made electrical appliances to Shanghai last year and made over 100,000. Immediately afterwards, he said that it was dollars, not yuan, and that his friend had become a millionaire. He rhetorically asked when he would run out of money. Zhou Wufeng raised a finger up and said that it was really cool. The man also said that the factory would soon be paying a fee for heat stroke prevention, and there's a considerable amount of money there isn't there. Chen agreed and asked what it affected. Zhou Wufeng asked if he would be paid money if he supplied the food collected by his family. However, the man immediately threw up his hands at such an offer. Chen said that if he did that, he would get in trouble. Grandpa would find out about it. However, Zhou Wufeng immediately clapped himself on his chest and said that this was the moment he was entering the conversation, because his grandfather would become the grandfather of the protagonist. However, the man did not understand such an idiom and asked what Zhou Wufeng meant. Zhou Wufeng began to explain that he would be the middleman delivering the fruit, and the man should just use his name. Chen clapped the protagonist on the shoulder and thought about how he hadn't even thought of it. He also called the protagonist a genius. After the company left the restaurant, Zhou Wufeng offered to escort the man home. Chen was surprised because he didn't know that Zhou Wufeng could drive a motorcycle. Zhou Wufeng said it wasn't that hard. After both of them got behind the wheel, Chen said that Zhou Wufeng was a pretty good driver. Zhou Wufeng thanked him for the compliment. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng found himself at home. Opening the door, Zhou Wufeng thought that Zhang Xiaoduo must be asleep by now, and after all, it was already late. However, after looking around, Zhou Wufeng realized that she was awake and was humbly waiting for him. When Zhou Wufeng came home, it was already late at night. He approached wife and asked why she was still awake. The woman was silent. The protagonist started scratching the back of his head, and he apologized for coming back so late. The woman turned away, immersed in her own thoughts. She recalled her friend asking who was more important to her family or her unhappy husband. The woman talked about how her aunt had been hospitalized and was still in a coma when the woman visited her. The aunt mumbled about her all the time. Zhang Xiaoduo lowered her eyebrows and said that he was so reformed, but she didn't have time to say it. A friend said she'd rather have cancer on a mountain of pigs than moral freaks get better, and also asked her what else she expects from a player who only knows how to beat up women on a daily basis. Zhou Wufeng walked over to his wife and asked if everything was all right, if there was any problem. Suddenly, the woman began to cry. She rose from her chair, barely shuffling her feet. She immediately embraced the protagonist. She blushed, after which said he could do whatever he wanted to her today. She pressed her whole body against the protagonist, expecting something from him. Zhou Wufeng blushed heavily and darted his eyes at his wife's actions. Pretty soon it was past midnight. Zhou Wufeng was lying on the sofa thinking about something. He remembered what he had done at that moment. The man called her name. He put his arm around the woman's shoulders, putting distance between them. He said he wasn't feeling well today and would go for a walk, and told her to go to bed without him. After that, the main character came to the bathroom and opened the faucet. In his mind, they say that he needs to calm down. He put his head under the running water, trying to regain consciousness. The man only thought about the fact that he was going to come back, and that it was not worth it to do what was not asked. Soon the morning came. Auntie Wang's rooster again announced the dawn. Zhang Xiaoduo walked out of the house, immersed in her thoughts. She turned around and looked at the front door. She remembered her husband saying he would go. Turning around, she kept mentally remembering his name. Walking away, she only thought about the fact that if he had changed a little earlier, she wouldn't have had to wait. A telephone exchange came into view. Someone was dialing a phone number. It turns out that it was Zhang Xiaoduo who decided to call her father. Her dad got very excited when he found out that it was her who called and asked what was wrong. He also said that he was always willing to help. With sadness in her voice, Zhang Xiaoduo said that it was fine, she just misses her a lot. The man in a serious voice told her not to go anywhere and to wait for him. He would bring her home soon. At the same time, the fruit in the garden was ripe. It was Zhou Wufeng and Chen who were talking to each other. Chen said that he told his father about the plan, and surprisingly the latter did not resent it, and even agreed. Zhou Wufeng was surprised at such an event. The man also said that Chen was lucky to have such connections. Satisfied, Chen said that if things went well, he would pay him 100 yuan. Zhou Wufeng folded his hands and told him not to worry because everything would go fine. Very soon, Zhou Wufeng was already home. Auntie said that Zhou Wufeng had returned and his relatives had come to see him. Zhou Wufeng interrogated which relatives were being talked about. Squinting his eyes, Zhou Wufeng thought that these were his wife's relatives. Opening the door, Zhou Wufeng watched the scene unfold. The wife's family, her father and mother were gathered there, as was Zhang Xiaoduo herself. Zhou Wufeng was happy to see them and asked when they had time to arrive, because if they had given him a warning, he would have prepared for their arrival. The father, with an expressionless look on his face, looked at the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng walked up to them and asked if they were hungry since he could cook something. Abruptly, however, the father swung around. A man slapped the main character with all his might, said it was for his daughter. He started yelling at the guy and told him to see what he did to his daughter. Zhang Xiaoduo called out to her father. Zhou Wufeng had nothing to say, so he only remained silent. Soon, her father swung once more and said that it was for him. Zhang Xiaoduo tried to stop her father, saying that she shouldn't do that. The screams of the protagonist's wife caused the father to stop. A woman approached the protagonist, asking if he was okay. In the same way, Zhou Wufeng understood why he was slapped. He said that his father did everything right and he was a disappointment to her in the past. Immediately after that, he apologized to her. Zhang Xiaoduo did not expect such a development. Immediately afterward, his father shouted that he had stopped talking Zhang Xiaoduo up, and they should divorce immediately. The conversation still hadn't ended and Zhou Wufeng and his company were still standing outside the house. Both Zhou Wufeng and Zhang Xiaoduo were silent as they looked at each other. Zhang Xiaoduo's mother, trembling, begged the protagonist to spare her daughter. The woman began to cry, unable to hold back her tears. Her husband tried to calm the woman down. Despite the unfolding in front of him, Zhou Wufeng asked his wife what she thought about it. She averted her eyes and hesitated. It wasn't long before she turned her back on the protagonist. Stepping back a little further, Zhang Xiaoduo called out the name of the main character. With a grim expression on her face, she said they should get a divorce. The couple then went up to the registry office to write divorce papers. The assistant told the protagonist and the woman that now he would set the seal, everything would be done, as if warning that there would be no turning back. Both only nodded their heads at this, waiting for the end. The man has already started saying that he doesn't understand the younger generation. He then stamped us a certificate of dissolution of marriage between the protagonist and the woman. By sundown, everything was ready. After that, the company walked out of the registry office. Zhou Wufeng was walking by himself when Zhang Xiaoduo went home with her parents. When they were about to leave, Zhang Xiaoduo told her parents that they needed to talk to the protagonist alone. The woman held out the money to the protagonist. She said that this was the money he gave her, and that there were 285 yuan. However, Zhou Wufeng did not take the money and only gestured for her to take it for herself. Zhou Wufeng told her to keep them because he owed her too much. The man said he was ashamed to take anything from her. Zhou Wufeng was about to leave already, and he abruptly asked the woman that if she suddenly returned to her old way of life, that she cut all ties with him. The women queried the meaning of such a request from the protagonist. She, as Zhou Wufeng, didn't want to explain anything anymore, and only said that the woman had understood him correctly. He also said that her parents were already waiting for her, and there was worth going already. The woman was still trying to find out the meaning of the sentence. Very soon Zhou Wufeng told her to take care of herself and left. Afterward, the woman cried lonely tears. The girl's tear briefly left the girl's cheek before it fell to the pavement. Letting go of his wife, Zhou Wufeng once again found himself on the street. Chen ran to him shouting that they had succeeded. Zhou Wufeng was quietly eating ice cream at the time. Running up to the main character, the man said the factory had sent a notice that the fat warning fee would be replaced by fruit. With joy on his face, the man said that they had promised 1,500 yuan for each installment. Clenching his fists, Chen said that he hoped for further cooperation and he would personally pay extra when everything was perfect. Zhou Wufeng thanked the man but said that they hadn't bought the packages yet. Riding a motorcycle, Zhou Wufeng talked to Chen. The man said that the nearest plastic factory was in Lujing. Zhou Wufeng asked a counter-question if he knew anyone there since the plastic factory they would be dealing with is a small business. Chen was very surprised at the protagonist's question because he thought that the protagonist had connections there. Zhou Wufeng said that he had no one there and would have to think of something. Chen at that moment was not really scared because he said that they would be exposed if they did not get the packages. It wasn't long before the group arrived at the plant. Zhou Wufeng reported the matter to his comrade. Chen asked what way will they enter. Zhou Wufeng that they would stop by right away. However, they were stopped by a guard and asked who they were. It wasn't long before the protagonist stopped the motorcycle. The protagonist told the guard to call his boss because they have a serious case. Hotline is always unavailable. The guard asked if they were looking for Mr. Li. Zhou Wufeng asked which office. The guard replied that they were on the 3rd floor, the first room to the left of the stairs. Zhou Wufeng thanked the guard. Chen was still worried because they got in, but Zhou Wufeng does not know the director. Zhou Wufeng said that the man would have to be quiet for this. Pretty soon the comrades were outside Mr. Li's office. Hearing a knock on the door and the supervisor, Li said to come in. After that, Zhou Wufeng and a man entered the office. Mr. Li asked who they were. Zhou Wufeng smiled affably and said that he was the director of Guoda Fruits and that he was happy to see him. Mr. Li asked how the company got here. Zhou Wufeng said they alerted the guards. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng said that to be honest, they were passing by. They were on their way to Zhehai to buy a batch of plastic bags. Zhou Wufeng said that he had heard that this factory also had pretty good bags. The man said they were in the fruit transportation business. Mr. Li pondered the words about exporting. Sipping his tea, Mr. Li waved his hand and said that they definitely wouldn't fit their bags. There was a plaque nailed in the office about dignity and honesty. Taking out his cigarettes, Zhou Wufeng wondered how they wouldn't fit. Zhou Wufeng said that he went to Ligshui to buy fruit, but they had run out of packs. Immediately after that, he held out cigarettes to Mr. Li. Lighting a cigarette, Zhou Wufeng said, the thing is that they did not calculate the cost of transportation, so they came to them. The supervisor said that he understood everything. After that, Zhou Wufeng spread his hands and said that quality assurance is their priority after all. They are a big company after all. Mr. didn't start out asking public or private enterprise from the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng, on the other hand, changed the subject and asked if Mr. Lee would like a mug. Mr. Lee seemed to come to his senses, looking at the box of tea in his cupboard. He kept talking about how he'd forgotten to pour tea for them. Approaching the main character with a teapot and brewed leaves, the man said that this tea was store-bought, and he hopes they don't mind. After that, Zhou Wufeng cut to the chase. He said that their company was dealing with a big order and asked if they could make a ton of bags in half a month. Making tea, Mr. Lee interrogated if it was really a ton, but that Zhou Wufeng replied, agree. After thinking about it, the supervisor said that if they were to work overtime, they should be able to keep up. Zhou Wufeng was satisfied with this answer and said that he would like to see the quality inspection packages. After that, the supervisor brought the company to the warehouse. He pointed out the instances of plastic bags, and they could inspect to check the quality. Zhou Wufeng shook hands with the boss and said that they would send their man tomorrow to report the results of the inspection to them. Mr. Elevator asked if they were leaving already, because they could go to restaurants to discuss something. However, Zhou Wufeng said that they had business to attend to, and perhaps they would do it next time, saying goodbye to the man. Waving the man goodbye, Zhou Wufeng said that they would see each other next time. After the company left the building, Chen started praising the protagonist. After all, they haven't even spent even a fun and already have bags. Turning to the man, Zhou Wufeng told him to call Director Lee tomorrow and tell him that the packages did not pass the quality inspection, so the transaction will not take place. After the company returned home, Chen shouted happily that you could drag a cow away in those bags. Walking up to the man, Zhou Wufeng told him to stop suffering nonsense. Crossing his arms, Zhou Wufeng asked if the man had promised to take him to a restaurant in the city. Chen was surprised that the protagonist still remembered that, and said that he just hadn't tasted his grandfather's rice. Zhou Wufeng hesitated and averted his eyes. He realized that his plans were missing something, and he needed Nisai. Zhou Wufeng approached Chen and said that they should ask Liu Niki for help. After listening to the man, Chen was surprised at such a suggestion, and said that he had cheated the last time they played. Zhou Wufeng told him not to worry so much and just call after all. They live near each other but rarely see each other. It wasn't long before the company arrived at the town's hotel restaurant. Chen and Zhou Wufeng only silently watched Nika as he ate the entire table at an extreme speed, being extremely hungry. After dinner, Zhou Wufeng said goodbye to Chen and said that they would see each other next time. Ni smiled at the protagonist and asked what they were up to with Godu. Zhou Wufeng replied that they were doing nothing. However, Nika did not believe the protagonist told him not to lie, because he heard that he wanted to pull him into some kind of deal. Clapping himself on the chest, the man said he was ready. Zhou Wufeng scratched in the back of his head and thought about whether or not he was telling him. Nisi spread her hands and said that they have known each other for 100 years, unlike Chen. Resolved, the protagonist told me how it was. Nisai was surprised at the offer, after all. They were giving 200 yuan for some fruit delivery tomorrow. As if caring for the protagonist, the man said that he wanted to remind him that the last time they played he had forced him to cheat, and told the guy not to let himself be fooled. Zhou Wufeng averted his eyes and only laughed to himself. Zhou Wufeng wryly thanked the man for reminding him that he was so stupid and how he only managed to fool him. Right after that, Zhou Wufeng said that he would give the man 50 yuan if he went with them. But this time, Nisai didn't refuse such a generous offer. After that, the man invited the protagonist to hang out for a while. Zhou Wufeng agreed to the proposal. Upon entering the house, Zhou Wufeng asked if he had bought it or only rented it, and the man brought on a major cup of alcohol. Fiddling with the cup in general, she said that of course he rents all the money, he has no money. Zhou Wufeng asked how come he is the only locksmith in the area, he has no competition, and there is a big demand. Nika turned to the protagonist and asked him what he was talking about, since he had long since quit. The man said he'd been caught opening a lock when the neighbors didn't know what he was doing. After that, Zhou Wufeng's eyes lit up and asked the man to teach him how to do so. The man began to explain. He showed the protagonist a hook and said that they usually use one of these to open doors. Leaning against the door, Nika told the protagonist to look carefully, or he wouldn't see anything. After fiddling with the lock, the man tried to open it. It was not long before he succeeded. The lock opened with a distinctive sound. Zhou Wufeng began to praise Nikai and asked him to teach him to do the same. Waving his finger, the man said he didn't want to set him up since it wasn't exactly legal. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng said that he would give the man 100 after the fruit transaction. Then already Nikai's own eyes lit up, and he joyfully taught the protagonist this skill. It wasn't long before the team found themselves at the Linshui steel mill. Zhou Wufeng said hello to Chen, who arrived on a motorcycle. Chen asked what Nikai was doing here, to which Zhou Wufeng said that he had come to help. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng and company decided to get down to business. Rolling up his sleeves, Zhou Wufeng thought that he couldn't afford to do this too soon, because the relationship between Huhan and Shu Changjiang wasn't the easiest. Squinting, the protagonist thought there was some machinations going on behind their backs between vendors. Quite soon, Zhou Wufeng approached the company. Chen was perplexed and asked what the protagonist was wearing. Zhou Wufeng asked if it is not obvious that he is a farmer. A hat is his headgear. Showing his buddy a thumbs up, Chen praised the protagonist for his foresight. She said that the fruit was in the warehouse and the rest was up to him. Pretty soon it was well over 12 o'clock in the afternoon. There were employees in the cafeteria. Apparently it was lunchtime. Zhou Wufeng thought that the workers usually had lunch at the cafe at this time, allowing them to gain strength. He also said that it was worth leaving everything here. It wasn't long before the company was almost done carrying the fruit. Suddenly, Zhou Wufeng cried out in pain. Nika asked the protagonist what's wrong with him. Zhou Wufeng, grabbing his stomach, said that something was making his stomach twist. Right after that, the main character ran out and said he had to go out. He trusted Nika to finish the job and said he would be back soon. Zhou Wufeng thought that he should hurry while everyone was still in the cafe. Rounding the corner, he found himself outside Huhan's office. Yanking the handle, Zhou Wufeng realized that the doors were closed. Zhou Wufeng called the man a parasite because he closes his office door for lunch. With a grin, Zhou Wufeng thanked past himself for being so well prepared. Breaking open the door, Zhou Wufeng yanked on the handle. The door appeared to be open. Zhou Wufeng looked around. Going through the books, the protagonist tried to find something worthwhile. Pretty soon he found the sales contracts. However, he was extremely surprised that there was no stamp on the contract and thought of a signed contract. Thought about how the books on the shelf were really good. However, it wasn't long before he had doubts whether Huhan would actually read them. Zhou Wufeng and company were still in the factory. Zhou Wufeng decided to pick up the book on the shelf. However, the guy didn't expect the book to be so heavy. With a rumbling sound, Zhou Wufeng lowered the book and it fell to the floor. Turning around, Zhou Wufeng wondered if this book was really a book after all. Why did it hear a sound like it had shattered? Opening the book, the protagonist saw a stack of papers. The protagonist looked around once more. Turning around, Zhou Wufeng realized that it wasn't a book but a box. He started rummaging through the papers, thinking there might be something important in there. It wasn't long before he got the equipment delivery document. The squint in Zhou Wufeng's eyes realized that this was exactly what he was looking for, and soon Huhan would be finished. After removing the evidence and locking the door, Zhou Wufeng returned to his company. Nika asked where Zhou Wufeng was if he had fallen into a push. He also said that he was almost done with everything. Zhou Wufeng gave 100 to Nikai. He didn't expect the guy to actually do it. Bowing to the protagonist, Niki thanked the protagonist and said that he would take care of everything. Here in the building, the protagonist looked at the documents again. As it turned out, it was a document with an official seal for a value of 2.5 million yuan. Zhou Wufeng thought it was suicide, not proof. At the same time, a group of friends passed by Ziyu's side. They greeted the girl, and just as affably the girl greeted them. Some other girl greeted Ziyu as the man complimented her. The girl turned around, looking at unexpected face. Ziyu asked what he was doing here. The group turned to the main character and started laughing that he was walking around. The man began by saying that divorcees are lucky. They have so much free time that they can finally give to themselves. One girl sympathized with Zhang Xiaoduo. She thought that it would not be easy for a divorced woman to remarry. At the same time, the man said that it was only a matter of time. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng approached Ziyu. The man was angry at the guy being ignored. He grabbed his arm and shouted his name furiously. He started shaming the guy in front of his friends for his clothes. Zhou Wufeng turned around and looked at the cocky man who grabbed his arm. He grabbed the man by the throat and told him not to be rude to him. With a sharp movement, Zhou Wufeng twisted the man. He started screaming that he was in great pain because his arm had been twisted. Soon a group of friends started defending him and told the protagonist to let the guy go. With a sharp movement, Zhou Wufeng told the guy to go and let him go. However, because of this move, the guy cheered the girl along with him. With a violent rumble, they both ended up on the pavement. Zhou Wufeng cracked his knuckles and said that if he didn't mind saying nonsense in the back, then let him try to say it to his face. At the time, the man was lying in front of the protagonist. However, the man didn't like the guy's tone, and the man barely stood up to ask what he had just said. Zhou Wufeng crossed his brows and said that if you speak at him, you are translating to yourself. With fury, the man replied why he was always lashing out and why he was making a fool of himself as soon as he got the money out of his father. Zhou Wufeng spread his hands and said that that father had until Monday to live. The man was extremely angry and said that he was fed up with Zhou Wufeng and was ready to fight with him. Zhou Wufeng walked up to the man closely and asked what he would do to him, and asked if his father had cheated on him. The man surprisingly interrogated what Zhou Wufeng was talking about. Suddenly, the boy remembered snippets of how his father had acted that month. He also recalled his father going to a hotel with an unknown woman, with a doomed look on his face as if he understood everything. The man only knelt down and began to say that it wasn't true. Turning his back to him, Zhou Wufeng said that he knew about it. It wasn't long before the protagonist left the company and approached Ziyu. He approached the girl with a request. He asked her to lend him the phone and he would pay her for it. Soon the couple was inside the house. There was a pleasant atmosphere. Approaching the phone, the woman asked the protagonist where to call and asked him to dictate the number. The protagonist started to say that he needed to call Xinyang Equipment Factory and asked for Qinbao Ma's number. Soon the woman said she answered and told him to pick up the phone. The person on the other side of the phone said that it was Xinyang Factory Equipment and that the protagonist was interested. Zhou Wufeng said to call Qinbao Ma to the phone. The voice nervously asked who was speaking. Zhou Wufeng said that it was the director of Linshui Factory. The employee asked if it was really so since he didn't recognize their number, and asked if it was a home phone. Zhou Wufeng said it was a new one, and he had important business. The staff member said it was fine, and asked him to tell him about the situation. Zhou Wufeng said that the goods Huhan purchased in April and May and June do not pass quality control. Zhou Wufeng said that from their low-quality equipment, there was a fatal incident in their factory. He shouted that they would be held responsible. The staff member abruptly stood up from the table and asked what it was that Zhou Wufeng was talking about. After all, Huhan had summoned him around that time and said that no further details were needed. Zhou Wufeng asked why their name was put in the responsible person column in the contract then. The man asked to get their manager on the phone. Zhou Wufeng said that their managers are now the reception room, so said to call him on their phone. Pretty soon there was the sound of the end of the conversation. At that time, the atmosphere in the principal's office was extremely calm. The director was quietly sipping his tea, not thinking about the problems. Suddenly he heard the phone ring. The director picked up the phone. The staff member began to quickly say that there were no contracts between them and Huhan. The principal told them to speak slowly and asked what happened. The employee began to say that their company did not sign any contracts with the plant company in April, May, and June. The director questioned whether Huhan had really not signed any contracts with them for 3 months. The staff member said that one of their employees called him and asked about them. The staff member said he mentioned that they would be taking charge and asked what was even going on while the principal's face contorted into a frightened grimace. The man asked what number they had gotten the call from. After the end of the conversation, the man thought that he had obviously received a call from someone other than their company. As he continued his thoughts, the man guessed that they had received a call from someone outside the company. That is, they already had evidence and knew something. The man recalled that they have the biggest sales in April, May, and June, and during this period they earned more than 3 million. Pensive, the director wondered if Huhan didn't sign the contract, it was what he was spending the company's money on. Suddenly, it hit him. Their company had had an accident where a married couple had died because of improper use of equipment. The man realized something was wrong. Immediately after that thought, the man ran over to his desk. Practically stumbling, he called his subordinate. He said to stop all the cars in Division 2, and also said not to say anything about it to Huhan. Immediately afterward, he dialed the number of the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng was leaning against the wall at the time, and talking about how everything would be soon. It wasn't long before the bell rang. Zhou Wufeng said with a smile that he was on his way. As expected, the director of the Linshui factory called the protagonist's phone. The director hurriedly introduced himself. However, Zhou Wufeng barely heard him finish saying that he had all the evidence on Huhan. The man tensed up and told the protagonist to continue. Zhou Wufeng said that Huhan made a contract with Xinyang Factory Equipment as a result of the deception to gain more than 3 million yuan. As the man's face turned almost purple, Zhou Wufeng said he later signed a contract with the Sikh company and purchased the same amount of spare parts. The man asked if he really had everything on him. Zhou Wufeng said yes. Immediately afterward, the man said that he would come to him immediately. Zhou Wufeng said he agreed, but warned that it would be better if the man went to the police on his own behalf because he did not want to be punished. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng hung up the phone. After that, the principal wondered who could be on the other side of the phone call, for he had a young voice, but he was very smart. Zhou Wufeng thought that if he were him, he would immediately go to the police and thought that he himself had done him a big favor. At the same time, the girl whose phone was borrowed stood in a stupor. She tried to analyze the main character's conversation. She realized that he had called the director of the Linshui factory and was talking about something important. At the same time, the principal came out of the building and said he needed an emergency car and asked a staff member to borrow it. Immediately afterward, the director went to see the protagonist. It wasn't long before the protagonist heard a knock on their room. He went over to open the door. As soon as Zhou Wufeng did that, the director asked if he was the person who called him. Right after that, the principal dug into his memories and realized that he was the son of the couple who died in that incident. Zhou Wufeng told the director to go through and provided him with evidence. The man looked over both contracts. He thought that on these contracts and this signature would be enough to prove his guilt. Immediately afterward, the man clapped the protagonist on the shoulder. Turning to the guy, the man asked his name and said he was a hero. Waving his hands, Zhou Wufeng said that the director himself found the evidence on Huhan, and the guy didn't do anything at all. Immediately afterward, police rushed to the apartment. A group of people approached the principal and called out to him. The policeman ran up to the protagonist and asked what had happened after all. They asked the director who he was talking to on the phone and then ran off somewhere. The principal decided to look at the guy, however. The guy only turned away. He realized that Zhou Wufeng had decided to set this all up to protect him from responsibility. The man held out the documents to the police officer and told him to consider them. He said he found these contracts in Huhan's office and said it was direct evidence of his fraudulent scheme. After that, he looked at the main character and said that his action caused 2 people to die, and he would tell everything in detail. After she explained everything to the cops, the director clapped the protagonist on the shoulders, approving of his actions. It was well after 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Zhou Wufeng testified to the police that Huhan to the death of his parents and said everything in detail. The policeman turned to the principal, asked if everything the guy said was really true, to which the principal said yes. The policeman asked the guy if the man knew his schemes had been exposed, to which Zhou Wufeng said he didn't think so. Zhou Wufeng said that right now he should be at home or at his office at work. The guy also said that he thought he would be easy to find through his immediate family. The policeman shuddered nervously, for he marveled at the fact that the fellow had guessed his thoughts. The police then approached the principal and told him they would send a squad right away and asked him to come with them. Meanwhile, there was a great atmosphere in the factory. Huhan calmly made herself tea without thinking about anything. In prostration, he decided to look at his surroundings. And then he shuddered in surprise. He was frightened because the books were not in the right order. He was so scared that he dropped the cup of boiling water on the floor. Going through the papers in the book he was afraid of where the equipment contract had gone, he decided to think and remember what had happened that day. He remembered that there was a farmer walking around the factory. He also thought that it didn't look like he was a factory worker. The man thought he must have seen him somewhere, and then it hit him. It was Zhou Wufeng. Meanwhile, Zhou Wufeng made his way home to his children. Little Zheng opened the door for him. He was clearly happy to see the protagonist. However, unlike him, the rest of the family was extremely surprised by the arrival of the protagonist. Especially surprised were the schoolgirl's classmates who came to study. Zhou Yuyue approached the protagonist and asked him why he had come here. Zhou Wufeng said he was just passing by. Zhou Wufeng remembered that Yuna had an exam coming up. The girl agreed to the guy's proposal. Zhou Wufeng said that he wanted to say a few words to her, and thus hinting that they wanted to talk alone. After that, Yuna's classmates said that they would already go and they would meet tomorrow. The girl grabbed hold of the guy's shirt and said they had to go. A classmate said to let him go, saying that Zhou Wufeng wanted to say it was important. However, the girl seemed to know the protagonist, because she said that he had come to sell something as usual because he had lost everything. Zhou Wufeng only looked at their backs in silence. After that, Zhou Wufeng summoned all 3 relatives. Zhou Wufeng pointed to himself and said that he had dealt with Huhan. Zhou Wufeng said not to worry about him anymore. However, Yuna was extremely frightened and pointed at the person behind the protagonist's back. It turned out to be Huhan himself. Zhou Wufeng abruptly turned his head around, not expecting to see this person. There, with a furious face, stood Huhan. Zhou Wufeng covered his relatives with his hands and told him to enter. Huhan, with eyes burning with rage, said that it was indeed him. It's like a crazy man threw himself at the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng easily dodged the suck of the obvious punch. Immediately afterward, he swung his arm to make a counterattack. Immediately after Zhou Wufeng squeezed the rogue's arm behind his back, Huhan cried out about how hurt he was. Zhou Wufeng smiled and asked what he needed to bring back and said to speak more specifically. He also mentioned if he was looking for a contract with Xenon Company or Seek Company. The man with angry eyes said to give it to them right now. The protagonist wasn't in a great mood either and reminded the villain of what he was in for. Such a threat made the scoundrel yell even louder. Immediately afterwards, Zhou Wufeng swung his leg to strike Huhan. Releasing him from his tight grip, the guy stepped toward the man. Immediately after that, Zhou Wufeng walked over to the table where he picked up a bottle of alcohol. With a sharp movement, he smashed the bottle against the nearest sharp corner. Yuna was extremely surprised by this action. Zhou Yuyue didn't remain poised either and opened her eyes wide at the protagonist's actions. Putting the rest of the bottle to his throat, Zhou Wufeng asked the scoundrel if he now realized what he had gotten himself into. The man couldn't adequately assess the situation and could barely make out his words. Frightened for his life, he replied that yes, he understood. After that, Zhou Wufeng slapped the rascal hard and asked him again if he understood exactly. From such a hard blow, the man screamed and fell to the floor. After a series of blows, blood flowed from behind Rascal's mouth and nose. Sitting on his knees in front of the protagonist, he said in a trembling voice that he was aware of it. The blood man asked what the protagonist needed. With burning eyes at Zhou Wufeng, he said that it was for his parents. The protagonist was not on a joke angry as he himself was trembling with anger. However, he wasn't the only one in this state. Yuna was also furious to the extreme while Cho Yue tried to calm her down. The man said he had nothing to do with their deaths. He cried out that they had known each other for years and really sorry about that. Zhou Wufeng said he understood. Trying to dispel the protagonist's misunderstanding, the man says he said that before. Raising his hands, the man said to give him the contract because it's the state. If they find out about it, they will arrest him for sure. As if frightened by the man's threats, Zhou Wufeng said that he could give up the contract. Putting his hand on the man's shoulder, the protagonist said something he hid it. After all, why would he lug around such papers? With a strained smile, Huhan hustled the protagonist. Both girls stared at the protagonist in bewilderment. The protagonist returned to them with a soft nod of his head. After Zhou Wufeng left the house, a fair amount of time had already passed. Sunset had come, but the company still hadn't stopped. After walking for such a long time, Huhan asked where Zhou Wufeng was going. Turning to him, Zhou Wufeng said to be quiet as Zhou Wufeng wanted to talk about how they would divide the money. The man began to deny that he didn't have any money because he had given him everything that time. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng's shoulder slapped his cheek and said not to lie to him. Not otherwise, it carries the contract of his superiors. Zhou Wufeng rubbed his hands together and asked where he was making 2.5 million. The scoundrel who was on the floor from the strong blow was surprised because he knew everything. Zhou Wufeng spread his hands and said that he knows everything, so stop pretending, because Zhou Wufeng does not want to take away a single yuan from the man. Zhou Wufeng said not to worry because since he was on his side, he didn't have to worry that he would throw him away or he would be in trouble with him. Right after that, the main character's face turned sinister. He said that when he bought new equipment in July, he should replace low-quality equipment with high-quality equipment, and then no one would realize anything. The man got up and said that yes he would, and they could keep walking. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng withdrew into the complete wilderness. They found themselves in a cemetery. Huhan started digging the grave of one of his ancestors, trying to find something there. Only Zhou Wufeng stood aside as if he had nothing to do. After digging up 100,000, the man gave it to the protagonist and told him not to forget about their pact. The main characters from told him to open the bags and look at the money. Seeing that there was exactly 100,000, the guy smiled evilly. Quite soon, they were already on their way back home. She, as Zhou Wufeng, decided to stop by somewhere on the way, and told the man to wait and not to go anywhere. So it turned out Zhou Wufeng went to a clothing store and bought some things there. Zhou Wufeng said that he needed to buy new clothes because Huhan's costume raises unnecessary questions. The man agreed with the boy's statement. After the man got dressed, he asked where the contract was. Zhou Wufeng said that it was under the red brick by the garbage can of his house. The man immediately shouted why such an important document should be kept in such a place. However, the man said that it didn't matter anymore and he should pick up the document as soon as possible. It wasn't long before the man was outside his house. The man started looking for where that brick was under the trash can. However, it wasn't long before he noticed a man standing very close by. He asked what Mr. Yu was doing here. As soon as the man noticed Huhan, his eyes lit up. Despite the tense situation between the main character and the man, the weather was beautiful. Mr. Yu pointed his finger sharply at the rascal and shouted that it was him. The man was extremely surprised by his neighbor's act. Immediately afterward, police ran to the scene. They grabbed the man and twisted his arms behind his back. The police told him not to move while Huhan only shouted and asked what he was being arrested for. The policeman, with a fierce expression on his face, said not to resist them. This is when the man realized that it was all planned by the protagonist and started looking for him. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng only chuckled at the man's attempts. It was as if the man had an epiphany. He guessed why Zhou Wufeng bought him a new suit and started to shun him. He wanted to prove he wasn't involved. He realized that no one knew they were walking around buried with money because their hands were clean, and he wouldn't be able to drag him off to jail with them. The man was filled with rage. He realized he'd been faking it ever since he'd asked him for money. And at such injustice, the man shouted furiously to let him go. Zhou Wufeng, seeing that there was no longer anything threatening him, was going to go home. At the same time, the man lost consciousness. The police officers pinned him to the ground and tried to prevent him from pulling something. Closing his eyes, Zhou Wufeng sank into his thoughts. He realized that it was time for him to leave. That same night, Zhou Wufeng came home to the children's house. He called everyone to the table and they were already seated around the main character. Zhou Wufeng seriously turned to them and said that everyone would already know tomorrow that Huhan had been caught red-handed. Zhou Wufeng squinted his eyes and said that he was about to show them something and asked them not to squeal and scream. The whole family did not look at the protagonist in bewilderment. Right after that, Zhou Wufeng took out that very same money sack. He lifted it high above his head, opened it, and dumped everything in the bag onto the table. The younger generation immediately screamed at that amount of money. Zhou Wufeng put a finger to his mouth, hinting to not stop shouting. After that, the main character whispered to them to be quieter. Yuna asked where he got so much money from. She was obviously frightened by such wealth. The protagonist sadly said that this was the money their parents sacrificed for. Afterward, Zhou Wufeng talked about what had actually happened. Zhou Wufeng looked at Yuna and said that she would give all the money to her for safekeeping. If she wanted to spend it on something expensive, she should question her older sister. Zhou Wufeng immediately afterwards asked the children to fulfill his request. He said that if he came back again in his past life and came to ask for money, he should not be given even a finya. Extremely surprised at such a request from the protagonist, but said nothing. Right after that, Zhou Wufeng stood up from the table and said that he had to go and reminded the shadows to forget to hide the money well. However, as Zhou Wufeng was already trying to leave, he was called out by Yuna. Zhou Wufeng turned around to the source of the sound. You with confusion on your face, she asked that it was getting evening, and if he would like to stay for dinner. Zhou Wufeng closed his eyes and thanked for the invitation, but said that he still had a full plate of things to do. He also said that thanks to this money, they would no longer have problems with food. However, Zhou Wufeng immediately remembered what he had forgotten to say. Turning around, he asked the schoolgirl to call him brother again. The girl was very surprised at such a request and blushed at it. She abruptly recalled all those moments when Zhou Wufeng took away the guy's food money without paying attention to them. Zhou Wufeng, after the girl only remained silent, only scratched the back of his head and said that he had to go already. He slammed the door and walked out of the house. The whole family only waved goodbye to him in greeting. Zhou Wufeng exhaled as soon as he stepped out of the house. To his home, he sank into thought. He realized that he had lied to the children and that they were unlikely to meet again. He then went to buy alcohol and stew at a local counter. After he paid, the salesman told him to come home again. Zhou Wufeng waved goodbye and thanked the seller. Zhou Wufeng thought that if he was even a little more late, the store would have already been closed. Smiling faintly, Zhou Wufeng counted how many bottles of high-degree rice wine he had bought and thought that it would be enough for him. After Zhou Wufeng bought everything he needed, he went to his home. Zhou Wufeng started drinking while munching on the wine with an appetizer. It wasn't long before he emptied the shot glass. Whereas Zhou Wufeng didn't expect the wine to be so spicy. With a flushed face, Zhou Wufeng decided to look away. He remembered that his Jiang Xiaoduo always sat on the other side of the couch. Suddenly slamming down on the sofa, Zhou Wufeng banished those thoughts and said goodbye to all his relatives. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng drank the rest of the wine in a volley. Suddenly he had a memory of how he had almost died in that world. Suddenly, however, he also received an unfamiliar memories as people mourned his coffin. It dawned, only soft snoring could be heard. Zhou Wufeng was still lying on that couch where the guy had poured the rest of his drink on. Zhou Wufeng was snoring peacefully without feeling any worries. Unexpectedly, Zhou Wufeng opened his eyes after such a dream. In front of me, that gave off light. Finally opening his eyes fully, Zhou Wufeng realized that he was still in this body. I literally screamed in frustration because he didn't expect to see himself here. Literally jumping out of the couch. He thought he had already been buried in that life. Be you crazy? And he started gaining circles around the table, screaming that he can't go back anymore. The protagonist realized that it was probably useless by now. Shrugging his shoulders, he realized that he couldn't go back. After Zhou Wufeng cleaned himself up, he began to button up his clothes. In front of the mirror, he berated himself for letting her leave. If he'd known he wasn't coming back, he wouldn't have let her do it. Taking the picture with the main character and Jiang Xiaoduo in his hands, the man sank into his thoughts. Squinting his eyes, he realized that if Zhang Zijue could contact Shenyu Zijang, then surely she could contact Jiang Xiaoduo. East Zhou Wufeng realized that he could not return. He suddenly heard a knock on his door. Opening the door, Yuna, Chou Yue, and little Zheng appeared behind her. Zhou Wufeng asked what brings them here. Zhou Wufeng told them to come in because he wanted to make noodles for dinner. Suddenly, Yuna turned to him with a flushed face and said that he could come over for lunch since she had bought some meat. Zhou Wufeng didn't think long and quickly agreed. Immediately afterward, they decided to walk to the children's house. Walking down the street, there was a calm atmosphere in the entire family. Zhou Wufeng and Yuna quietly rejoiced around as Chou Yue watched and rejoiced at what was happening. Little Zheng at this time was happily running around his relatives. Unexpectedly, little Zheng asked if he wanted to stay with them. Zhou Wufeng pondered the boy's suggestion. Stroking his head, Zhou Wufeng told him to be patient because when the month was over, he would be with them. But even then, Yuna approached him and called out to him. And she said that now the whole of Linshui knows about the Huhan incident. She had already said that several of his relatives had been arrested and were also involved in the incident. Looked up, Zhou Wufeng said that he knew that this would happen. We also hope that he will get the death penalty. Chou Yue and little Zheng supported this kind of sentiment of the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng was surprised that a toddler could speak such words, and the whole family walked quietly down the street. At the same time, unknown people came to Zijue's house. Someone shouted her name loudly. Opened the door, the girl asked what was wrong. On the doorstep stood her friends. One of them seemed to be begging for her to help them. Squeezing her hand, she asked if she knew the protagonist and asked her to tell him off, nearly crying. At the same time, a friend of hers came out of Zijue's house and asked what was wrong. The people who came were extremely happy to see him. He told him to calm down and asked him what was wrong. The man started to say that Dahai must already know about the incident with Xiaoshan's father, and said that he himself was also taken to the police. The man also said that if he remembered correctly, Zhou Wufeng is one of the accusers. Dahai asked the counter question of what they were afraid of, since it wasn't their fault. That is, it wasn't their war. The man said it was true, but he was not sure. He said that day they quarreled with the protagonist, when the most Zhou Wufeng said that, Walia from him evidence. The woman was extremely frightened that they were close friends, and what if the police arrested them too? The boys pleaded for Dahai and Zijue to help them. After pondering for a bit, Dahai said that he didn't think Zhou Wufeng had denounced the police and said that they should go around and ask him first. Soon the boys found themselves outside the main character's house. At the same time, the whole family was doing something of their own. Yuna was studying for an exam. Chu Yuyue was dusting, and little Zheng was playing with his toy. Zhou Wufeng, while preparing the food, told the guys to remember to wash their hands before eating. He soon placed many different dishes on the table. After Zhou Wufeng at the table, he asked the little one, "What does the food taste like?" Little Zheng said it was very delicious. Zhou Wufeng especially heard a knock on the door. He told his family to sit down because he would open it. Opening the door, the protagonist saw Dahai on the threshold of the house. In general on the mall, clearly pleased with the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng asked if he passed the smell of food. It wasn't long before all his friends were behind Dahai's back, greeting the protagonist with a friendly hello. Zhou Wufeng was surprised to have such company. Turning away from his friends, he wondered if they had come to invite him to play Dota. After that, Zhou Wufeng told them to pass and asked if they were hungry. Turning to his family, he asked the little one to bring plates and forks for foreign guests. However, the man stopped the protagonist and said that they had recently eaten. Pulled up, the man said they had come to discuss a little misunderstanding with him. Still not letting go of the chicken leg, Zhou Wufeng asked what misunderstanding they were talking about. The man at the same time looked at Dahai as if wanting him to speak for him. Coughing, Dahai asked if Zhou Wufeng had denounced Zhou Wufeng and his friends to the police. The protagonist said he didn't do it, but was just about to do it after the meal. The whole company was pretty freaked out. Suddenly, the girl grabbed Dahai by the shirt. Someone had already started to talk about Zhou Wufeng forgiving them because they really had nothing to do with Huhan's case, as he felt the force of the woman's pinch and almost cried. During the time that Zhou Wufeng and the others had been talking, sunset had come. As Zhou Wufeng calmly chewed his chicken, the guys prayed for him not to talk at their police. Upon reflection, Zhou Wufeng said that it was indeed fair. The guys almost cried from joy and asked if he really wouldn't denounce them. After Zhou Wufeng exhaled and agreed, the guys almost danced with happiness. Dahai clapped the protagonist on the shoulder and said that he believed he was good and just. At the same time, Yuna was having trouble preparing for the exam. Zhou Wufeng decided to approach her and asked her what she was having trouble with. Putting his hand to his chin, Zhou Wufeng said what Yuna had wrongly decided. Immediately after, the girl conceded, "Not so important, we hero." He said that in such examples, she should use a different formula, did not write it. It wasn't long before he had written an entire solution to the problem. Yuna took the solution to the problem in the elevator, and was extremely surprised by such erudition of the main character. It wasn't long before night fell. Yuna asked if it was about tonight. Okay, the hero said that yes, he would stay since he has to help her with her training. Averting his eyes, Zhou Wufeng thought that he actually had plans to start a business in Zheihai, the people his ex-wife was now living with, thinking that it could wait until Yuna passed her exams. After Zhou Wufeng played with the baby, Yuna came over and asked if Zhou Wufeng would wash his feet, for she had covered the water in the basin. Zhou Wufeng thanked her for her work. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng went to wash his feet. He dipped his feet in warm water. Relaxing, he thought, this is actually a good thing. Crossing his arms, Zhou Wufeng thought that this is exactly what he calls home. Over the next few days, Zhou Wufeng often cooked, helped the schoolgirl, and hung clothes. Things were moving along. It wasn't long before the rain came. It was the very day that the exam was being held. Zhou Wufeng decided to see Yuna off. Standing under the umbrella, she waved goodbye to the protagonist and told him to run home or he would get wet. Suddenly, the protagonist shouted and wished the girl good luck. Yuna started to turn around in embarrassment and told him not to shout because everyone was watching. The protagonist smiled radiantly at his sister. Still waiting for the schoolgirl to run to the building, Zhou Wufeng thought that she had finally gone to take her exams. Getting frustrated, Zhou Wufeng realized that he had to prepare to move to Zheihai. It wasn't long before the rain stopped. Zhou Wufeng decided to stroll down the street in search of something useful. Zhou Wufeng thought that there was still some meat left at home, and he should buy some noodles for dinner. Suddenly, he heard a conversation between two passers-by. They were talking about how the police had found not only buried money, but also money that the relatives had hidden in their homes. While Zhou Wufeng was looking at the zucchini, a man said that the scoundrel had cheated and ruined a lot of people for money, and killing him was simply not enough. The second man agreed that people in high positions who steal from the state should work on plantations. However, the man said they spent it, not out of the money he spent, and wondered what he was saving it for. The second man said that he had no idea. Zhou Wufeng, hearing this fact, was extremely surprised. He got so nervous that he accidentally stung the tank too much. The vendor saw that Zhou Wufeng had spoiled the food and asked why he was spoiling his vegetables. Zhou Wufeng apologized and said that he wanted to buy. Right after that, Zhou Wufeng ran home very quickly. He berated himself for forgetting that things were different here than they were in modern times, because he couldn't just pick up and spend all the money quickly, especially in such a small town. Being very nervous, Zhou Wufeng only thought that if they found out that they hadn't found all the money, they would start to investigate even more. Then he realized that the man would definitely rat him out. Zhou Wufeng realized that even though he had helped the cause greatly, if they had any suspicions, they would not leave him alone. When Zhou Wufeng came home, he told his older sister that she needed to give the money as soon as possible. Turning around, the girl asked what had happened. Zhou Wufeng was out of breath and said that he had not thought of everything and needed to return the money urgently. Zhou Wufeng said not to worry because they couldn't provide for themselves. Pretty soon the main characters were already at the cemetery. Looking around, he made sure no one was there. He immediately ran to the grave of the calm one. Upon examining it, he realized they hadn't dug that grave yet. Zhou Wufeng thought that they didn't know about this place yet, meaning he was saved and exhaled in relief. At the same time, an interrogation was taking place at the police station. The man questioned Huhan and the details of the relationship of feeling. The director asked the policeman. He said that there was 100,000 yuan missing, and the accused said that Zhou Wufeng stole it and asked what he thought about it. The director was extremely surprised at this assumption, because Zhou Wufeng had helped the case so much, and why would he set himself up like this? The police officer reminded the director that we're talking about hundreds of thousands as well. It wasn't long before sunset came. The police officer said that the defendant's testimony is consistent with reality, because Zhou Wufeng was really with him before he was caught. He also said that the investigation confirmed it all. The policeman turned around and said that Zhou Wufeng was too suspicious, and they would need to call him in for questioning. Immediately afterward, the principal grabbed the policeman's arm. The man asked if he could meet him first. However, the policeman quickly shook off the principal's hand. With fury on his face, he said that if they hadn't been friends for years, he would have suspected him. To the director, he said that this matter should be resolved. It wasn't long before the policeman left the cell. The principal stared at the back of the departing man. The policeman said to keep an eye on the principal, and not to let him out until the protagonist is arrested. Zhou Wufeng thought that he had gotten too excited when he thought he would leave this world. He had almost made a terrible mistake. Luckily, he managed to avoid her. While eating ice cream, he watched the game of Xiangqi. The man checkmated his opponent. Laughing happily, he said that the man didn't watch his horse. Suddenly, police officers rushed to the spot. The protagonist realized without even looking back that they were coming for him. Finishing the ice cream, Zhou Wufeng realized that it was his turn to put up the checkmate. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng found himself in the interrogation room. The policeman directly asked him where the 100,000 was. Zhou Wufeng decided to play dumb and asked what 100,000 he was talking about. The man said he was talking about the 100,000 he blackmailed Huhan to take from him. Zhou Wufeng asked a counter-question, told Huhan about it. The policeman slammed on you, said he was the one asking the questions here, and said not to answer a question with a question. Whereas the protagonist spread his hands and said he didn't take anything. The policeman asked why he took Huhan to his place. Zhou Wufeng said that he wanted to see his evidence. The policeman with a sullen face asked what happened next, and whether Zhou Wufeng had threatened to denounce Zhou Wufeng, and thus he forced him to hand over 100,000 yuan. The denunciation was still going on, and Zhou Wufeng was still there. Shivering with anger, Zhou Wufeng said that he really didn't take anything. The policeman asked if that was really the case. While Zhou Wufeng was confirming, the principal looked at him from the other camera. Folding his hands, the policeman said that Huhan did not know that he was a wanted man at that moment. He asked why he went with him. Zhou Wufeng said that his parents died because of him. Trembling, the protagonist said he personally wanted to see him arrested. Abruptly standing up from his chair, Zhou Wufeng became extremely angry. The guy's eyes reddened with anger. He yelled that he deserved life sentences and asked to be locked up. The police edge wasn't surprised by the guy's attitude. He tried to reassure the protagonist. The policeman said that Huhan told him about how he buried 100,000 and then dug it up and gave it to the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng asked incredulously if Huhan really brought the policeman to dig into his ancestors. At the same time, the principal on the other side of the chamber laughed at this assumption. Putting a finger up, Zhou Wufeng said that he had a couple of doubts. With a calm face, he said that Huhan claimed that he had been digging, but his clothes were clean. Secondly, he suggested that he might have left some of the money for his son. The policeman pondered the protagonist's assumption. It wasn't long before he was out of his chair. At a sedate pace, he walked out of the interrogation chamber. It wasn't long before the door slammed shut and the protagonist was left in it. With a smile, Zhou Wufeng realized that everything was going according to plan. The policeman turned to his officer and said to check Huhan's testimony, and said to find out where he went with the protagonist and check. At the same time, the principal was released from detention and was running circles around the police officer. The employee quickly ran to the police officer and said that they had found the 100,000 they were really there. The director was extremely surprised by this and asked if they had actually found it. The officer said yes, exactly 100,000, at the same spot where the defendant said he and the protagonist were. Pretty soon the case was closed. The principal thanked the officer for his help and offered him a cigarette. The policeman refused the cigarette and said there was no need for formality. The director asked if Zhou Wufeng was really free right now. The officer said that of course he was already free. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng and the director were taking a walk after the interrogation. The man asked if the protagonists were hungry. He expressed an offer to go to Goen's restaurant. He also said he would give him a treat as a token of his gratitude. Zhou Wufeng refused and said that maybe sometime next time since his family is worried and he needs to go back. And suddenly he remembered that he wanted to ask him something. The director told him not to worry because he had sent a letter to the relevant authorities, and the reply would arrive in a couple of days. Zhou Wufeng said that he should get the compensation as soon as possible because he had money difficulties. From the clock in the back of Zhou Wufeng's head, he realized that he was also unemployed on top of everything else. And the principal smiled and said that no formalities were necessary, and he would send another letter and send him a reply within a week. He also said, since Zhao Shan is suspended there, he can take his workplace. Thought Daddy Zhou Wufeng realized that he'd rather go to Zhehai after all. The protagonist was thanked for the offer, but he still refused. The director didn't expect this from the protagonist. The man thought that he was only talking, and there how badly he needs a job now takes and refuses. Zhou Wufeng waved his hand at the man and said that he had to go. Pretty soon it was morning. Someone told Maoden to put the rope a little higher. The girl said this height was enough. She was going to play Chinese jump rope. The girl began to chorus to the cheerful game. She bounced nimbly between the ropes. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng approached the culprit of the events. Stopping briefly, he only thought about the fact that this was exactly what Zijui did in his spare time and wondered, oh, how the girl hadn't seen the main character yet and was still having fun chorusing. Suddenly someone called out to her. She turned to the source of the sound. Zhou Wufeng stood there and waved to her in a friendly manner. The girl realized that she had ruined her image. Walking up to the girl, Zhou Wufeng was about to ask for something when the girl asked what the matter was. Zhou Wufeng asked the girl to borrow the phone again. Zijui didn't refuse his request. Walking over to the phone, Zhou Wufeng asked her to dial Jiang Xiaoduo's number. Meanwhile, the girl had sunk into her musings. She recalled her friend telling her not to give Jiang Xiaoduo's number to the protagonist. Zhou Wufeng asked the girl again if she could dial it. The girl shook her head and said she didn't know her phone number. The man only realized how badly she was lying. The man asked if she could dial Shen Zhejian's number. The woman said she wouldn't give it to him either. Zhou Wufeng interjected, meaning she knew her numbers after all, but gathered it to him. The girl clapped her mouth as she realized she had made a mistake. Zhou Wufeng scratched the back of his head and said that he understood her intentions. The whole earlier he was a bastard, however. He had known her for so many years. A saddened Zhou Wufeng said that he only wanted to see her again. The girl hesitated and lowered her eyes to the floor. The protagonist waved and said that he would do it some other time then. The girl looked at the back of the departing protagonist and wondered. A week later, Zhou Wufeng was still at home. Warming up the water, he prepared to cook the meal. Throwing the noodles into a pot-like pot, Zhou Wufeng was already about to cook it. Suddenly, Chen came to his house and said that he had received money for the death of his parents, and the director of personal will bring him in the evening. Zhou Wufeng asked why so more excited than him. Upon approaching the protagonist, the man asked what he was cooking, to which Zhou Wufeng said that he was just cooking noodles. Pretty soon the noodles were ready. Looking at the noodles, Chen asked why the man didn't add an egg since he was so rich. Appeared what the man said. After thinking for a while, Chen said that the principal would bring him 4,000 yuan. The man said he had the right to break an egg to celebrate such a thing. Zhou Wufeng said his aunt's hen had run away. He had nowhere else to get eggs. It wasn't long before the boys got down to the noodles. The man praised the protagonist for making such delicious noodles and told him to call him next time he cooks. Zhou Wufeng said that he's leaving for Zhehai tomorrow. The man was extremely surprised at such news from the protagonist. Pointing his wands at the protagonist, he asked what he was going to do there and if they gave him a job there. Zhou Wufeng spread his hands and said that he was going there himself, because there was nothing to catch here, and so he would go look for something better. By now it was dusk and the boys had dispersed. However, for the protagonist, the day is not over yet. It wasn't long before the principal paid a visit to the protagonist's home, who told him to come through and sit down. The director immediately asked if he was really leaving for Zhehai tomorrow. Zhou Wufeng put this matter aside and prepared tea for the incoming man. The principal asked if he really wanted to slip away without telling him, because he boasted that Chen had already told him everything. Zhou Wufeng said that he was going to tell him as soon as he came. She says the director told him not to lie to him. Now he understands why he turned down the factory job because he found something better. Zhou Wufeng said that he is not going there to work in the evening, is going to open a small business there. The director was extremely surprised to hear this and asked if he really wanted to start his own business. Zhou Wufeng said that he was only exaggerating because he would go to open a small establishment and live off of it. After the principal drank his tea, he put down his mug. It came. She said what Zhou Wufeng is very modest and asked how he guessed and if he had arranged everything. Zhou Wufeng thought that the director had the perfect characteristics for a work partner. The main character's approached "you will open" said to promise him not to tell, then told his plan. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng finished his story. Zhou Wufeng said that it happened like this while the principal looked at the protagonist in surprise. The man realized that the main character had an incredible story, and if he had that chance he was just lost. After that, the comrades decided to separate. The principal said that if he had any difficulties, he should write to the man. Zhou Wufeng thanked the principal for the suggestion and please have a good journey. As the man was going to his home and Zhou Wufeng looked at his back, Zhou Wufeng exhaled to realize that he had the money, but there was no case left. That is, it was time for him to pack his bags. The protagonist turned around and thought that if he left, who if not him would buy these devices. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng found himself at the children's house. He shouted for Yuna to open the door. After the girl opened the door to the main character, she asked what it was in his hands. Very soon she guessed that it was a color TV set. Zhou Wufeng shiveringly complained about why the color TVs were so heavy at this time, and asked the girl to help him because he was about to drop it. After puffing out his breath and sitting down on a chair, Zhou Wufeng said that he could barely reach it. The girl turned to the protagonist, said she was about to bring water. Immediately afterward, Zhou Wufeng began to explain what had happened. She said that he had been compensated and given a total of 3,980 yuan, and the amount could be recalculated by the girl herself. Zhou Wufeng said as he said, "He's leaving tomorrow." The schoolgirls asked if he was leaving straight for good or not. Zhou Wufeng said that yes, he is leaving for good. He also said that he would collect 500 yuan and leave the rest to the children. Chu Yuyu asked if this amount would really be enough for him, since Zhehai is a big city, and the prices there must be higher. Zhou Wufeng patted his sister on the head and said that he had enough. He also said that he would earn money there, not spend it. She also asked where little Zheng was now and if he was still asleep. Yuna said that yes, he was sleeping since he had been playing with him all evening. Cho Yuyi asked if he should wake him up, but the main characters said that he would go to him himself. It wasn't long before the protagonists found themselves at the baby's door. Zhou Wufeng waved to the child and said that they would see each other again. Pretty soon it became morning. The rooster cried out its beginning. Zhou Wufeng was no longer awake at that time. He was checking if he had really taken everything. Grabbing the pictures of the protagonist and Zhang Xiaoduo in his hands, he realized that this picture also needed to be taken. As soon as the protagonist got ready, Nikai walked up to the entrance to the protagonist's house. Zhou Wufeng stepped outside the threshold and saw Chen there as well. The man said he had a bus coming, so he came to give him a ride. Zhou Wufeng said that if they went right now, he would be able to reach by noon and find a place to sleep there, getting on the motorcycle with a smile. Pretty soon the boys were speeding down the highway. Pretty soon they found themselves at the Linchui bus station. The man said goodbye to the protagonist and told him to run to the bus or he would be leaving soon. Zhou Wufeng waved goodbye to Cheng. The man also waved goodbye to the protagonist and wished him good luck. Very soon, Zhou Wufeng found himself in Zhehai. This city was quite different from Linshui, where Zhou Wufeng had spent most of his life. Everything looked much busier. The highway was jammed with cars and buses, indicating that the city was advanced. Looking up, Zhou Wufeng realized that Zhehai was indeed more prosperous than Linshui, and marveled at the beauty of the city. Suddenly, on the main characters heard an offer to stay in a hotel. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng found himself outside the Heart-to-Heart Hotel. The girl who was handing out flyers asked if Zhou Wufeng wanted to stay at this hotel. She handed him the hotel's business card. Zhou Wufeng blushed and asked if it was legal. The woman said there are both official hotel and unofficial ones. Grasping her chest, she said with burning eyes that they had everything they needed. Zhou Wufeng was frightened by such insistence. Waving his hands, Zhou Wufeng thanked the woman, but said that he didn't need it. However, the woman was not going to give up. She grabbed the guy's hand and said that they had clean, cozy rooms leading the protagonist towards the hotel. She, as Zhou Wufeng, was even more frightened. Then I heard the bus talking about the next stop. Turning towards the sound, Zhou Wufeng realized that this was his chance for salvation. Told to wait for the protagonist, he broke free from the woman's grasp and ran towards the bus. The woman tried to stop him and said that she hadn't told him about the prices yet. Once on the bus, Zhou Wufeng decided after looking at the map. While trying to figure out the area, Zhou Wufeng realized that he needed to find an inexpensive accommodation. He realized that otherwise he just wouldn't have time to open a business, he'd run out of money. At the same time, one girl was trying to hail a cab. She said to give her a ride to Jiadian Garden, but only in a cab with the number 411. It wasn't long before the girl was out of the house. The driver said her cab had arrived. Once in the car, the girl, obviously knowing the driver, asked how he would thank her. Shijang said that that girl was cute, but he was already married. The girl said that Zhang Xiaoduo used to be married to the main character and called him an asshole. She also asked if the guy really doesn't like her anymore. The man said how could he not like a woman who responds so well. The man asked if they would pick up Zhang Xiaoduo at the library on the way. The girl said they should do so. Immediately after answering, the man pressed the gas pedal and headed for the library. His car drove quickly in the final direction. It wasn't long before the couple found themselves outside the city libraries. Zhang Xiaoduo was there, sorting through her books, immersed in her thoughts. It wasn't long before she was being called out from the other end of the library. She turned toward the voice. Zhang Xiaoduo was extremely surprised by the familiar faces, and asked again if it was really them. She said she would be done with work in a moment and asked her to wait a little while. Sighing, the woman realized that her family had set her up on a blind date again, and now here she was. Even her friend was involved. Pretty soon it was 6:30 and the girl had finished her work. At the same time, Zhang Xiaoduo's driver and girlfriend were happily talking about the events. Xizhang kept talking to her friend, laughing merrily. Suddenly he realized that someone was walking towards him. Seeing the man, Xizhang blushed heavily and opened her mouth in surprise. Zhang Xiaoduo stood there. She looked around. Her friend called out to Zhang Xiaoduo and said that she had finally arrived. Xizhang said hello to the girl. She similarly said hello to him in the same friendly manner. Taking her friend by the hand, the girl asked why they shouldn't go to the movies since there were some interesting movies she wanted to see. The friend told Zhang Xiaoduo to sit in front. Pretty soon they were almost there. The friend said that Xizhang would turn around, and they would be near the movie theater. Suddenly, however, the girl noticed a familiar face through the car window. She was very surprised because her buddy was standing there. The friend said to stop the car as soon as possible because Zhu Jun was standing there. After the girl stopped the car, she started shouting her friend's name. Zhu Jun was surprised that someone was calling him. He turned around and was surprised that both Zhang Xiaoduo and Shen Zizhan were here. Shen Zizhan began to explain that if he wasn't busy, then let him go with them since they were going to a movie. Shen Zizhan tried to persuade Zhu Jun to go along with them, opening the door in front of him. Zhu Jun barely agreed, and after that, the door was closed with a slight click. Shen Zizhan started introducing the guy to everyone there. She said that he was her friend and colleague. The driver said hello to the person who entered. Zhu Jun awkwardly said hello back. Whispering in the girl's ear, he said something that he hadn't been paid yet this month, and said he would be paid next month. Xizhang said it was fine. He would pay him, and also asked how much the ticket cost there. However, Zhu Jun was extremely, "You have a boyfriend." Xizhang told him not to be shy because he didn't owe him anything. He would just give him a ride, and also said that he knew how expensive cabs were these days. Zhu Jun seriously said that once he got his paycheck, he would give everyone a treat. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng was trying to find a night's lodging. One developer quoted him a price of 35 yuan per month. The woman was surprised and said that if it was expensive, let him go to the hostel where it cost 50 cents a night. Zhou Wufeng, with his mouth open, said, "Where is it?" Right after Zhou Wufeng found the place, he arrived at the dormitory. The man showed him a room with other residents. Zhou Wufeng realized that he was actually paying for a bed, but the tenants who were there looked sternly at the protagonist. One of them was smoking right on the premises. The concierge said that they collected 50 cents every night. At the same time, Zhou Wufeng asked where he could wash his face. The man told him that there was a wash basin on the left side of the corridor where Zhou Wufeng went. Washing his face, Zhou Wufeng said that although it wouldn't be so far gone here, but he could save a good amount of money. Immediately afterward, he headed back to his bed. However, he suddenly noticed that his bag was missing. He looked around and started asking where his bag was, because he had just hung it up and what had happened while he was washing up. Suddenly, Zhou Wufeng got angry again and realized that someone had stolen it. The man who smoked said to the press he should be careful leaving someday because everything that is erased here will never be found again. We also said that let this be a lesson to him. Zhou Wufeng realized that it was a very smart decision on his part to take the money with him. Not then his in-life immediately ended here. Meanwhile, the protagonist heard a familiar voice. He asked if there was a bed available for him. Zhou Wufeng turned towards the direction of the source of the voice and saw his headman there. They didn't dream of telling each other what they were doing here. Zhou Wufeng started first. He said that he hadn't seen him for a long time, and once they graduated all of high school, they had never met. Zhou Wufeng said that the bed across from him was free today, and said he could sleep on it. Immediately after that, Zhou Wufeng decided to take things apart. Zhou Wufeng said that he did not expect to see Zhu Jun. He should say that her husband seemed to have been given a job after college. The man said that he had been assigned to the tax department, but he would not be given a place in the work dormitory until the middle of next month. Well, look, in his story, Zhou Wufeng said it's no wonder he ended up here. Zhu Jun broached the topic and asked what fate had Zhou Wufeng come to Zhehai. Zhou Wufeng said that he came here to open a business and visit Zhang Xiaoduo. Zhu Jun turned away as he was judging the protagonist in his thoughts. He thought about the fact that all the former classmates already knew what he was doing there was no point in him pretending that he had become a better person. Zhou Wufeng asked why he didn't come to his wedding since he was missed so much. Zhu Jun said that he had business in the family. The hero divvied up the lessons and said that since that was the case, fine. The next day started off beautifully. The atmosphere was very good. Zhou Wufeng bought herself a bun and ventured into the case. At school he ended up at the Empire of Hope store. Well, Zhou Wufeng decided to start there. Nam thought today would be a good time to look around for potential business while munching on a scone. It wasn't long before the man was inside the building. He decided to consider clothing stores. After that, he realized that although Zhehai was a big enough city, it was still behind the capital. He looked at the clothing counters. He thought that the girl who brother the popular capital only after a while to get here. But despite this demand, hope in this city is not much different from her. Zhou Wufeng realized that this was his chance to make some money. She decided to remember all the trends of those years. Leather jackets, skirts, oversized pants, flared jeans. Exhaling, Zhou Wufeng decided that he would start with the flared jeans. Since they were just starting to gain popularity at this time, he would easily break through to the masses. Zhou Wufeng decided in the evening that he had some time left and watched some more. He remembers that many popular items have their origins in night markets. Very close by, Zhang Xiaoduo was looking at the floor and thought. Zhou Wufeng still hadn't noticed her and was looking around for bait. Suddenly their eyes met each other's. The guy was very surprised that he met a woman here. At that moment a brilliant idea came to him. Everything became clear to him at once. When the girl was also extremely surprised at the appearance of the guy, Zhou Wufeng quietly called out his ex-wife's name. Immediately afterward, however, he shouted her name joyfully. Approaching the woman, Zhou Wufeng said that it had been a long time since they had seen each other. The girl sadly said that they really hadn't seen each other for a long time. At the same time, her friends were behind her back when Zhang noticed that the girl was uncomfortable. Zhou Wufeng started to ask if Zhang Xiaoduo was hungry and if they could eat together. Zhang Xiaoduo said that she was full. Zhou Wufeng immediately afterwards asked them to take a walk somewhere because he had something to say. Unexpectedly, Shen Zizhan ran up to the company. She covered Zhang Xiaoduo with her hand and started yelling at the protagonist. She asked why didn't she tell him that now, since Zhang Xiaoduo was no longer his wife, so he had nothing to hide. The woman was still extremely resentful of the protagonist. The guy wore out to get the girl to listen to the protagonist. With a sullen expression on her face, the girl agreed. Zhang Xiaoduo told her friend that she talked to the protagonist briefly. She also said that she wanted to clarify some points with him, but in private. The girl also said not to worry. After that, Zhang Xiaoduo pointed to the side, hinting that that was the right place for them to talk. At the same time, one man was burning with anger. Xu Zhang shouted about Zhang Xiaoduo taking and leaving to go to her ex directly to date him. Shen Zizhan sighed heavily as there was nothing to say. Shen Zizhan said that it was already late. It is time for them to go home. Turning around, she left the company. Zhu Jun followed her. However, the man still hadn't calmed down, his eyes blazing with rage. Finally stepping aside, Zhou Wufeng started talking. By the clock, the back of his head, he said that since they hadn't seen each other, her form had gotten better, and apparently he hadn't been feeding her well. After that, Zhang Xiaoduo called out the name of the main character. She revealed that her family had recently started signing her up for a blind date. She said her mom keeps passing out and she's worried about her health. Lowered his head, she said all she had to do was obey her. In a trembling voice, Zhang Xiaoduo said that maybe this year she would get married. After that, Zhou Wufeng was unable to say anything, only silently looking at the girl. Shortly after, Zhang Xiaoduo turned around. She walked backwards away from the protagonist without saying a word. Zhou Wufeng decided to go back and say something to the girl after all. He called her name and started walking in her direction. At the same time, Zhang Xiaoduo only cried silently, trembling her entire body. Zhou Wufeng decided not to stop her. He only frowned at her back, immersed in his own thoughts. Suddenly, however, he grabbed the girl's arm. The girl shrieked at this surprise because she had not expected such a move on the part of the protagonist. That one hugged Zhang Xiaoduo. The girl blushed at such a move on his part. Suddenly, he kissed her on the mouth. Such a touching action only made the girl cry once more. She was unable to say anything and only blushed. Suddenly called her name. However, the girl was frightened by this sequence of events as well. She opened her eyes wide. After that, she pushed the guy away, unable to tolerate such insolence. Zhou Wufeng staggered and tried to justify his actions. In a serious tone, she told the protagonist not to say anything. Lowering her head, she said that she hated him. She hated him because of how suddenly good he'd been to her, and because of that she missed him now. On the verge of tears, the girl once again called out and at the main character. She said that in those 2 years he had almost killed her many times. He repeatedly hit her for any reason, even if it was someone else's fault. Zhou Wufeng opened his eyes at Zhang Xiaoduo's words. Zhou Wufeng tried to justify himself to the girl, however. He was unable to do so as the girl interrupted him. She said he was different now, and she wasn't sure of herself. She asked him if he was trying to fool her by being nice to her. Almost crying, she said she didn't understand why he had come here. She also doesn't understand why she met him at the market. Zhou Wufeng said to dry it because she did not understand anything. However, the girl only repeated that she could not hear anything. Screaming at the protagonist, she said she didn't know why he came here, and she didn't want to know. Immediately afterward, she ran in the opposite direction from the protagonist and screamed not to follow her anymore. All he had to do was stare sadly at her back. As the woman ran away, Zhou Wufeng was immersed in his thoughts. Clenching his fist, Zhou Wufeng only wondered if she knew what Zhou Wufeng wanted to tell her. Zhou Wufeng hesitated and looked at the lantern. He realized that even if he told her, he wasn't sure if he wanted to get into conflict with her family again. He mentally told himself to stop hurting her. Lowering his head, Zhou Wufeng realized that he was now living rough in the dormitory and taking care of his sisters. He wondered what he could even give her. Opening the eyes of the hero realized that he needed to earn money for startup capital, but where he could stand to take. The next day, Zhou Wufeng strolled through the alleys of the city. That's where he met the antique dealers. They were all trying to sell things from the past. Unexpectedly, Zhou Wufeng turned her attention to the turquoise ring. Picking it up, Zhou Wufeng began to examine it. The seller said that you should be careful because it was a valuable artifact of the Ming dynasty. The protagonist asked how much this ring is worth, but the seller only said not to even think about it because she is priceless and he will not have enough money. Zhou Wufeng told the boss to take it easy, and once again asked how much he was selling the adventurous jade for. The vendor was clearly surprised that Zhou Wufeng recognized this ring so clearly. The seller said that it was only 2 yuan because the fee was only for the master's work. The protagonist asked how this ring could be so expensive if they were mass-produced. Zhou Wufeng said to look at this edge on the material, and he wanted to already continue, but the salesman stopped him. He dropped the price to 1 yuan and told the man to back off. Soon, Zhou Wufeng sat down on a bench nearby and examined the artifact. After examining it from all sides, Zhou Wufeng was pleased with his purchase. Polishing the ring, Zhou Wufeng said that she looked better now. Right after that, Zhou Wufeng decided to walk to the local cafeteria. Ordering himself some noodles, he started eating his order. And just like that, Zhou Wufeng suddenly heard a voice beside him and turned towards the source. There was a married couple standing there. Zhou Wufeng put down his chopsticks, thus ending the meal. A woman asked her husband, and she wondered what year a particular item was made. The salesman realized that these foreigners spoke the language well and were unlikely to be fooled. The vendor told them to be careful and asked them not to break anything, while the woman pulled a clay item from the table. The woman said it does look like a very historic one, and her husband said to add it to the collection. The man asked how much he was charging for the vase. Waving a fan, the seller said it belonged to his ancestors, and he didn't really want to give it away. The man said he would keep it safe. The seller said he would sell it for 1,000 foreign currencies. The man was about to give the money to the seller when he was stopped by Zhou Wufeng. He began to say in English that he was cheating him. After all, it is a handicraft if you don't want this garbage. Zhou Wufeng can give it away for free. The married couple looked behind them. Zhou Wufeng stood there, and with a smile on his face, he nodded to them. The man turned back to the salesman and said they had changed their minds about buying it. The seller started to discount the price, saying he'd sell it for 700. The seller, trying not to lose his customers, was willing to sell the vase for 100. Seeing how quickly the price was dropping, the man said that they knew it was a fake. Zhou Wufeng was about to leave when he was stopped. Crossing his arms, Zhou Wufeng heard the couple thanking the protagonist for the warning. Zhou Wufeng spread his hands and said that he was always welcome for his foreign friends. The woman asked where he was from. Zhou Wufeng said that he is a local, just Igor father worked abroad often took with him so he knows English. The man asked how Zhou Wufeng realized that the vase was a fake. The protagonist closed his eyes and said that these vases show traces of paint. Archaeologists have not found the same shape on your vases. He also said that to be clear, he didn't know much about it himself. Immediately afterward, the man asked if it was possible that Zhou Wufeng was also a collector. Zhou Wufeng laughed and said that his father was in the business with similar things, so he knew a little about it. A man with burning eyes asked the protagonist to help them find real antiques. Zhou Wufeng grinned and said that he would be happy to help. The man said his name was Tom and his wife Linda. Zhou Wufeng introduced himself as Dafeng without revealing his real name. After that, the company decided to go through the flea markets. Now the vendors also realized that Zhou Wufeng had brought foreigners with him and were greatly surprised. He beckoned to the main character and told them to come over to look around. Zhou Wufeng said to get the boss some real antiques. Nervous roll there is in his bag, the salesman said he would do it now. After waiting a short time, the man pulled an ancient comb from his bag. The seller said his great-grandmother passed it down to him, and this crest has been passed down several generations. He also said it came directly from the palace. Zhou Wufeng wondered about the quality of this crest. Zhou Wufeng thought that the paint on this crest was obviously not fake, and from the look of it, one could guess that the crest had a long history. Zhou Wufeng realized that although it was unusual, it didn't have any special value, and it was difficult for him to name its real price. Zhou Wufeng started talking to the couple in English. He said that she was valuable. However, don't point at him that they want her, for he was going to lower the price for him. The man said he wasn't particularly impressed because you could find the exact same crest anywhere. Zhou Wufeng said it was historical and a man could keep it for his collection. The seller tried to approach the protagonist, said that this crest has a great history, and it is definitely worth taking it into the collection. Zhou Wufeng approached the seller and asked what minimum price he was willing to offer, and if it went over budget they wouldn't buy it. The seller began to say that he would sell it for 100 foreign currencies, because this thing is really very valuable to him. Because of less, he will not give it away. Zhou Wufeng nodded to the man and said that the deal was done. Immediately the happy company distanced themselves from the salesman as he watched their backs silently. The seller realized that he could sell for more money. At the same time, the man thanked the protagonist for helping him make such a purchase. He also suggested that the protagonist have lunch together, because that way he could express his gratitude, and asked him not to refuse. The protagonist has his head back in his thoughts that this is the moment he's been waiting for. It wasn't long before they found themselves in a restaurant. The man told the protagonist to look at the menu. The woman told her husband that she really liked this comb. Zhou Wufeng looked at the couple and said that they were very lucky, because he was worth at least 1,000 foreign currencies. The man gave a thumbs up to the protagonist and said he was really lucky to meet him after all and didn't buy the comb for only 100. Zhou Wufeng started rubbing the ring on his finger and said that he was really sorry. The couple immediately noticed the main character's unusual object and asked what it was. Zhou Wufeng said that if the comb was made by a famous needleworker, it would have cost much more. The man said that they had only spent 100 and were already very grateful. Immediately afterward, the man asked the protagonist what that ring on his finger was and what era it was. Zhou Wufeng said that he really didn't know. The man was surprised at this response from the protagonist and asked again if it was really true. The main character said she got it from the village and he can't exactly say what era it's from, but he bought it because it looked beautiful. The man said that since an expert like him couldn't tell, it must be a really good item. He also asked how much he bought it for. Zhou Wufeng said that he bought it for 1,000 yuan. The man also asked the protagonist so he could watch the ring. Immediately after Zhou Wufeng handed it over to the couple, they examined it. The woman was surprised by the beauty of the ring. Zhou Wufeng smilingly said that he planned to wear it for a while once he got tired of selling it. The man said why don't he sell it to them, since Linda really liked it. Zhou Wufeng questioned whether the man really wanted to buy it because even Zhou Wufeng himself was not sure how old he was. The man said that yes, they are indeed willing to buy it because the fact that his wife likes the ring is all that matters. Zhou Wufeng said that since it was such a matter, he would do him a favor. Immediately afterward, the man handed over the money to the protagonist. The woman asked if he would really buy it at the purchase price, and if Zhou Wufeng wanted to make any profit from it. Zhou Wufeng said that he was willing to sell to his girlfriend for just that much because it is important to have friends abroad. He also said that they are friends now. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng returned to the dormitory. When he went to his room, he asked the headman if he was still or if he was reading the paper. Immediately after that, Zhu Jun closed the newspaper and put it aside. Zhou Wufeng asked. Really, he felt sleepy as soon as Zhou Wufeng came in. The machine said that he had to get up for work tomorrow. Zhou Wufeng said he was not keeping him for long and asked what kind of man was with Zhang Xiaoduo yesterday. However, the man was already pretending to be asleep. Averted eyes, the main character thought, here's another man who doesn't think he's right for a woman. Immediately afterward, the protagonist tugged the headman's shoulder and kept calling his name, trying to wake him up. However, the man was not happy about this action. He furiously shouted the name of the protagonist. He started shouting, why does he care who Jiang Xiaoduo was with yesterday, since he had already divorced her, and asked why he was still chasing after her. Zhou Wufeng repeated his question. The man said it was Xu Jiang, the cab driver. Zhou Wufeng was surprised that the person who was trying to date Jiang Xiaoduo was just a simple cab driver. Zhu Jun says that he makes more money in a day than a man makes in a month, and told the protagonist not to even try. Soon, Zhou Wufeng realized that he had found himself on a train. Looking out the window, Zhou Wufeng thought, you're still, and they should definitely be enough to buy a batch of good flap jeans from Guanghai. It wasn't long before the protagonist affected the city's wholesale market. He went there right at night. Looking up at the building, he realized he was on the spot. Still looking at Zhou Wufeng's building, he realized that that one was 3 times bigger than the market in Zhehai. Looking over, Zhou Wufeng tried to understand the situation. All behind the beam, Zhou Wufeng said that he usually goes to the market a little earlier to vomit better. But now it was only 2 in the morning. He decided to lie down for a while, and when he wakes up, he will go shopping right away. Zhou Wufeng told his eyes from the loud screams when they would open after all. Fully opening his eyes, Zhou Wufeng marveled at the crowd that stood outside. Screaming out, Zhou Wufeng realized that so many people had already arrived so early. In his haste, Zhou Wufeng realized that he had to hurry because if he procrastinated, he would have time to sell out everything. Some salesmen stood on a pedestal so he could be seen and said that normally jeans cost 40 yuan and skinny jeans cost 55 yuan. Zhou Wufeng was surprised no jeans because if they were to be converted into a price at the exchange rate of 2020, they would cost 3,000 yuan for 1 pair, and this is not even a brand. But Zhou Wufeng went to the seller and asked that if he bought in bulk 50 pairs of flats, will he give a discount? The man said that if he bought 50, he would be paid 50 yuan for each pair, and if he bought 100, he would be paid 45 yuan each. He also said that if he wanted to buy one, the man should think faster, because the stock was running out. The protagonist wondered if he really only wanted to acquire steam. Zhou Wufeng decided to cheat and call people who want to buy flared jeans with him. Turned side to side, he was inviting people in. Quite soon, a man approached the protagonist and asked about whether they would really buy together and pay together. Zhou Wufeng confirmed this and asked if he wanted to buy flared jeans. Soon another woman approached him and said she wanted a few pairs. Zhou Wufeng asked how many pairs he wanted. He would calculate the amount before collecting the money. Everyone named as many as they needed. A man named 20 pairs, the women 50, and another man said he only needed 5. After counting, Zhou Wufeng realized that there were only 105 pairs, including the main character, and that should be enough. Immediately afterward, the protagonist collected money from 3 people. Zhou Wufeng said that the store ahead of them sold the cheapest good quality jeans. The man said to let the man drive, and the woman said he better not lie. Zhou Wufeng said not to worry, because the vendor had already been approached by many people, and Zhou Wufeng realized that now was the time to hurry up. Immediately after this main character, an idea was born. Raising the money, Zhou Wufeng said that he would buy 105 pairs of skinny flap jeans from him. However, the protagonist waved not simple yuan, but foreign currency. The salesman was very surprised that this kid had so much foreign currency. The salesman told his butt assistant to pack 105 skinny flap jeans for the protagonist and said that he didn't get it wrong, and it was the skinny ones that were needed. After everyone had sorted out their part, the woman said that the protagonist's idea was brilliant. The protagonist said it was all to their advantage. The man said he needed another pair of regular men's flared jeans. The protagonist thought about it, so he propositioned. He looked at his jeans and realized they weren't in the best condition. A lot of the main character realized that maybe he should get himself a pair too. It was already nighttime when Zhou Wufeng returned to Jihai. He approached the real estate salesman and asked him for a good place. He was not very eager to do so. After that, the protagonist handed a cigarette and lit it to the salesman. He once again asked him to give him a good place for the counter. Exhaling cigarette smoke, the man said he would give it a try, and the protagonist should register and pay now. After Zhou Wufeng paid, the man escorted him to the place. Pointing to the spot, Zhou Wufeng said that it was the right place for a counter. Leaving, the man said that the place would clean itself, and the man would go on to work. Zhou Wufeng thanked the salesman for being so generous. It wasn't long before Zhou Wufeng unloaded everything he needed. He exhaled a sigh of relief, for everything was already ready. Standing up in a confident pose, Zhou Wufeng admired how he hung out his jeans. Meanwhile, an important meeting was taking place at another restaurant at the same time. At this time, there were many people gathered around the table. Shen Zijian decided to introduce everyone. She introduced Shi Zhang and said that he was her friend and worked as a cab driver. The man respectfully stood up and said hello to the people. Quite soon, Qian Liang shook his hand and introduced himself. Shen Zijian said that Liang is her former middle school classmate, and recently he moved to Jihai to work for Shinan Equipment Factory. Shi Jiang asked Shen Zijian if she earns more than him. The entire monthly wage in the factory is at least 100 yuan. The girl said that if he continued to tease her, she and Jiang Xiaoduo would leave. Shen Zijian said that she would finish her sentence. She said that she is paying for dinner tonight since this is Liang's first time in Jihai. Shi Jiang said that this is a great idea. Immediately afterward, everyone clapped their hands together before eating. Meanwhile, as dusk fell, more and more people gathered in the streets of the market. Zhou Wufeng stood by his counter and talked about imported flap jeans. He advertised them, saying that they are of high quality, really worth looking at. Nadeau asked the protagonist if he could prove they were imported. The main character started speaking in English and said to pay attention to the material and style. It wasn't long before a multitude of customers gathered around his counter. Zhou Wufeng asked if this size would fit the woman when the woman asked how much it would cost. Zhou Wufeng said it was straight from the factory, and at the lowest price of only 99 yuan. Right after that, the main character's eyes lit up. He said that they also had a special offer. He said that if they changed into those jeans and walked all over the market in them, they would give her back 5 yuan. The woman was surprised at such a generous offer. Zhou Wufeng said that if they thought they weren't suitable after that, after she bought them, he would just refund them. The woman asked if the protagonist had a size S, because she wanted to try it on. Zhou Wufeng gave her a pair of jeans in the right size. The girl fairly purchased began to walk through the market. Zhou Wufeng said with a radiant smile that this was the first successful sale. And meanwhile, the company was leaving the restaurant. Shen Zijian said it's not a bad idea to take a walk after eating. Shi Jiang asked if Zhang Xiaoduo liked walking. The girl lowered her head and reluctantly said she liked it. Jia Pei told Shen Zijian and Zhang Xiaoduo that it would be a good idea to go to the night market, because it's funnier there than on the street. Walking through the night market in her new flared pants, the girl heard many rave reviews from passers-by. Zhou Yufeng, as a true peddler who wanted to sell his goods as soon as possible, couldn't help but compliment the beautiful girl. As all the conditions were met, he took out a 5 yuan bill and gave it to the buyer as previously agreed. Jeans were so gorgeous that girls' hearts fluttered at the mere sight of them. It was impossible not to fall in love with such fashionable pants. The guy decided to attract the attention of customers with a tempting condition of purchase, promising to return part of the money for defile and new jeans. Holding a wad of money in his hands, the hero was satisfied with today's good earnings and decided not to stop there. Jia Pei spotted a woman walking by wearing an extremely beautiful pair of flared jeans and called out to her friend, pointing to her find. Zizhang also wondered where they had bought these clashing jeans, because you couldn't buy them in the center. The girls decided not to waste any time and went to look at the shopping pavilion inside the night market. Zhou Yufeng managed to gather a crowd of customers around him and began to serve them one by one according to their preferences and clothing sizes. In the midst of the haggling, the girlfriends came over and Jia Pei inquired about the cost of the flared jeans. The flared jeans cost 99 and 9 yuan. Unfortunately, the petite size jeans had run out, but the businessman promised to buy some on reserve for 1 yuan. Neither friend expected that the salesman would turn out to be the very type who had caused so much trouble for one of them. In order to avoid an awkward situation, Zhou Yufeng pretended that nothing had happened and offered to bring Xiaodo a pair of jeans in the next batch, as this one was already out of the right size. The girl was confused and couldn't answer him anything. She lowered her head, trying to avoid his gaze. Receiving no response from her, the boy happily decided to take the silence as a sign of agreement. Clash jeans cost no small amount of money. Xiaodo declined them, hoping he hadn't forgotten about his sisters. Yui Feng began to argue that things weren't the same now, but at that moment, Zizhan decided to lead her friend away from this man. Li Daicai supported Yui Feng in his endeavors, saying that he would become the richest of the guys in their class if he kept working like this. The protagonist did not react to his words of encouragement, and only stubbornly looked through him as if he couldn't see him. Receiving no response, the guy noticed that his interlocutor was ignoring him, and all his attention was on the ex-wife behind him. Angry at this kind of attitude, Li Daicai deliberately pushed Xiaodo with his elbow, and the girl began to fall. Noticing this, Shoujiang, standing nearby, reflexively reached out his hand and managed to catch it, preventing it from falling and injuring himself. Feeling his touch on her skin the next second, the girl jerked her hand away sharply, embarrassing the young man. After witnessing the unpleasant situation, Zizhan told the guys that they had nothing to do here anymore, and it was time to walk. Gritting his teeth and gathering his will in a fist, the salesman shouted after them, trying to stop them. Shijiang and the others turned around. Without wasting time, Yufeng offered them to support his business as an old classmate. Li Daicai was angered by his words, recalling that Zhang was not his classmate at all. Zhou Yufeng realized his mistake. It seems the guy was just on good terms with his classmates. Li Daicai didn't want to offend his acquaintance, and lest Shijiang misunderstand him, he decided to clarify the whole situation. Shijiang just stood silently staring at the puzzled Yufeng, as if pondering to himself about something. Unexpectedly, the young man reached into his pocket and started looking for something there. Taking the money out of it, he handed it to the guy and said he would support him on behalf of the class, and he would no longer have the need to ask for anything from the others. A satisfied Chow thanked him, pulled out a notepad, pen, and prepared to make a pre-order list of the right size of flared jeans. Jia Pei immediately became animated and began to announce the sizes she and her friends needed. After waiting for the orders to finish, Zizhan hurriedly led her friend away from this man. When everyone was about to leave, the guy decided to call his ex-wife to talk privately. Hearing his request, Xiaodo stopped without turning around and froze, not daring to move. Zhu Jun, standing beside him, carelessly reminded him that they were already divorced, hinting to stay away from the girl. After the wounding words about divorce, there was silence all around. Everyone was in anticipation of Xiaodo's answer. Shen Zijian didn't understand what else the two of them could talk about and why her friend didn't want to leave this place. But Xiaodo was determined to dot all the dots between them. or else he would continue to harass her in the future. The guys thought she was too soft on him. On top of that, Lee Datesai rashly assumed that she still loved him. However, Xu Zhang, who intended to get closer to the girl, was not at all happy about these words. Seeing her friend's annoyed expression, Shen Zijian told Li Dekai in raised tones to stop talking nonsense. At this moment, Xiaodo agreed to step back to talk to Cho Yuifeng away from prying ears. They headed down an empty alley lit by sparse streetlights, secluded from unsolicited counselors. After walking a fair distance and making sure no one was there, the girl stopped abruptly, giving him the right to speak. The guy started talking about what had happened since she left, about Huang's arrest, his parents' funeral, and the compensation he'd given his sister. The girl stood with her back to him, silently listening to all the things he was so eager to tell her about, but she turned around suddenly, piercing him with her gaze. Deciding to change the subject, Yuifen bragged about his earnings for that night, showing a wallet stuffed with money. Xiaodo decided to end this pointless conversation by saying that she was going to marry someone else and asked him to stay away from her again. The guy couldn't believe his ears and was stunned, her words putting him in a stupor. The girl asked him to go back to Lingshui so they would never see each other again. She didn't expect a convulsively hysterical laughter to erupt from the opposite side after her words. Losing control of himself, he grabbed her by the shoulders, screaming that he would not let her try to marry another man. Unable to hold back her tears, Xiaodo asked if he was going to chase her to her death. To which Yufen replied that after letting her go once, he would not repeat his mistake again, and would not let her get away a second time. Looking directly into the girl's tearful eyes, he rashly proposed that she marry him again. But seeing that she was greatly startled by his actions, he let her go, taking a deep exhale. Realizing his reckless behavior at the moment, he tried to make things right. Suggesting that she forget what she had said in a burst of emotion, he thought it appropriate to offer to walk her home. Xiaodo silently turned around and hurriedly left, not wanting to mess with him anymore. Knowing her worries, he made a promise to break down all the towering barriers between them one by one. When he returned to his workplace, he began to inventory the rest of the merchandise to determine which sizes were in greater demand. He urgently needs to replenish the missing sizes while they're being snapped up like hotcakes. The next morning, Cho Yufeng went to the Guanghai wholesale market again, intending to buy up some clashing jeans. The man he bought jeans from last time recognized him immediately, but this time the guy only asked for 60 pairs. But regardless, the salesman decided to be generous and sell him the pants at wholesale price, as if he were buying 100 pairs. In the midst of a trade deal, someone suddenly called out to Cho Yuifeng from the side. He turned around out of curiosity and saw that a familiar man was walking towards him. As it turned out, it was the same guy he'd shared a pair of flared jeans with last time. A young man named Shu came on behalf of the company he worked for to learn about the latest fashions. Cho Yufeng immediately assumed that he was a representative of some trading company, and was not mistaken. Shu confirmed his speculation and said that he worked for Guanghai International Company, which had a trade permit to import and export all possible goods. It could not but be happy because it became possible to get good connections with factories abroad. In joy, Cho Yuifeng offered to take him for a walk, intending to get closer and find out more information. Shu wondered if his sales were so good since he had come back so quickly for new merchandise. He replied confidently that the demand would only increase in the future. Being experienced in this matter, his new acquaintance warned him that in such a lucrative business there would always be competitors, which would certainly affect his income. The protagonist himself knew this, so he wasn't going to do it on a permanent basis, but just to make a couple days of money. Seeing the puzzled look of his interlocutor, Cho Yufeng explained that in a price war, one had to be smarter than the others. There were frenzied screams in an apartment building in a wealthy neighborhood in another part of the city. Upon learning of Cho Yufeng's arrival, Xiaodo's father became furious and started smashing objects around him. Hearing the sound of breaking glass, the excited girl rushed to the room where her parents were at the moment. Seeing Xiaodo enter, the father started begging for information about when the bastard arrived. She made no attempt to conceal anything, and, with her head sadly lowered, answered her father that he had arrived 2 days ago. Yun Guang once again couldn't control his emotions, thinking that the rascal had come to ask her for money again. But Xiaodo denied it, saying that he just wanted to talk. Jiang Mingming tried to calm down the angry Yun Guan, concurrently curious about what he wanted to talk to her about. Her mother rebuked her for marrying him without listening to her and offered to buy him off with money, just so he would leave them alone. The angry father was outraged. He would not give him a penny, lest in future he should come to them until he had sucked all the money out of them. Like any mother, Jiang Xing was worried about her daughter, and didn't know how they should proceed with the situation. Xiaodo was concerned about her mother's poor health and promised her to sort things out. As evening fell, people from all over the city began to converge on the night market, hoping to buy something interesting. Cho Yufen was just putting out a new batch of flared jeans when the first customer approached him. The girl checked if the price was still 99 and 9 yuan as before, but since she hadn't pre-ordered, the price was 110 yuan. The girl was surprised. She hadn't counted on such a sudden price increase in one day. He explained to her that yesterday he only had a few pairs left at the purchase price, which he couldn't even make money on. Unfortunately, he can't sell her pre-ordered jeans from another customer. The customer was outraged and did not want to buy the jeans at the new price, threatening to just leave if he did not relent. Cho Yufeng was adamant. He said that he was already selling them 20 yuan cheaper than in the capital. Gave in to temptation, girls still decided to buy Jeans Clash, despite the price they really liked it. During their dialogue, 2 other customers who had pre-ordered as many as 3 pairs came up. One of them asked the salesman if she would look slimmer in them, to which the guy showed her all the benefits of the jeans. Cho Yufeng didn't miss the opportunity to remind them that by pre-ordering they had saved money and refunded their fee. The girls were happy with the deal. They were lucky enough to be able to order the now popular Clash jeans at the old price. Looking after them with a sly expression on his face, the guy was in anticipation of the imminent results of his strategy. A few days later, someone from the crowd marveled at Cho Yufeng's rapidly flourishing business, surrounded by a crowd of customers. Turning around, the guy recognized his first client, the one who had tried on the clashing jeans before anyone else, and walked around the night market in them. Her acquaintances would also like to buy some jeans, so she asked the price. But the stock at the purchase price had already run out, and now it was 110 yuan. Upon hearing about the price hike, the client was impressed with his slick business strategies. Late at night, Xiaodo was returning from work and heard Xizhang, who was passing by, call out to her. He wondered why she was coming home from work so late, and she told him about the general cleaning at the workplace. Xiaodo still needed to stop by the market to pick up his jeans, so she suggested he walk around a bit on the way there. On her way to the market, she met Jia Peipei and continued with her. Her friend offered to pick up the jeans instead to avoid an unnecessary meeting. But the girl had something to say to her ex-husband, so she graciously declined Peipei's offer. Her friend tried with all her might to convince her that her ex was a sick man and couldn't be blindly trusted. But Xiaodo was serious about resolving some points with him about their past together. At this time in the market, Cho Yufeng was actively taking pre-orders for the next shipment of Clash jeans. Approaching the sales booth, Jia Peipei asked him to give her long-awaited order of popular jeans. The guy handed her 3 pairs of flared jeans, having kindly folded them into a paper bag beforehand, after exchanging the standard thank yous between buyer and customer, but she hurried away. The girls standing in line were sure that if she bought 3 pairs at once, it was a good sign, and they were not mistaken in their choice. Back at her friend's house, Peipei handed her a pair of jeans, but she decided to discard them, giving them to her as a gift. The girl didn't linger and went ahead, leaving Xiaodo to talk to her ex-husband. As she hesitantly approached him, she called the young man by name. Cho Yufeng was madly happy and surprised at the same time at her unexpected arrival. With all possible seriousness, Xiaodo asked for a few minutes for an important conversation. The boy felt embarrassed, for he thought it was all because of yesterday's incident, and apologized for his thoughtless behavior. Realizing that he had caused her a lot of problems before, he tried to convince her that things were different now. The girl looked a little confused by the young man's sudden revelations. He promised that he would not disturb her again in the future, but if she decided to marry him again, he would be sure to wait for her. The girl did not know what to say to him and only looked at him with her head down in embarrassment. Not changing his habits, Cho Yufeng decided to once again accept her silence as a sign of agreement with his words. It was getting dark. He couldn't let the beautiful girl walk alone, so he walked her home. Upon reaching her destination, Xiaodo thanked the young man for the favor and hurriedly went inside the house. Suddenly the guy hesitantly called out to the girl and she turned around in surprise, looking at him expectantly. After which he proudly blurted out that in his opinion, no one else deserved her but him. Closing the front door behind her, the girl leaned against it thoughtfully, pondering his words. Alarmed by her daughter's late return, her mother ran up to her and saw Xiaodo's tear-filled eyes. Mother's heart told her that all the troubles were as usual because of the rascal Cho Yufeng. Did he really hurt her? Not wanting to cause trouble to her loved one, the girl lied that it was just a grain of sand in her eye. Jia Xiaohua, the heroine's sister, also guessed that she was dating her ex-husband. She reproached her with the fact that the girl had broken the promise she had made to her parents to avoid him. But Xiaodo began to convince them that they had just talked and he had promised not to bother her again. The parents had strong doubts about the truthfulness of the promise made by this man. Meanwhile, her father informed her that he had made reservations at the restaurant for 2 just for her and Lu. The girl was so sick of blind dates that she couldn't contain her emotions, and yelled that she wanted to be alone and wasn't going anywhere. The furious father was sure that if it wasn't for him, no one would have agreed to go out with a divorcee without a decent education or job. Xiaodo's anger at her father's suggestion that she marry Liu herself. Because of his daughter's unrestrained behavior, Zhang Yongguang's mind burst and he slapped her cheek with all his might. Unable to bear the scolding of the people close to her, Zhang Xing's heart ached. She slumped to the floor and everyone rushed to her aid at the same second. This situation reminded her mother of how angry Xiaodo was when they were against her marriage to Yui Feng. She begged her to listen to them for once, for they meant her no harm and did not want her to suffer again because of this man. Xiaodo had no choice but to agree to all the conditions and become an obedient daughter. The next morning promised to be quite profitable and promising in terms of trading. Today, Cho Yuifeng went to another outlet, and he had already served the first customer. Zizhan, Jujun, and Jia Peipei, who were passing by, were engrossed in conversation, but one of the girls noticed the guy. Jia Peipei didn't expect to see him here after all. He usually sold clashing jeans at the night market. Cho Yuifeng informed her that he had decided to change places for a while and was trading here today. When he saw the girl wearing the jeans he bought from him, he singled her out, saying she looked better than her friends. Jujun took umbrage at his words, saying that a pair of stupid jeans doesn't make her more fashionable than the others. Smiling wryly, Yuifeng let the headman know that he couldn't speak so poorly of his classmate. Realizing that his words might have offended the girl, Jujun began to apologize to Peipei. Making an offended look, Yuifeng decided to embarrass Jujun even more for criticizing his pants. He rebuked him for condemning poor salesmen like him, who earns only 2 yuan from each sale, making ends meet. Hearing about the amount of earnings, Zizhan indignantly interrogated about the profit from the guy. Seeing the girl's angry look, Cho Yuifeng realized that he had said a little too much. After collecting the goods, he hurriedly left for the market, citing that he had no time to chat with them. The girl told the others not to waste their time on him, since they weren't even friends with him. Dusk came. Cho Yuifeng decided to take a little rest from trading and gain strength. He went to refresh himself with noodles, hearing from Qin Yigu about his talent in trading. The guy answered him that he works for an authority figure and doesn't even know what his profit margin is right now. Qing Yu was curious if his boss had contacts with overseas manufacturers. Cho Yuifeng brushed off the unnecessary questions and said that he was just an ordinary working man with small sales. Qin didn't believe him, deciding that the guy just didn't want to share the supplier's contacts with him. He decided to sever all ties with him, chasing him out of the market, depriving him of a place to do business. Not wanting to start a conflict, the guy agreed to leave, but after the lease expired for the place. Freaking out, Qin hurriedly removed himself, not wanting to see him here again. Yuifeng expected this moment to come, but he didn't think it would be so soon. At that moment, he thought of a way to earn some money. Finished with the noodles, he headed to the payphone to call his trusted comrade Shu. Promising to pay tomorrow morning, he asked me to help him buy a batch of flared jeans. After agreeing to deliver 110 pairs of flared jeans, he hung up the phone and walked away. Cho Yuifeng was confident that if he could sell all of his supplies, he would make more than 10,000 yuan. Returning to the market to get some jeans to go on another shopping trip, he met an indignant Qin again. Without paying much attention to him, the guy went to peddle fancy clashing jeans along the alley. A very familiar girl was walking towards him. Walking closer, he met Xiaodo's gaze. As he leveled himself with her and said hello, he simply walked past without lingering for a second. Feeling something inside, the girl turned around and looked after the young man who was leaving. The next morning, Shu waited for Cho Yuifeng at his house, busily preparing food. When he heard a knock on the door, he stopped all cooking processes and hurried to open it. After saying hello, he invited him to come inside and make himself at home. But the guy was more interested in the jeans he'd actually come for than anything else. Shu pointed him to the neatly stacked stacks of clashing jeans in the corner of the room. Before Yuifeng arrived, Shu was busy cooking, so he offered to eat with him. Seeing the variety of dishes on the table, Yuifeng thought that he should treat him somehow too. After receiving such a sudden large order, Shu wondered why he needed so many jeans. The guy told him about the jealous people trying to find out from him even about his supplier. It was obvious to him that others would want to make money too. Hearing about the high demand, Shu was curious about how much he earned from the sales. Trying to come up with an approximate amount in his mind, Yuifeng voiced a figure of 10 and something thousand. The interlocutor was so shocked that he even shrieked in surprise, forgetting about food. After learning that he was selling a pair for 110 yuan, Shu couldn't believe that people were buying them for so much. Yuifeng explained that nowadays business is booming in Zhehe. Accordingly, people have money and spend it on expensive things. After that, he handed Shu a 5,000 yuan check for the payment for the clash jeans and stood up from the table. Upon opening the check, the guy found that there was a larger amount than he had spent on the purchase of goods. Shu pointed out an error on the check, which showed 5,000 instead of the 4,950 spent. As he left, Cho Yuifeng told him to keep this 50 yuan for himself as a delivery fee. The protagonist got on a train and set off with a new batch of clashing jeans to a new retail outlet. For today's sale of the latest batch of sought-after jeans, he chose Jadi Park. Girls who didn't have time to buy clashing jeans at the night market were immediately interested in the offer. The girls were surprised that even on sale, the jeans still cost 110 yuan per pair. Cho Yuifeng explained to them that this was the last batch, and he would not sell them again in Zhehe. But it still seemed too expensive to the girls, and they were left wondering if they should buy the jeans. Without paying much attention to them, the guy continued to solicit potential customers. The sale lasted until the wee hours of the morning, and only the morning sun forced the guy to take a break. Deciding to grab a bite to eat, the protagonist sat down on the curb and began to consider his future strategy. Because of the competition, his sales have dropped fourfold. It seems that other merchants have also started selling Klesch jeans. Even a price cut won't save his reputation, so he needs to sell everything before it's too late. Meanwhile, elsewhere, 4 friends were having fun playing board games. Jia Pepe got bored. She didn't want to play anymore and decided to do her makeup. Shen Zijian noticed that her friend Xiaodo was somehow pale and droopy today. Thinking that she might have something wrong, the girl revealed that Liu Rui wants to go on a date with her, surprising her friend with his straightforwardness. But Xiaodo was not happy about it in the slightest, as she felt awkward and uncomfortable being around him. After convincing her friend that he was still better than her ex-husband, she suggested we all go for a walk together. On the street, a mischievous vendor was luring everyone to his final sale of imported Klesch jeans. After gathering his thoughts, Cho Yufeng decided to proceed and sell out as soon as possible. Seeing a street vendor, Liu Rui asked the price, deciding to buy 1 pair of flared jeans from him. After making the purchase, he traveled onward and saw Xiaodo and his friends walking towards him. After introducing himself to everyone as Xiaodo's friend, he immediately said hello. Zijian liked the guy. She appreciated that he personally came to her house to pick up her friend. It was a surprise to Liu Rui that her family was so successful, for as far as he knew, this was housing for the rich, or the blatant. Since the friends were going for a walk but met him unexpectedly, Zijian decided not to disturb the young people and left them alone. Liu Rui didn't mind meeting the rest of the guys, so he suggested that we all go together to make it more fun. The girl agreed, but suddenly she heard a familiar voice shouting loudly throughout the neighborhood about the sale. It was unexpected for her to see Cho Yufeng here instead of the usual night market. Liu Rui had heard that he had been here for a few days, which he hurriedly informed his new acquaintance. After a second, it began to reach the young man that Xiaodo's ex-husband's name was also Xiaodo's name. Looking at the girl, he saw that her gaze was fixed on that guy selling clashing jeans. Liu Rui didn't like it, but the girl couldn't understand what she had done wrong and why she wasn't allowed to look at him. Feeling the atmosphere heating up, Zijian hurriedly changed the subject and suggested going to the store. When everyone started walking forward, Xiaodo turned around to look at Cho Yufeng, which did not go unnoticed by Liu Rui. He then began to shout in a commanding tone at Xiaodo, forcing her to finally make a choice. Would she go with them or not? The girl did not like this attitude towards him and refused to go anywhere with him. In raised tones, she told the guy that it was none of his business, at which point Cho Yufeng was attracted by the shouting from outside. In agony, Liu Rui revealed that he wouldn't willingly go on a date with an ordinary librarian. He did it because of her father. Hearing that the situation was getting worse, Yufeng suddenly called out to Xiaodo, beckoning her to come over. Without a second's hesitation, the girl embarrassedly responded to the invitation and approached him. Slipping his green merchant's belt bag into her hands, he asked her to put it on herself. Though she felt awkward and the request seemed strange to her, she didn't refuse him. A satisfied Cho Yufeng continued the sale, with his ex-wife standing modestly aside. Liu Rui only glared irritably at them, feeling that he was about to boil over with anger. The man was unwilling to put up with being traded for a poor former man. Liu Rui was scattered with insults, not forgetting to mention the guy's meager earnings of 2 yuan, saying that Soyato deserved a poor life. Determined not to miss the opportunity to suppress his pity, Yufeng began asking to buy jeans from him. The women standing nearby did not appreciate the mockery of a simple merchant and began to praise his hard work. They pounced on Liu Rui with an interrogation about what kind of shitty company encouraged such behavior, causing him to become confused. Deciding to support the young man's business, the first woman bought a pair of flared jeans from him. The second woman decided to keep up with her too, and bought 2 whole pairs of trendy jeans. Cho Yufeng was touched by the kind aunt's act, and thanked them wholeheartedly, almost crying. The women were pleased with the quality of the Klesch jeans and the young man's diligence. After realizing that the trick worked, he decided to continue to press the sting with his small income to increase sales. Slowly, the rest of the people started converging on the sale as well, having heard from the aunties that they were selling even cheaper than cost price here. Jujun and Zhang Zijue were surprised, but they still doubted Yufeng's diligence. They decided not to linger here any longer and head back home to Pei. The sun had gone below the horizon. The tired residents returned to their homes, eager to get some rest. At the end of the working day, the guy decided to do a count of the remaining goods, and the girl meekly watched him. Today he managed to sell 42 pairs of jeans, which was not a bad result. Since it was already getting dark, he offered Xiaodo to walk her home, and the girl didn't mind. The guy was carrying a rack of leftover jeans, and she silently followed him down the alley. Suddenly she decided to explain today's situation by saying that she was forced to go on a date with that guy. Without reacting in any particular way, Cho Yufeng asked what she herself thought of that guy. But the girl only replied that she didn't want her parents to worry, so she agreed to their terms. After listening, the guy didn't say anything to her on that, but only said goodbye, walking her home. At home, her mother was waiting for her as usual, asking about her date with Liu Rui, but she did not tell her what had happened so as not to alarm her. Walking into the room, she noticed that her brother, Jiang Mingming, was also home this time. He had just come in to discuss some business with his father, so she didn't bother them and just went to bed. He informed his father that some guy in the night market was selling jeans for 110 yuan, even though their purchase price was 45 yuan. Jiang Mingming didn't want to miss this opportunity. After all, even the Wenwen store had started selling them. My father was shocked at such a markup in price, but doubted if he could sell them for that much. He argued that the market and park sales are very large despite the inflated price. The guy kept pressing his father, asking him to lend him 5,000, promising to pay him back double that amount in a month. He reasoned that the market was changing rapidly, and they might miss an opportunity. Breaking the long silence, his father reluctantly agreed to give him money, but only one last time. Jiang Mingming rejoiced, promising to earn a lot of money and provide his father with a luxurious pension. The father only asked her not to give him more trouble as a daughter, for they had already incurred too many financial losses. The son was outraged after all. He earns money for the family, and there is no way Xiaodo can repay the money spent by her ex. The next morning, Qian Jinlai rushed to the high-end clothing store in the mall. Walking into the office of his boss, he immediately inquired about a supply of skinny jeans. Wu Zhixiang assured him that one could not worry about the supply. Although they sold for 45 yuan per pair in Guanhai, he would sell at a different price. The boy tensed with the ignorance of what the final price might end up being, and he waited with dread for the answer. But the worries were in vain. The boss only announced the amount of 41. Qian Jinlai was delighted to hear this, because he had managed to get the jeans for cheap, which meant that he would be able to earn more money. Since all the outlets want to get their hands on these jeans, Qian Jinlai decided to clarify. Would he sell them to them as well? Wu Zhixiang replied that he would sell to others for 45 and even 50 yuan. Qian Jinlai exhaled a sigh of relief, having secured such good support from his superior. He decided to fight his competitors by lowering the price, even if they were sold at cost price for 45 yuan. He could sell for 44 yuan. He was undaunted by the certainty of his superiority in this war of prices. He was delighted with his genius. Wu Zhixiang silently watched the smug young man from the side, waiting for him to calm down. The kid couldn't wait to get down to business. He asked when he could finally get the goods. The boss told him to be patient for a couple days. Soon he would be the first in Jihei to receive the goods. The sunlight enveloped Jiadi Park, but there weren't many people. Therefore, trade was not going well. Chou Yuifeng was already thinking of returning to the mall due to the lack of customers. As he gathered his things and prepared to leave, the guy caught the attention of the girls passing by. The female customers who approached recognized him as a seller from the night market, and were very happy that they were able to catch him. After quickly deciding on the right size, they bought 2 pairs of skinny jeans from him. The guy realized that he would still manage to sell something here and decided to stay in the same place for a while. Taking the loudspeaker, he continued to urge shoppers to the sale, which had 2 days to go. At this moment, Xiaodo was walking in the building across the street on a work errand, her attention caught by the commotion outside. Looking out the window, she noticed Chou Yuifeng, still selling his clashing jeans. The girl's cheeks began to burn at the sight of her ex-husband, and for a while she stood there looking at the young man. The doors of the mall were already open to shoppers, and many stores were in full operation. A lot of people wondered if the clashing jeans were brought into the Wenwen store. But after hearing a negative answer, frustrated customers would leave to look for other stores. Xue Wenwen was angry because Jiang Mingming hadn't arrived yet and they were losing potential customers. In the same second, a panting guy appeared on the horizon, running with all his legs to meet her. The angry girl showered him with questions about the deal and where he'd been staying so long. Sweating from the rush, Jiang Mingming explained to her that he was delayed because he was getting information about supplies through connections, and told her about the price increase. Handing him the towel, she reproached him that he could have asked his father for money sooner. He told her that he had bought 100 pairs of flared jeans for 5,000 yuan in an attempt to clean himself up. Wenwen was anxious to know when the delivery of the clash jeans would arrive, to which she received the answer: the day after tomorrow, either at night or in the afternoon. She was beyond thrilled with the news, not believing that they would be able to sell them in 3 days. Doing some quick calculations, she found out that they could earn a month's salary just from selling 2 pairs of jeans. Encouraged by his future wealth, Jiang Mingming decided to quit his job in the future and work for Wenwen. At the same time, empty clothes hangers rang out at Jiadi Park, the site of the morning sale. A satisfied Chou Yufeng had never imagined that the jeans would be sorted out so quickly. Wasting no time or opportunity to make more money, he decided to call Xu again. He was interested in the current situation on the wholesale market. In particular, whether the purchase price of jeans with a clash had been raised. The guy informed him that the price for the jeans had gone up to 50 yuan per pair due to the high demand. Hearing that Cho Yuifeng was interested in the new batch, Shu asked how much he had already sold. Yuifeng proudly replied that he was able to sell out the entire supply in a few days. There was a dumbfounded shriek on the other end, for he was able to earn 10,000 yuan from the sale. But if the price went up, it meant the jeans were already being resold by others. The guy wasn't going to take a new batch. He said not everyone will be able to compete with the big companies in a price war. Promising to call another time, he hung up and ran about his business, coming up with another plan. After buying a pack of cigarettes, Cho Yuifeng returned to the night market, heading towards the manager. Abstracting himself from the world, Qin Yigu was enjoying the evening air with a cup of coffee, whistling songs to himself. The guy's sudden appearance startled him slightly, bringing him down to earth, bringing him back to reality. Taking a draft, filling all the space around him with bitter smog, he asked about the purpose of his visit. Cho Yuifeng handed him a pack of cigarettes as a presentation, putting the young man in a stupor. Qin suspected something. It wasn't like he could just come to visit him like an old friend. The guy awkwardly asked his permission to set up a market stall in the square, since he had no one else to turn to. Scoffing, Manager Qin replied that the place was already reserved for the unemployed people who occupied it in advance. Qin said that the guy didn't fit that criteria and should have thought about it earlier. Expecting rejection, Cho Yufen came prepared and took the bait, promising to share information about his supplier. After getting hooked and visualizing the future Golden Mountains, Qin immediately offered his cooperation. He couldn't believe that Klesch jeans were bought for 50 yuan a pair and sold for 110 yuan. This was not mental money in the current times. He was already eager to personally call the supplier, but Cho Yufeng was not so simple. He promised to give the number under one condition. Preparing himself for the worst condition of his life, the interlocutor waited with dread for the young man's answer. Qin's fears were not confirmed. The guy only requested a big outlet for half a year, for which he got approval. Qin Yigu already had such a place in mind and was happy to offer the area they were in at the moment. Cho Yuifeng was satisfied with this option, and before he could thank the manager, he turned around and ran away. Before he was even remotely far away, he started dialing the supplier's number on the run, wanting to start reselling as soon as possible. The next morning, the protagonist went to the post office to give the latest news to his family. Taking a pen and a sheet of paper, he began to write about his life, assuring them that he was doing well. He told his family about his life in Zhihai, congratulating Yuna on finishing her exams and going to university. He never gave up hope that soon they would go to live with him and they would see each other again. Finished at the post office, he went about his business with a slightly downcast mood. Cho Yufen pondered the housing problems they would have to face if the family arrived. It was necessary to decide whether to rent or buy housing. If to buy, then in what neighborhood and how to do it more profitable. To top it all off, the issue of changing schools for Yu Yue and baby Zheng will still need to be resolved. The guy decided to call Kong Jinzhou with the hope that the latter would help him resolve the matter out of old friendship. Director Kong was happy to hear from him and asked how he was doing in Zhihai. After announcing his return to Lingshui in a couple days to take care of some business, Yuifeng offered to bring him something as a gift. Jinzhou refused and instead invited him to a restaurant as payment for helping him that time. Yuifeng also thanked him for the compensation for his parents' deaths. The money had helped his family a lot. Finishing their exchange of thanks, they agreed to call each other upon the guy's arrival in Lingshui. Ending the conversation on a good note, the men said goodbye and the hero hung up the phone. Cho Yuifeng decided to talk to him about transferring the children to another school. Not for thanks, of course. Now all that's left is to buy a little present. The fast train arrived at the station in Lingshui, bringing back former memories of home. After picking up full bags of goodies for his family, the boy headed home through the familiar streets. As he approached the house in the distance, he saw the kids frolicking in the yard, happily living their childhood. Calling little Zheng over, he waved his hand, showing him a full bag of various sweets. The boy was overjoyed at his brother's arrival and ran to meet him, leaving his friend planted. When he saw the bag of sweets, he couldn't believe his eyes. He wanted to eat them all at once. Not holding back and doing a bag revision, he pulled out a couple goodies for a snack and they headed home together. Before he even got home, Zheng started excitedly shouting about his brother's return. The guys entered the house and the younger one loudly announced to the girls that Cho Yuifeng had arrived. The girls were pleasantly surprised by his sudden visit. They had already missed him. Yufeng managed to arrive before his letter reached them, so it turned out to be an unexpected reunion. Everyone was hungry, so they set about preparing lunch, putting off the conversation while little Zheng enjoyed the candy. Having prepared many goodies and filled the entire table with food, the family sat down to eat dinner together for the first time in a long time. Because of Yuna's departure for university, his brother was scared to leave the others here alone. He suggested that they too transfer to a school in Zhihai, so they could be together and support each other. Little Zheng and Cho Yuyue were fine with moving to the big city and agreed to his proposal. Yuna thought that transferring to another school was difficult, but her brother promised to talk to Kang Jinjong about it. Yui Feng's next destination was precisely the Lin Shui steel factory. After having a good time with his family, he went to meet Mr. Khan, deciding to wait outside for the end of his work shift. Looking around the factory grounds, time flew by and soon the workers began to leave. Seeing Kang Jinjong walking, Cho Yufeng called out to him, catching the tired man's attention. After refusing Director Kang's offer of a snack, the hero handed him souvenirs brought personally from Zhehai. The afternoon sun was too blinding. It was unbearable to be outside for long. Once in his office, Yufen said he planned to move the boys to a new school in Zhehai. Taking an envelope of money out of his pocket, he asked Mr. Khan to assist him in the matter to the best of his ability. Khan Jinsong felt embarrassed at the sight of such money and tried to refuse it. Guy explained that with Yuna leaving for Zhehai, there would be no one to take care of the younger ones. A transfer to another school was simply necessary. Cho Yufeng needed help, but Jinzhou promised to help him with the translation at no cost. The guy still persisted and tried to shove the envelope of money right into his hands. Director Khan threatened that if he continued to insist on payment, he would not help him at all. Cho Yufeng was grateful for the help and said that he could always rely on him in the future. Without wasting any time, he bid farewell to Kang Jinchong and traveled onward to have time to sort out all the plans he had in mind. Walking down the street, he was surprised at how many people were trying to resell the flared jeans. In the middle of the workday, there was a restless shout in the mall. Someone was running madly. The anxious girl rushed through the store, trying not to run over people who got in her way. Dealing with the shipment of Clash jeans, Wenwen didn't understand what had happened or where this sudden panic was coming from. Nearly knocking down the display case in front of her, the girl informed her that the floor above, Jinlai was also selling clashing jeans. This was not news to Wenwen, as the jeans are so popular that they are sold throughout the mall. However, the girl told her that he was selling them cheaper than the others, at 44 yuan a pair. Neither Wenwen nor Jiang Mingming could believe their ears. No one had such a low price. Mingming didn't think it was logical to sell them for 44 yuan. The price per pair from the supplier was 45 yuan. It turns out Jinlai is working at a disadvantage. The girl shared the thoughts of other sellers, although the brand and quality is the same, but he sells jeans cheaper. Just at that moment, as if to mock them, a competitor's commercial blared from the top floor. Jiang Mingming decided to go and check in person to see what the suspiciously low-priced jeans from the manufacturer were all about. Cho Yuifeng left Lingshui and returned back to the market, having finished with all the business in the city. Upon hearing of his return, Qin Yigu hurried to the square and called out to him from behind. He decided to share the news that he had received his 50 pairs of flared jeans. For lack of the necessary amount, he had to borrow money from different acquaintances. Qin Yigu asked Yu Feng to share his experience and teach him how to sell with the same success he had had. The guy didn't mind promoting his knowledge to the masses and came up with one little trick. Cho told him to go to his old spot in the square and pretend to be his boss to gain people's trust. Evening came and the aisles between the counters were filled with shoppers looking for any new products. In anticipation of the Golden Mountains, Qin gathered his courage and began to vigorously promote his sale. He repeated his predecessor's slogan word for word, just as Cho Yufeng had taught him. A girl passing by was surprised at the new salesman, but the guy explained to her that he was the boss of the employee who had quit and was now selling personally. Having decided on the size of the girl, was about to buy a pair of jeans for 110 yuan. Qin was beyond excited. Thanks to Cho Yufeng's hints, he had managed to lure the first customer from the first few seconds. As it turned out, the man got excited early when he heard the price another woman passing by spoiled this beautiful moment for him. After witnessing a blatant case of fraud, she told the girl not to buy anything from this merchant. The vendor resented such accusations against him. He was not doing anything forbidden. But the woman reasoned that in the mall, the exact same pair of Klesch jeans sell for 44 yuan per pair. The girl who almost bought the overpriced pants was shocked that she was about to be spent. Qin Yigu accused the lady of slander and said he would give his darlings away if it turned out to be true. He didn't expect the next moment to be the woman showing off her newly purchased pair of jeans at the mall. The deceived girl couldn't contain her emotions. Both of those jeans looked identical except for the price. She accused him of cheating, which set off a chain reaction from other bystanders. The whole market began to accuse Yigu of cheating, not stinting on not particularly flattering remarks against him. Cho Yuifeng was watching everything from the roof of a nearby building, waiting to see how this guy's trade would end. He assumed that the one who sells jeans for 44 yuan has found a person higher up in ability, and buys them cheaper than everyone else, enabling him to put a lower price without incurring a loss. Qin couldn't believe his eyes. His business had collapsed before he could even bring in his first income. Behind the entire crowd, Xiaodo appeared, coming to the shouts of the outraged people. But this time there was some other guy instead of Cho Yuifeng, so she immediately hurriedly left. Having managed to be upset that he wasn't there, suddenly she heard a painfully familiar voice. Behind the girl's back stood the one she was hoping to see, Yufen, waving her hand vigorously. Xiaodo immediately turned around and went to meet him. And whatever she said, in her heart she was happy for him. It wasn't hard for the guy to guess that she could only come back so late from work, and the girl confirmed it. When he approached her and looked into her eyes with awe, he asked her if she was busy and offered her a walk. Having received her consent, the couple set off under the bright light of a large and beautiful moon. Noticing the girl's anxious silence, he inquired if anything was wrong with her. The girl's thoughts were clogged with the imposed choice her parents had chosen for her. Cho Yufeng decided to tell her about his sister and her academic success, not forgetting to proudly mention his enrollment in Zhehai University. He continued to babble on about Guanghai, known for things of the latest fashion, but the girl was still silent as well, lowering her gaze. Talking about his trip to Lishnui, he could no longer ignore Xiaodo's strange behavior. A shiver ran through Xiaodo's body, and she abruptly turned towards him as if she couldn't hold back any longer. She expressed to him her worries, for she thought he was gone forever, and she would never be able to see him again. The guy hadn't expected her to react this way to his departure, thinking she wasn't interested in him anymore. Grabbing her hand, he pulled the surprised girl behind him as if trying to drag her into the unknown. They continued to run forward, but Xiaodo called out to him, unable to continue following him. She was tired and couldn't run anymore. She needed to catch her breath and rest. Cho Yuifeng caustically looked into her eyes, confusing her for a moment like a sly fox. Taking advantage of the moment and her shocked state, he suddenly enclosed the girl in a strong, tender embrace. His beloved didn't fight back. She missed him so much that she unconsciously returned his embrace. Silently pressed against each other, the couple enjoyed the moment in the dim light of the lantern, wishing that the moment would never end. Cho Yufeng was concerned about the girl's condition, thinking that her parents were once again forcing her to do things she didn't want to do by manipulating her. Xiaodo didn't answer him, but from her detached gaze it was clear without words. Determined to cheer her up, the hero told her that he had earned 10,000 yuan from the sales of flared jeans. The girl couldn't believe it. She had thought all this time that he was only earning a few feng. Cho Yufeng only laughed from Xiaodo's silly thoughts and said that it was true. He was actually able to earn a good amount of money these days. The girl was genuinely happy for him and offered to celebrate such a success at her expense. She had just received her paycheck and would like to treat him. Yufen interrupted her by saying that now he could buy an apartment here, and she wouldn't have to live in poverty like before. He knew it would be hard for her to trust him again, admitting that he had treated her badly in the past, but he promised that he had changed and it wouldn't happen again. Looking her straight in the eye, he asked her to marry him, promising to value her more than ever, the way she truly deserved. The girl's face immediately blushed. Her heart was awakened, her feelings for her ex-husband still not extinguished. She couldn't give an answer right now if she wanted to. Her family was already full of problems because of him, so she needed time. Cho Yuifeng was well aware of the position he had put her in, so he didn't rush Xiaodo and walked her home. Saying goodbye to the young man and entering the house, the girl heard some shouting coming from the main room. At this moment, his father was reprimanding Jiang Mingming for blowing the 5,000 yuan he had borrowed from him for a crazy business plan. Wenwen also hurriedly explained herself before her father did anything wrong in a fit of anger. She revealed that their impeccable plans were thwarted by Qian Jinlai, who found the goods at a cheaper purchase price and sold the jeans for 44 yuan. The son tried to justify himself by saying that this is a common occurrence in the market, and this rascal just wants to draw attention to himself. Secretly questioning his workers, Wenwen found out that he didn't have much goods and would soon raise the price to 110 yuan. Minmin decided to suspend trading for now and resume when the price soars again. His father was getting a little tired of these two, and he regretted 100 times that he had agreed to their adventure again. Tired of listening to pathetic excuses, he told them to get a steady job, not slackers, and just walked away. Ming Ming was furious. They weren't the only ones in the market-invested Clash jeans. It will be easier to deal with Qian Jinlai collectively. The sun was rising over the horizon, welcoming a new day, heralding many important things to do. Due to his comrade's absence at the business meeting, Shu called to clarify why Yuifeng did not come to Guanghai, postponing his arrival, promising to come tomorrow. The guy once again clarified exactly where the man worked and promised to meet him at the office of the Guanghai International Trading Company. On the day of his arrival, Cho Yuifeng rushed to the meeting, buying some fruit as an apology for his tardiness. After reaching the trading company he needed, he apologized to Shu for not being able to come earlier due to important business. Having settled in a comfortable office, the man asked about the young man's further plans, remembering that he would no longer sell clashing jeans. Coming from far away, he began to tell about the exhibition at the Jingdu 3rd Transport Wheel in September 1979. Shu remembered about the exhibition at the Agricultural Exhibition Center, which was not at all about the agricultural industry. There were expensive items like quartz watches and mountain bikes, he said. He said that since then there have been many different exhibitions that do not conform to conventional norms. Yuifen replied that in 1989, two different companies held a joint toy exhibition. Turns out Shu was on it at the time and said the toys were popular, even though they weren't big. As if looking into the future, the fellow informed him that the exhibition would be repeated in the next 1984th year. Shu was surprised by his confident assertion and asked again if that was really the case. Caught in an embarrassing situation, Cho Yufeng only laughed and said that it was just his guess. However, if his memory serves him well, the exhibitions were originally held to sell off leftover merchandise. This was practiced only until the end of the 80s, for soon the concept of exhibitions changed radically. He recalled that soon expensive products started to appear and sales went down. People wanted something new, so Clash jeans became a very popular novelty. Cho Yufeng suggested to a comrade that he try to organize his own exhibition of goods in the night market. Shuya was interested in the details, as there are always many pitfalls and difficulties in such cases. The guy suggested that with his connections things would be much easier. You could try to convince the factories to put their goods on display. He was sure that the factories would not neglect the opportunity to make some extra money, given the solvency of the wealthy neighborhood in Zhehe. Yufeng had no doubt if his plan worked and the factories agreed to participate, it would be easier to negotiate with the government and everyone would benefit. Hearing about the opportunity to earn money, Shu demanded details, because it's not every day someone comes to you with such an offer. Yufeng said they will order unsold clothes from factories and try to sell them based on their popularity. Shu didn't quite understand him, how one could make money on a product that one couldn't even sell before. The guy went on to explain that although they would be selling in conjunction with the factories, it would be other types of goods, which would help them avoid competition. They will provide the factories with free sales space, and thus take advantage of their popularity to sell their own goods. Shu was delighted with the young strategist's flawless plan. It sounded quite easy and simple in words. Cho Yufeng proposed to split the profits between them and the factories. Even if they lost money, they would only suffer half of the loss. The comrade was itching to dive headfirst into it all, so he poured them some tea and they sat down to discuss it. To begin with, the young man had to prepare a list with the best product categories for them, and afterward contact the factories for contracts. His journey in the mall business started by selling women's clothing. In that case, he decided to emphasize on it and keep it as a priority. After getting on their bicycles, they went to Lao She, an honest and straightforward man, one of the best factory managers according to Shu. Soon, they reached their first destination, deciding to start with a more favorable factory that would surely not fail. Their destination turned out to be a Toy Star factory, and it was the perfect solution in Cho Yufeng's opinion. There will be no rivalry between factories selling women's clothing and toys, but it will attract the necessary customers. Shu told him that in the year 1982, he had a contract signed with a factory and developed a batch of toys in the shape of a Monkey King, but the sales didn't go through. Despite the large investment, foreign companies refused to buy the goods, and he was forced to cancel the contract with Xiaoxing Toy Factory and Shijigang. Yufeng tried his best to support his comrade. After all, one couldn't be 100% sure of a successful deal in any business. He attributed the failure to the lack of cultural exchange between the countries. Foreign companies simply don't understand their culture. He said overseas factories won't buy something they can't make money on after all the spending on fees and transportation. Yufeng knew that the manufacturing industry wasn't too developed yet. It would be foolish to export a toy unknown to others. Finding Lao Shi's office within the factory, Shu knocked on the door, summoning his acquaintance for a conversation. Quick footsteps were heard on the other side of the door and a panting male voice sounded. Lao Shu recognized the old acquaintance and was happy to see him, but his visit seemed quite unexpected. Shu immediately introduced Cho Yufeng as the person in charge of Jiangshui Clothing Factory. Lao Shi hospitably invited them to go inside, not understanding what his colleagues from the other factory wanted from him. After offering tea to the guests, he went to the heart of the matter, asking for clarification. Introducing himself as the sales manager of Jiangshui Garment Factory, Cho Yufeng struck up a conversation about the Zhehe Expo. The interlocutor found the question surprising. He did not understand what the exhibition had to do with trade. Manager Cho proposed the cooperation of several toy factories with sales problems to eliminate stale goods and increase revenue. Lao Shu found the proposal interesting and he wanted to hear more details. However, he was confused by the fact that the exhibition would be for both toys and clothing, which has nothing to do with each other. Cho Yufeng had a logical explanation for this. After all, their clothes would be meant for children, as well as, in fact, the toys themselves. The man had heard of holding exhibitions before, but only in big cities like Shanghai or Kyoto. It would be strange to hold an exhibition in Zhehe. But the guy was counting on the fact that no one had held them in Zhehe before, and it would be a novelty to the residents. Yufeng offered the cooperation of 5 toy factories and their clothing factory, but would any of the factories be confident that they could sell their goods in Kyoto? Lao Shu found it difficult to answer. In business, you can never be 100% sure of anything. Manager Chow went on to say that none of them can guarantee it, not even himself. He argued that the stagnation in the sale of goods is solely due to the unwillingness of sellers to sell them. Lao Shu agreed that because other merchants' toys in big cities are much better, consumers have no reason to buy them. Hence, he had a very logical question. Would Yufeng be able to guarantee them sales in Zhehai? The young man who had lived there all his life knew about the market situation. Besides, Zhehai was now a major energy city, so its population had a high ability to pay. He wanted to continue his monologue, but interrupted to take a sip of tea, pulling the intrigue, allowing his interlocutor to become even more interested. But Lao Shu couldn't stand this kind of heat of passion. He was eager to continue. The offer was tempting, but the man was afraid to take the risk without having certainty of the outcome, their human and material resources already suffering for a long time. Manager Cho had promised him that sales manager Shu would handle all the organizational matters, and he had nothing to worry about. He assured him that the joint work of all the factories would lead to a common solution and profit. Although he agreed with his statement, a sliver of doubt still settled in Liao Shi's mind. With no other choice, Chow decided to push on the weak spot, saying they should help their employees take care of families in times of need. The man figured that if half of the Monkey King's toys were sold, he could pay off all the wage arrears. After thinking it over carefully and deciding it was best for everyone, he eventually agreed. After coming to a mutual decision, he relied on Manager Chow and they sealed the deal with a big handshake. Shu openly admired Yui Feng's gift of persuasion and business management. He definitely didn't miscalculate agreeing to this venture. Staying on topic, he decided to take a moment to clear up a long-standing toy situation between him and Mr. Shea. However, Mr. Shea didn't see this as a problem. It was a long time ago, and he himself was to blame for the failure of toy sales. Happy that everything was resolved in the best way possible, Shu invited Liao Shu to his place to discuss the rest of the matters. After they separated, Cho Yufeng and Shu went around to the rest of the toy factories and made agreements to hold a joint exhibition. Today was Shen Zijian's birthday, to which she invited her close friends. All the guests gathered around the festive table, waiting for the late Shi Jiang. The guy was giving a ride to 2 foreigners, so he apologized for the delay at work. The birthday girl informed him that they had just arrived as well, so he didn't keep them waiting. Zhu Jun just remembered that Liang Liang was on the lookout for a job, and wondered if he had managed to find something suitable. Still being unemployed, Liang felt embarrassed. If he failed, he wouldn't want to go back to miserable Lingshui. The others who had left had already managed to find a steady income. Jun remembered that Cho Yufeng had just recently returned back to Lingshui, so he hadn't been seen behind the sales. His friends thought he had done the right thing. A man like him could not have survived in the big city. Zijian was glad that he would no longer bother and harass her friend who had already suffered enough from him. Xiaoda wasn't sure if she should do that, but she wanted to intervene in the conversation and talk about herself and her ex-husband, but it was as if the people around her didn't notice her. Not missing the opportunity to once again make Cho Yufeng look like a terrible person, Jia Peipei told everyone that he dared to cheat even his classmates. He dared to sell them a pair of jeans for 110 yuan, even though the exact same jeans are sold at the mall for only 44 yuan. Shen Zijian confirmed her friend's words, saying that she had personally bought the clashing jeans for 44 yuan at their actual cost price. The mood of Xiaodo sitting next to her began to deteriorate. Even the foolish Li Dekai was able to calculate that Yufeng was able to make a lot of money by raising the price by 65 yuan. Listening to the discussions of his new friends, Xu Jiang himself had already assumed that such a thing was quite possible if it was indeed true. But Zhu Jun decided that the guys had simply overestimated this fool. If he had made a lot of money, why would he go back to Lingshui? Xiaodo got even more angry after he said that Yui Feng was just a simple worker earning a couple of Fing Yuan per sale. Everyone listened attentively to Jun's version of the story that the underseller was giving most of the money to his boss. The final inference was that he kept thinking that Might jeans sold for 110 yuan a pair. After his words, the restaurant hall erupted in wild laughter, for nothing brings friends together like mocking a common enemy. However, everyone at the table shared their point of view. Unexpectedly, at this moment, Xiaodo stood up from her seat. The girl no longer intended to sit quietly and listen to her ex-boyfriend's bullying. Shen Zijian was surprised by her friend's behavior. Worried that something was wrong with her, she asked again if everything was all right. However, this was clearly not the answer she had expected from her. The news that she was going to remarry Cho Yufeng hit them like snow in the middle of summer. The girl threatened that if they didn't stop talking about her lover like that, they wouldn't invite her anywhere else. Her words shocked everyone sitting at the festive table. Everyone opened their mouths, and no one could even drop a word. The first to break the silence was naturally Shen Zijian. As Xiaodo's best friend, she couldn't believe that the girl was about to step on the same rake again. But Xiaodo was firm and resolute in her choice. She still loved him and wanted to be with him, in particular to become his wife. No one interfered with the girl's conversation. Zijan called her friend crazy since she had forgotten how he had beaten her in the past. She didn't understand Xiaodo's desire to go back to someone who spent all day gambling and sleeping around. Why go back to a man she had struggled to get a divorce from? But the girl in love wanted to believe that he had changed and was no longer the same. She kept saying this while remembering how Cho Yuifeng was during the moments the two of them spent together. Zijan couldn't listen to this ravings of a madwoman anymore. She decided to tell her friend everything she thought. She asked her friend to remember crying in her lap after the beating, how the bastard had put her mother in the hospital with physical bruises. Since she had forgotten about all the things he had done and let go of the offense, in Zijan's eyes, the girl was just a fool. In an attempt to fix Xiaodo's personal life, a friend introduced her to a cab driver, a handsome guy named Xu Jiang. But what kind of gratitude did she get in return? She recalled that every time they had lunch together, the girl had a gloomy and downcast look. Xiaodo was hurt to hear her friend say that. But the last straw was Zijan's words that she was only worthy of a loser like Cho Yufeng, not intending to endure any more insults to either her or her lover. Xiaodo picked up her purse and left the party. Zhu Jun didn't miss the chance to shout back at her about how stupid she was. If Zijan hadn't intervened last time, he definitely wouldn't have let Yui Feng escape. He was sure that it was that situation that had influenced her behavior. The atmosphere in the hall seemed very tense. Liang was one of the first to decide to still go see how Xiaodo was doing, leaving the others to enjoy the festive meal. After deciding that it was all Xiaodo's fault, Zhu Jun was also fine with finally eating. After all, it was no reason to cancel a holiday, especially a birthday party. However, Zijan was so angry that she no longer cared about the celebration and yelled at the young man, asking him to stay away from her. The girl turned around and walked away, leaving Zhu Jun and the others to make sure no one else got caught in the hot hand. Trying to dilute the situation, Li Daicai still offered the guys to eat without them. They wouldn't be throwing away so much food. Feeling a little guilty, Zhu Jun decided to also go check on the situation of the guys who had left. In the end, the role of rescuing the holiday food fell to the remaining Li Decai, Shijian, and Jia Peipei. The blazing sun and the blue sky made the already difficult journey of the two men even more difficult. Unaware of the drama that was unfolding at the seemingly simple birthday party, Yui Fen tried to push the bike with his last strength. As the rest of his strength began to leave his body, it was Brother Shu's turn to push the bike uphill. There seemed to be no end to their misery. All day long they did just that. They traveled to different factories. And so, finally, after what felt like an eternity, they did make it, and were able to exhale a sigh of relief. In front of the two men was their final target, the Feiyun Toy Factory. It was not until dusk that the young men finished all their business for the day and were returning home. Shu didn't even think that everything would go smoothly and the factories would agree to participate in the exhibition together. Considering that these factories were all doing the same thing, Cho Yufeng was sure that they would have no reason to refuse to benefit from it. However, despite the fact that everything seems so easy and simple, the real test will begin for the guys themselves. Tomorrow they have to go to Jiangshui Garment Factory to resolve the sales arrears from last year, so it's worth going to bed early. After having a good night's sleep and waiting for the first rays of sunrise, the young people went to Jiangshui Clothing Factory. Jiang Dahe didn't know about Department Head Shu and Cho Yufeng's visit to the factory. Otherwise, he would have personally gone to pick them up so they wouldn't have to walk. Wasting no time, Shu introduced one of Zhehai's biggest individual entrepreneurs, whom he had told him about earlier, in the person of his comrade Yufeng. Seeing a very young-looking young man, Mr. Zhang found it hard to believe that he could help them solve their sales arrears problem from the winter. He must be a good expert. The protagonist was flattered by the high opinion of himself and said he had no trouble at all doing it. First, he needed to find out how many unsold garments were left over from the winter at the factory. Doing a rough calculation, Mr. Zhang said there were about 6,000 jackets left in total, of which somewhere around 5,000 were women's jackets. Yui Feng further found out that there were 3 styles of clothes, each costing 8, 9, and 10 yuan respectively. To show them what they were dealing with, Jiang Dai took the young men to the warehouse so they could assess the quality and appearance of the goods, and went to make them tea himself. Moving closer, Yufen began to carefully grope the fabric and inspect the fittings, trying to get a hold of something. With a keen eye, he quickly realized that all the jackets were made of the wrong fabric. No wonder they couldn't sell them. Meanwhile, Zhang Daje made tea and invited Department Head Shu and Manager Cho to come to his office to talk. But Yu Feng was not interested in tea party. He came with the purpose of buying 5,000 pieces of women's clothing specifically. He didn't need the rest. Overjoyed that he could dump almost all the stale goods, Mr. Zhang decided to sell for 7 yuan apiece. Cho Yuifeng was not a fool, and would be able to find a benefit where there was even the slightest chance. With a clear conscience, he stated that it was too expensive. Not expecting such a turn of events, Mr. Zhang seemed even speechless, and stared at Manager Cho with a look of incomprehension in his eyes. waiting to get an explanation. The argument was that Jiangshui Garment Factory mainly sews with dacron, which increases the durability of the garment by several years. In addition to this, Yufan said that because of the increase in cotton production, the country has started to produce enough textiles for everyone. A confused Mr. Jiang continued to hear from Manager Chow about the downsides of these clothes, which especially stood out in contrast to their textiles. According to Cho Yufan, the uncomfortable and not unique clothing was the reason why their sales were low year after year. He then asked Mr. Jiang an unexpected question concerning how many times the number of unsold clothes had increased in the last year compared to the year before. Jiang began to be covered in sweat from nerves, making it difficult to find an answer to the question posed to him. But Chow Yufan seemed to know it all himself, so he continued to press that the dacron situation was getting worse every year, judging by the sales in the summer. Mr. Jiang knew the guy was right, for their sales this summer were down more than 4 times what they were before. The poor man was so suddenly assailed with questions that he even forgot to put his tea on. But now he wanted to know what was the reason. Cho's answer was simple: dacron used to sell well because of overseas companies' understanding of the market, which first inflated the price of the product and then knocked it down, attracting people who wanted to make some profit. Yui Fen emphasized that the most important aspect is that they don't need the product itself. You sell them, and anyone can buy them. He then added that once the benefit is gone for the customer, people stop spending their money. After hearing all this, Mr. Jiang looked like he didn't understand anything about sales at all. As one example, Yui Fen cited a clothing brand that has been in the market for more than 30 years will be shutting down this December. Even department head Shu had not expected such a turn of events. He was as shocked as Jiang. A shiver ran through Mr. Jiang's body at the realization that the guy was right. When the sales of this brand stopped, the flow of goods would be easier. But then the factory would risk bankruptcy due to the increase in unsold clothes. While Jiang was digesting the information he had received and was loaded with thoughts, Yufeng signaled Shu to act. The man stepped in, saying that they had gotten this information from people at the top. He warned Jiang not to spread the word on the matter, for it was not for prying ears. To summarize, Yufeng said that he would not buy clothes at Jiang's price. Instead, he would come year after year and ask the price until it came down. Shu didn't miss the opportunity this time either, telling Mr. Jiang that 5,000 was an impressive number and one should agree. He claimed that when Chow's manager told him he wanted to buy a shipment of dacron clothing, he was the first person he thought of. Jiang was even more hesitant to agree when he heard that there were many other factories in Guanghai that they could buy clothes from in the same way. Unable to withstand the pressure of the 2 young men, Jiang walked over to the table and finally set down the cups of tea with trembling hands. Before accepting the cooperation on their terms, he decided to find out at what price Manager Cho wanted to buy clothes from him. Cho Yufeng, as a person who knew how to surprise, once again over the 2 men in shock, quoting a price of 4 yuan apiece. Mr. Jiang had no idea who he was dealing with. Even so, he could not have guessed that the price would be reduced so much. Even Shu, who was directly cooperating with Yufeng, didn't expect him to suggest such a thing in all seriousness. Yui Fen's argument was that you have to factor in employee wages, machinery maintenance, and rental fees, so the price comes out below cost. For his inability to sell this item at a bargain price, Yu Fen suggested that he minimize his losses at least in this way. Realizing that the guy was right, and he really wouldn't be able to sell all the stale products otherwise, Jiang relented. He agreed to sell 5,000 pieces of clothing to Yui Fen at 4 yuan apiece and asked to be paid at once. Satisfied with his gift of persuasion, Manager Chow happily agreed to make the payment. Shu admired his comrade's bargaining skills. He would never have thought that the situation could be twisted in their favor. Having finalized the transaction, the young men walked out of the factory and went on their way, but Shu was clearly worried about something. He couldn't help but think that in order to buy 5,000 pieces of clothing, they had spent 10,000 yuan, 10 of which he had to shell out from his own pocket. There was no turning back, but to get some peace of mind, Shu decided to ask Yu Fen about their plan. He shared his worries that would they be able to sell all those clothes if the factory couldn't sell them? Yu Feng assured him that there was nothing to worry about. The most important thing for them right now was to get permission for the exhibition from Mr. Wang. Besides, they had already spent the money. Breathing out a sigh of relief, Shu decided to obey his comrade in everything and not to doubt him anymore. After receiving an assignment from Yufeng, Shu went to the Guanghai Trading Company. When he met Mr. Wang, he told him about their desire to organize an exhibition and thanked him on behalf of all the factories. Mr. Wang didn't balk and happily agreed to such an event, making life easier for the boys. Meanwhile, in Zhehai Shopping Center, the fights over the sale of Klek jeans did not subside. However, the sudden change of the advertising banner on the second floor couldn't help but please Wenwen. Looking up, she saw that a competitor had raised the price from 44 to 110 yuan per pair. At this point, the girl who approached asked what the price of the flared jeans in her store was. Zhang Mingming began to serve the customer, informing her that the price for the newest model of Clash jeans was 110 yuan. The girl decided to try bargaining a little and said she was willing to buy them for 100 yuan. Wenwen, who heard this, decided not to miss the chance to make some money, quickly ran up, and asking her not to tell the others, sold the girl's pants for 100 yuan. Pleased that she was able to buy jeans at a small profit, the girl promised to keep her mouth shut. Minmin was thrilled with his first sale and thanked the girl for the purchase. With one sale of jeans in his hands, he had a month's paycheck, and he was filled with emotions that he was in no hurry to hide. Seeing his behavior, Wenwen snorted at him, telling him to keep his voice down before the other customers heard. At this time, in the cozy area of the city in Xiaodo's house, every member of the family was busy doing their own thing. While her mom was busy preparing the main course at the stove, the girl was busy cutting up various vegetables. Hearing a loud knock on the door, the girl's mood immediately changed. She was clearly not happy about the guests. However, Xiaodo's mother was in the opposite mood, and assuming that Liu Rui had come, she asked her daughter to open the door. As she walked to the door, the girl mentally prepared herself to be more open with her parents today. She decided that today would be a good chance to tell her parents before things went too far. Opening the door, she found her best friend Zijan standing with Liu Rui. The girl had not expected to see her today, for after their quarrel at the birthday party, they had not spoken again. Her friend informed her that she had met Liu Rui downstairs completely by accident. She acted as casually as if nothing had happened. Only Xiaodo still hadn't forgotten all the things the girl had said to her that night. All of her words were weighing on her heart. Noticing her friend's downcast mood, Zijan thought that she was not happy to see her. Waving away, Xiaodo invited her unwanted guest to go to the main room. Unlike her daughter, Jiang Xing was happy to see the girl, for she didn't know about their quarrel. Offering Zijan a treat of fruit while she set the table, her mother asked Xiaodo to talk to Liu Rui in the meantime. The girls' fathers knew each other, but Zhang Yongguang had been busy at work lately, so he hadn't been able to see him, so he asked how he was doing. The girl complained that because of the heavy workload at work, she would be lucky if she could see her father even once a week. After chatting a bit about life, everyone moved smoothly to the dining table and started dinner. Mom tried to prepare a variety of dishes to surely please the guests. The first thing Zijan was asked to try was the shrimp. After helping herself to the food, the girl suddenly said that there was something she wanted to tell Uncle Zhang. Xiaodo's father was curious what news the girl decided to share with him. Perhaps it was related to her father. However, with a sly expression on her face, the girl pointed at Xiaodo and said that she treated her like a sister, and she is bothered by the fact that she wants to remarry Qiao Yuifeng, whom she just divorced. The news came down like a huge boulder on Father Xiaodo's head, and he became furious. The girl's mother was stunned by Zijan's words. How could this be true? Smiling wryly, Liu Rui watched the reaction of the girl, who thought that her best friend had come to apologize. Blue in the face with anger, her father barely restrained himself from bursting into anger, but Zijan added that Xiaodo had said it herself on her birthday. Mr. Jiang started shouting at his daughter and demanding an explanation, but the girl only lowered her head silently. At this moment, Liu Rui also decided to approach his father. Strangely enough, he also had a story to tell. He remembered the day Aunt Jiang had asked him to pick up Xiaodo from Jiadi Park. Then he saw her flirting with the jean-selling Yui Fen right in front of him. This was the last straw in the cup of Jiang Yongguang's patience. He began to flood his daughter with questions. How could she go back to the scoundrel she begged to take her away from? Xiaodo tried to justify his act by saying that he had changed and was able to make a lot of money from selling clashing jeans. Throwing a glance at Liu Rui afterward, she said that she was uncomfortable around this man. She didn't want to be with him. Without even letting her say everything she wanted to say, her father slapped the girl in the face with all his might. Not expecting such a thing, the girl couldn't orient herself, took a couple steps back and fell to the floor. Zijan was not prepared for this and rushed over to her friend to help her up. When she came closer, she saw a thin trickle of purple blood spreading on Xiaodo's delicate lips. This was followed by the clinking of falling dishes, drawing the attention of everyone gathered behind them. Turning around at the sound, everyone saw Jiang Xing lying on the floor. Unable to bear hearing the news, the woman managed to lose consciousness. Frightened for her life, everyone rushed to help. Immediately calling an ambulance, the family went to the NICU, reporting the incident to Xiaodo's brother as well. Minmin was as angry as his father. He didn't understand why his sister would want this rascal. Did she not care about her mother's health? Lowering her gaze, not daring to look them in the eye, the girl couldn't find an answer logical in her mind. Her brother blamed her for her mother's deplorable condition, because exactly the same thing happened when she married for the first time, without listening to them. Her father once again tried to convince her that she didn't understand the seriousness of what was happening. Mr. Jiang asked her not to marry Cho Yufeng, at least for the sake of her mother's health. The girl stood her ground, blindly trying to prove that he had changed a lot since then and wasn't such a creep anymore. Jiang Yongguang already didn't know how to fight with the stupid fool in love. Maybe he should be on his knees begging her. Before he could even fully think about it, Xiaodo walked over and fell at his feet, on her knees begging him not to force her to do something she didn't want to do. Her father didn't want to hear anything. He started blaming her again for putting her mother in the hospital bed because of her. Looking at the ICU room with horror, the girl had to realize that she had almost caused a tragedy. Unable to find support in her family and feeling that if anything happened to her mother, she would never forgive herself, Xiaodo was forced to agree. She made a promise through her tears that she would never cross paths with him again or seek a meeting. Having finished the day with successful transactions, the young men decided to celebrate by having a drink or two. Swaying slightly as he walked, Yufeng hummed a song popular in the 80s under his breath. Even though it was the only song he knew, Shu noted that he was very good at singing. They're expecting a delivery from the toy factory in a couple days, so Shu persuaded Yufeng to stay a day to see Guanghai. But the young man refused. He was anxious to get back to see someone. A large moon shone high in the sky, surrounded by light cotton wool-like clouds. A dose of blood alcohol could easily loosen even the most confused tongue, so Shu was curious as to who Yufeng wanted to meet. Night is the best time for revelations. The guy was quick to admit that he missed his lover. Shu felt like the guy was just drunk and talking nonsense. What's your favorite? Unable to bear the parting, the thought of returning right tonight entered Cho Yufeng's drunken head. Initially, Shu didn't believe his comrade's words, thinking it was drunken nonsense. But he was serious, so they hopped on the bike and rushed forward, cutting through the wind. The next day, Yufeng went to Chinigu's store, who was chowing down on a batch of flared jeans. Seeing the person who almost caused him to be victimized by the crowd, Chief Chin became furious. Grabbing the guy by the collar, he began to threaten. Chin was ready to commit the crime of the century. Yufeng was not a timid person and didn't want to make a scene at all. He tried to be as relaxed as possible with the person across from him. But the guy's calmness made Boss Qin even more angry, shouting that the guy had tricked him. He almost snapped. In critical situations, it's either you or you, so without taking the hit, Yufeng pushed Qin away and he flopped on the floor. It was an unexpected development for the man. Thinking he was in charge, he didn't expect aggression in his direction. Sitting with his heel on the floor, he began to chase Yufeng away, promising to drag him through the courts if he showed up here again. However, the guy reminded him that he had paid his rent and his name was on the lists, so he had every right to trade. Dumbfounded by such insolence, Qin Yigu said that he would not allow him to sell anything here. Conceiving something with a sly expression on his face, it was as if Cho Yufeng had been waiting for these words. The next moment he shouted that there were relics, that he was not allowed to trade, although he had paid to rent a place to gather as many witnesses as possible. But Qin Yigu didn't care about the spectators. He threatened with his connections and the fact that he could deal with him, if need be. Calmly turning around, Yufeng left, wishing prosperity to the man he used to work for. The annoyed Qin Yigu only shouted back at him that he was not his superior and never had been. Shifting from the start of his grand plan, the protagonist went to his next important meeting. His next stop was Zhihai's business department. He had a few more things to settle. Since you can't just get into such a place, he was stopped by a guard at the entrance, as is required by statute. Having prepared himself in advance, Yufeng brought along an invitation pass, which he promptly submitted for verification. Seeing the personal recommendation from the Guanghai International Trading Company, the guard thought he was facing some big shot. Yufeng replied to him that he was just providing a place for them in Zhihai. After getting permission to enter, the guy went to Mr. Liu's office, who was peacefully reading a newspaper over a cup of tea. Yufeng didn't take long to reach the door. When he heard a knock on the door, the man invited the guest to enter. After apologizing for the inconvenience, Cho introduced himself as Xu Guotao's cousin and the organizer of the sensational exhibition. After recognizing the guy, Mr. Zhang offered him a seat while they waited for Principal Zhang. He should be here soon. Mr. Liu said he would take him to the night market, and they could discuss all the details. He shouldn't worry about how many days the exhibition would be held, because it all depended on the vendors in Guanghai. Cho Yufeng was grateful for their cooperation, but there was some uncertainty in his voice. Mr. Liu noticed that something was troubling the young man and asked if everything was all right. The organizer of the exhibition admitted that he had some problems and did not refuse to help. Although he is not awkward to talk about it, he asked to be exempted from paying the show fee, as he is already providing vendors with his space to sell. Mr. Liu didn't fully understand why he should be released, but Yufeng began to explain it to him. The thing was that he had already paid the night market manager, Qin Yigu, who told him that he would need to pay 20 yuan per exhibition. Mr. Liu couldn't believe that the manager of the night market was going to charge 20 yuan a day. Yufeng tried to explain the situation to Qin and had already paid half a year's rent in advance, but he wouldn't listen to him and said that as long as he was the manager there, he would charge him. But that was not all he told him. Mr. Li wondered what else this night market manager could have gibbered. From Yufeng's words, It appeared that all the money he would receive would end up going to Mr. Lee himself. The news that he would personally receive the money threw Mr. Lee into a stupor, but Yui Feng did not stop there and continued his deception. Making the most insulted and humiliated appearance possible, he informed Mr. Lee that he had been beaten for his refusal. Yui Feng let out a stingy tear as he complained about the lives of the common laborers in the market. With the excuse that Mr. Lee is his cousin, Qin Yigu is just taking advantage of them. Hearing that some scoundrel was using his name to benefit himself, Mr. Lee became furious and pounded his hand on the table. At that moment, there was a knock on the door, and Mr. Lee invited the man to enter the office. Just then, Mr. Zhang, one of the employees of Jahai's business department, came over. Mr. Lee ordered him to fire this Qin Yigu. Whoever he thinks he has no place in the night market. He also instructed Mr. Zhang to find out from the vendors in the market how much they charged as payment and calculate the total amount. No mercy. After accepting Mr. Lee's assignment, Zhang hurriedly dealt with the matter as soon as possible. The people in the night market didn't yet know what kind of show awaited them tonight and were shopping like nothing happened. Yui Feng went to say hello to Chief Qin, however. The latter was not happy to see him. He started yelling at him to get out of here, not noticing anything around him but the object of his hatred. The protagonist tried to give him a hint, and shifted his gaze to the side as if to show him the direction. While Chief Qin had time to figure out what Yui Feng wanted from him, someone abruptly grabbed him under his arms, immobilizing him. 2 policemen stood on either side of him. He tried to break free of the handcuffs, not realizing why he was being tied up. The policeman read him his rights and advised him not to resist arrest for his own good. Witnessing the arrest, the other vendors began to whisper, happy that finally someone had ratted him out and this bloodsucker would be punished. Determined to further annihilate Qin, Yui Feng shouted in his wake. Did he need more jeans? He could keep them at his place. Chief Jin chose to exercise his right to remain silent, but his expression alone spoke of his feelings. It was late. Xiaodo should have already returned home from work, so Yui Feng headed towards her house. Having bought some goodies, he went to the long-awaited meeting with his beloved. When Jiangxing's condition stabilized, Xiaodo cooked some porridge and carried it to the hospital to feed her mother a home-cooked meal. Loud footsteps were heard behind the girl, and suddenly someone reached out their hands, grabbing her. Cho Yui Feng hugged his lover from the back, smelling such a native and sweet scent that he missed. He was so looking forward to their meeting. However, the girl's reaction was the opposite. She didn't expect to meet him so soon. She nearly dropped the food her mother had prepared because of her fright and pulled away from the boy, scolding him. In the blink of an eye, Xiaodo turned around and hurriedly walked away from him, leaving the discouraged guy behind. Grabbing his bag of goodies, he rushed after her, wanting to help her, but the girl rudely refused him. Having traveled such a long way, the protagonist was not going to back down and continued to follow her. He couldn't understand why the girl was acting like this. Perhaps something had happened to her relative. Was that why she was in such a gloomy mood? The beloved only briefly replied that the affairs of her family no longer concerned him. Cho Yui Feng wanted to know what happened. After all, just a few days ago everything was fine, and she wasn't so cold to him. But the girl ignored him. Unable to bear it any longer, the boy ran after her and grabbed her by the arm, demanding that she explain everything to him, for he had a right to know. Xiaodo didn't expect such a reaction from him, and was slightly startled by her ex-husband's sudden movements. Demanding to be released, she yanked her hand away, not wanting contact with the young man. Yui Feng couldn't understand what he had done wrong. What could have changed her attitude toward him so drastically? Upon reaching Jehai No. 3 hospital, the girl asked not to follow her, but to wait outside. Leaving the depressed young man standing in a daze, Xiaodo hurriedly went inside before anyone noticed them. Looking at her with a confused look in her wake, Yui Feng had no choice but to listen to her. It was already late evening. Patient visiting time was coming to an end, so there were very few people in the hospital. This played to her advantage. However, thoughts were eating her up inside. How would she communicate everything to him? The realization that she would have to tell him about their breakup made tears stream down her cheeks. After calming down and coming to her senses, Xiaodo followed the corridor to room No. 3. The girl's mother was still awake, so she handed her some freshly cooked porridge to nourish her. Jiangxing was happy about her daughter's arrival. Besides, the porridge was very tasty. After making sure her mother had had enough, Xiaodo wanted to leave, saying she would come again tomorrow. However, the mother set aside the container of porridge and gestured for her daughter to sit next to her, setting herself up for a serious conversation. Xiaodo wanted to avoid it in every way possible, citing that the hospital would close soon, and it was time for mom to go to bed. Jiangxing didn't delay her for long, but only reminded her of her promise not to meet with Cho Yui Feng. As if nothing had happened, the girl replied that she would never contact him again. Every time the mother thought of him and his attitude toward her child, her heart began to ache. She did not understand why her daughter forgave him. Worried that mom might get sick again, Xiaodo put her to bed and said goodbye. Leaving the room, the girl secluded herself in a remote corner, trying to remain unnoticed. Left alone, she leaned against the wall and slowly slid down, unable to stay on her feet. Giving vent to her emotions and feelings, Xiaodo began to cry bitterly. She didn't know what to do, being caught between two fires. Cho Yufeng obediently waited outside the hospital, trying to see a familiar silhouette in the dark windows. Having come to his senses, the girl came out to him. The young man inquired by chance whether the girl's mother was lying there. Ignoring the question, Xiaodo beckoned him behind her to talk on the way and not waste time. Not really understanding what was going on, the young man followed his lover until she turned to him. Making a stern look, she said that only a fool would run after his ex-wife after divorce, asking him not to talk to her again. Yufeng was taken aback by her words. Why did she change her opinion of him so suddenly? After all, everything was fine. Wanting to know the truth, the guy grabbed her arm again, not letting her get away, demanding an explanation as to why she was acting like this. Xiaodo confessed that her family is against their marriage. His name alone gives her mom heart problems. She can't risk her mother's health like that. How can she be with him spitting on her? The young man told her that he had recently made a new deal, and now he would have a lot more money. She should let her parents know. He shouted to her that he had completely changed and would treat her differently. He wouldn't make the same mistakes again. Tired of this conversation, the girl snatched up her hand and rebuked him for not even having a house of his own. It was unbearably painful for Yufeng to hear her say that. But she was right. How could he take care of her if they didn't even have a place to live? To hide her real emotions, the girl hurried away, leaving her lover standing alone. Tears of regret began to flow down her rosy cheeks. She hadn't meant to hurt him, but circumstances forced it that way. The next morning, an employee of a local real estate agent was conducting a showing of a cozy home. After completing the inspection and making sure that he was satisfied with everything, the protagonist gave the realtor a large sum of money. The man counted the money, making sure the amount was correct, and thanked the young man. He then happily transferred ownership of the house to Yufeng, and the transaction was finalized. After saying goodbye, the realtor said he could always contact him if he wanted to purchase another property. Cho Yufeng looked at the house documents in his hands, remembering Xiaodo's words that pushed him to make this deal. He was trying to prove to himself that now he wasn't homeless. Now his family had a place to live in Zhihai. Cho Yufeng only regretted that he didn't have enough money to buy a house near his beloved's house. While the hero finalized all the paperwork with the buying and selling of the house, it was noon. The young man went to the train station to await the arrival of his newly minted business partners. It didn't take long for the men to arrive, and soon Yufeng could see a crowd approaching on the platform. Ahead of everyone was his comrade Shu, waving his arms, announcing his appearance. After greeting them, Yufeng heartily thanked everyone for their presence, looking forward to a long cooperation. Manager Cho then learned from Shu that they had agreed to deliver the goods at 10 o'clock in the evening today. Yufeng told his colleagues that they would now go to see Mr. Zhang, and after all the formalities, they would go to the night market to prepare the workplace. After hearing from Manager Chow a plan for their next steps, the men went to the business department. Mr. Zhang happily gave them the report and wished them good luck at the exhibition, not daring to detain anyone. Leaving the business department, Yufeng welcomed everyone to his rented space in the night market. Lao She, like everyone else, was impressed by the size of the area the guy was able to prepare. Stepping aside, Yufeng started to pull something out, but he couldn't manage it himself, so he called for Shuya's help. The men began pulling out some bright red bundle on sticks, stretching it across the wall. As it turned out, Yufeng had prepared a beautiful banner, the caption of which read the manufactory exhibition. He said that as soon as the time came, they would be sure to raise it above their heads. Having finished all preparations by morning, everyone took their position and the men took a tour of the market, inviting everyone to a sales display of handmade goods from the manufacturer. Stretching a banner that read Manufacturer's Exhibition and loading toys into carts, the guys walked along the street, enticing customers with low prices. A toddler walking by with his mom immediately noticed the plush beauty and told his parent about it. The cart was filled with brightly colored Monkey King toys, which the factory has had a sprinkling of sales in the past. The children were delighted with the new character. Their eyes immediately lit up and they couldn't take their eyes off them. Even the boy's mom thought they were cute. She had never seen anything like this in stores before. There was the cry of children outside, begging their parents to buy them new plush toys and cars. Seeing the joy of their children, many parents followed the fair chariot straight to the exhibition. Noticing the potential buyers, Shu pointed to Yufeng at the crowd following them. High up in a large square stretched a bright red sign indicating a manufactory exhibition. After seeing a variety of toys, kids started going crazy and begging their parents for an upgrade. People were curious about what else besides toys is sold here, and how much the entrance fee to the exhibition costs. Cho Yufeng announced that the entrance is free, and the cost of goods is affordable not only to the wealthy, but also to the most ordinary Zhihai resident. Shu still couldn't believe that so many people had come. It turned out that public campaigning was a great success. Having found customers, it was now left to them to successfully interest them and sell as much product as possible, which Yui Fen reported to the rest of his colleagues. Facing this kind of thing for the first time, Lao Shi and the representative of the other factory stared at him like sheep at a new gate. Meanwhile, Shu began offering customers clothes from Guangshai's largest factory, indicating that the price was 20 yuan instead of the original 40 to 50. Seeing the Dakrin clothing, the girls were immediately interested in the offer and decided to have a look. Stepping into the role of bargainer, Yui Fen began to assure that the run was limited and no more of these clothes would be in production. The price was biting a bit, so the girl decided to ask if they plan to lower the price in the future, but the guy replied that they can't do that because the company is already selling them at a loss to itself, not forgetting to remind that you can't buy such a model anywhere else. When people heard that the clothes were discontinued and on sale at a discount, they immediately wanted to try them on. Colleagues from the toy factory standing nearby were amazed by their trading methods, deciding to waste no time and start soliciting customers. To waste no time, they quickly rushed to their vending counters and got down to business. Launching a bamboo dragonfly into the sky, the man began to attract the children's attention, saying that the manufacturer was giving them away at cost price. The unusual contraption flying in the air was instantly spotted by the toddler and his mom. Determined to please the child, his mother bought him a toy for some 50 fen. Lao Shu decided to keep up with the man, and also started to advertise the toy of the Monkey King returning from his journey. A neighboring vendor was quick to announce the availability of tin toys that drive themselves from a couple turns of a key. The protagonist beckoned women to see Dakron jackets from the Jiangshui clothing factory, promising a 30 yuan discount. At such a price, they began to be sold like hotcakes, and sometimes it almost came to conflicts. 30 minutes later, the number of copies of the clothes had greatly decreased, which Yu Feng hurriedly informed the customers. One of the salesmen had a hunch that the guy was covering up the show to sell his clothes. However, his companion did not care. Because they had been given a place to sell and sleep for free, they could not miss the opportunity to earn money without spending anything. After serving another customer, Shu thanked her for her purchase, checking the stock of goods. Seeing that they had already sold a few boxes, he estimated that they had earned 1,000 yuan, not reading the spending on gasoline. He and Yue Feng were able to get 500 yuan each, equal to his several months' salary. Noticing that the guys were only selling women's clothes, Lao Shu approached Shu to clear his doubts. He remembered that it was originally about children's clothes and they only had some Dakron women's clothes. Hearing their conversation, the sly Yui Fen immediately hustled over, saying it was called the unified economy. Lao Shu had a mute questioning expression on his face. He had no idea what the young man was talking about. But with his gift of persuasion, Yui Fen said moms may not want to go to the store just for a toy. But since they also sell women's clothes, they will have a reason to come. The guy's plan was to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Moms buy toys for their kids and clothes for themselves. Each seller makes a profit, and together they all have a great future ahead of them. Hearing Yu Feng's ingenious plan, Lao Shi was once again convinced of the favorable cooperation. With the appearance of the young moon in the sky, the men closed the exhibition and hastened to rest from the busy 4. Lao Shu continued to praise Mr. Shu, calling him a business genius. Everyone could smell the scent of money. One of the men suggested that he celebrate the successful start of the collaboration with a delicious dinner. With no reason to refuse, Shu agreed that it wasn't a bad idea. We could get to know each other better. Cho Yufeng walked in silence the entire way, watching his happy colleagues, and this did not go unnoticed. He referred to his sore throat from having to shout a lot when Lao Shu inquired why he was silent. The other man remarked that Mr. Lao himself was also shouting quite loudly today, that they almost went deaf. Everyone burst into laughter after Shu Shu said that everyone in the neighborhood had heard Lao Shu trying to shout everyone out. Tonight, Yufen came to spend the night in his new home, bringing his first guests. The young man was sitting in one of the rooms calculating the profits of the day when suddenly Shu walked in. The guy told him that he had managed to earn 5,020 yuan from the exhibition today. Shu didn't waste any time either, and after calculating his profit, he reported that he had earned 6,980 yuan. The guys were happy with the proceeds from the first day of trading. It's not every day you can make that kind of money. But in order not to be verbose, Shu decided to still count the bills again so that there would be no mistake. It was only when he was finally convinced that he had 6,980 yuan that he calmed down. Adding the two amounts together, the guys had 12,000 yuan, which meant that they had sold 600 pieces of clothing. Considering that the exhibition had just started, Yui Feng expected even more customers once they became known. Shu was already eager to continue. However, it was already late. The young men were very tired, and Cho Yufeng started yawning from fatigue. Deciding to go to bed early to gain strength before the new workday, the guy wished Shu a good night and they went to their rooms. The next day, the men went to the bank to deposit the proceeds into an account. Shu handed Yui Feng a receipt with the set amount of 6,000 yuan, asking him to cherish it like the apple of his eye. The excited guys made a pact to sell even more product and make even more money. Under the red banner labeled Exhibition, the trade was boiling. Everything was discounted today, and the price was only 20 yuan per unit. The vendors at the neighboring pavilions were shocked at the made-up discounts and decided to give it a try too. With their feet in their hands, they scurried off to their workplaces hoping to make a lot of money. News of the big merchandise show spread throughout the city and reached the mall vendors. Seeing Minmin in the store, Wenwen asked why he didn't go to his job. Since things weren't going well in the store the past few days, so Minmin decided to stay and help out here. The girl said that all the problems are because of the exhibition at the night store, and when it is over, everything will be back to normal. Remembering that the factory making Dakron clothes was closing, he offered to buy some clothes for the store, but the girl refused, citing the uncomfortable fabric. Suddenly Wenwen remembered that she wanted to tell him one very important thing. Minmin couldn't wait to find out what she wanted to tell him, and the girl was pulling the intrigue as if it were evil. As the girl approached the man, she whispered in his ear that she had found out how she could buy a pair of skinny jeans for only 44 yuan. Meanwhile, at the Zhihai library, workers began to converge, putting the shelves of books in order. While Xiaodo was busy working, another girl colleague ran up to her and told her that there was an exhibition with free admission not far from here. This was the first time Xiaodo had heard of her. The girl was busy with work and family problems, so she had fallen out of reality a bit. Her colleague told her that rumor had it that the factory that made the Dakron jackets had closed down, and was now selling everything at the fair for 20 yuan instead of 50. Xiaodo was surprised at such a low price and decided to go with the girl for company as she wanted to buy herself a jacket for winter. There was a rush at the exhibition. Everyone wanted to be able to buy a jacket for 20 yuan on the last day of the sale. When the girls arrived, there was a big line up to the counter, so they had to stand at the very end. A coworker informed Xiaodo that, "This is the last batch for sale, so you should definitely be able to buy today." When it was their turn, the girl asked for a small-sized jacket, wondering if there was a brighter color. Having many different options, Shu suggested the pink-colored jacket to the girl. He then asked what Xiaodo standing next to her would like. The girl also ordered a pink jacket in a small size. Cho Yufen stood with his back to the customers next to the boxes of merchandise and collected orders. Preparing 2 pink-colored jackets, he turned around to hand them to the girls. Seeing that one of the customers happened to be Xiaodo, the lovers stared at each other in a daze without saying a word. After thanking her, Xiaodo's colleague took her jacket from Yufeng's hands. The young man was the first to break the silence, pretending not to know the girl and politely handing her the purchase. Xiaodo didn't expect to meet him again. She awkwardly took her pink jacket and followed her coworker. While one girl was rejoicing over a bargain purchase, the other looked sadly at her lover, moving farther and farther away from him. The evening came, and the exhibition closed its doors for buyers until the next working day. The only people left in the market were the sellers putting the rest of the goods in boxes. Lao Shi walked over to the guys and asked Shu for a snack of noodles tomorrow, instead of the annoying cornflakes. Shu didn't mind, especially since business was booming, so he promised to get eggs for everyone. However, he said he didn't earn that much, only 2 fines profit from each jacket sold. However, Mr. Lao asked him not to lie, for he clearly earns much more than 2 fing. Lao Shi was already not the first year in this business, and it was hard to fool him about this matter, so he didn't fall for Shu's words. He said there would be no point in coming to Zhihai without earning at least 5 yuan for each sale. After these words, both Shu and Cho Yufeng, who had heard the conversation, realized that they had been figured out, but Shu quickly oriented himself. He asked Mr. Lao not to tell anyone about it and promised him 2 whole eggs tomorrow instead of 1, along with noodles. After finishing packing, everyone went home to Cho Yufeng's house to rest and regain their strength. Just like yesterday, Yufeng and Shu sat at the table, calculating the total earnings for the day. They managed to earn 24,200 yuan. The protagonist said they sold 1,210 copies during the day, and if you add yesterday's sales, you get 1,810 copies. Shu was beyond happy that after 2 days they had managed to earn so much money he wanted to earn even more. Yufeng didn't delay him any longer and let him go to sleep, for the guy still had to make noodles for everyone in the morning. Early in the morning, everyone in the house woke up to the aroma of delicious noodles with the promise of eggs for breakfast. Once assembled, everyone went to the show to entice potential buyers with a final sale at very low prices. Everyone was trying to lure more customers to them. Yuifen enticing everyone with fancy Dakron jackets at 20 yuan apiece. Lao Shi was offering a colorful toy Monkey King from overseas. Meanwhile, a seller of various riding toys was luring boys to his place with unusual cars. Tonight was no different from the previous nights. Yufeng and Shu were sitting in a room and calculating profits. Their profits were increasing day by day. Today, the young men counted 31,100 yuan. They still had about 1,700 pieces of clothing left. Judging from the sales, Yufeng estimated that they should sell out everything in 2 days. The next evening, after the close of business, some vendors began collecting empty boxes. Walking up to them, Cho Yuifeng was surprised that they had managed to sell out so quickly. The guys explained that they had sold the leftovers at a low price to Jiang Ming and Old Man Shi, so they would be heading back to Guanghai. Meanwhile, Old Man Shu sat down for a smoke, and a curious Yuifeng came over to ask him why he was lounging around. Mr. Shi explained that he had nowhere to rush. Although he had some goods left, he would be able to get rid of them quickly. He suggested that Brother Shu give the leftover unsold goods to the factory so that he wouldn't have to deal with them anymore. Just at that moment, potential clients appeared on the horizon and the man's attention turned to them. Shu asked the men to chat without him for the time being and went off to earn some money himself. This time, Pei-Pei, Zijan, and Jujun walked by. Pei-Pei wanted to buy a jacket, but her friend started to talk her out of it because it was not the season for Dekron. It was hot and uncomfortable. Deciding that it would be warm in the winter, Pei-Pei still decided to buy the jacket as a gift for her mom for when she came to visit for Chinese New Year. The friends approached the salesperson, and the girl asked what the price of these jackets was. Shu replied that the price was only 20 yuan, and if she wanted to buy in time, she had better hurry, because the sale would be stopped tomorrow. While the girls were busy looking at the jacket, Ju Jun saw some familiar features in the man munching ice cream to the side. Taking a closer look, the guy recognized him as an old acquaintance of Cho Yufeng, and asked what was he doing here. Without taking a break from the deliciousness, the young man replied that he was selling clothes. What else could he do at the market? Ju Jun couldn't believe that Yufeng was such a hard worker. Scoffing, he asked if he was the one who had organized this exhibition. Yuifen would have to lie about working for someone if it was the first day of the expo. But since there was no reason to do so now, he bluntly replied that he was the organizer. Hearing their conversation, Zijan doubted that a beggar salesman like him possessed the means and connections to do so. Yuifeng replied that individual entrepreneurs should not be underestimated. If she didn't believe it, let her ask other sellers. In that second, the men decided to play along with Yufen and started calling him boss, asking him to let them know the next time he was going to organize an exhibition. Ju Jun was speechless at the fact that some lowlife from the village was called Boss Cho. Zijan got angry, saying that no one wears Dekron these days, and threw the jacket back to Shu. As she left, the girl asked Jia Pei-Pei to never take her to such squalid places again. The young moon hung high in the sky. The men returned home for a well-deserved rest. Cho Yuifeng decided to cook dinner tonight and was busy in the kitchen while Shu was handling the finances in the meantime. When Yuifeng brought out his noodles, he preferred to finish counting the money he had earned today first. Placing the plate of noodles on the table, Yuifeng offered him his help, however. The guy could manage on his own. Finished with the math, Shu reported that they had earned 32,680 yuan today. Cho Yufeng reminded the man to remember to make a deposit at the bank tomorrow. Shu jumped up out of the blue and tapped his hand on the table, puzzling the young man across from him. The next second he began to thank him, for he could not have dreamed of earning so much in his life. Yufeng, although he was flattered by such words, stopped his sweet flow of speech, for it was not only his merit. He was also grateful for Shu's help. Without him, he simply wouldn't have been able to organize the exhibition. Yuifen congratulated the man on his successful sales and said he hoped for the possibility of a new cooperation. Having completed the exchange of courtesies, the men shook hands, sealing the verbal agreement to work together. Seeing the successful sales of jackets, Shu asked if they could sell further and organize another exhibition, if they bought Dakron from other factories. The young man replied to him that they would not do it because the risks were too great. Because Dakron was starting to lose its popularity, he couldn't guarantee that buyers would be interested in the product. Due to a lack of connections in other cities and having no idea about local demand for clothing, their strategy might not work in Jiangdu, for example. So Yuifen said they should end there. Shu hadn't thought about such points as carefully as his comrade, so he decided to listen to him. However, he asked him to remember to share with him in the future tips on how to make a quick buck. Even though Yuifeng agreed for the sake of appearances, he thought to himself that it would be easier for him to work alone since he had already been betrayed once. He believed that there was no room for feelings in business. The best kind of cooperation was to get the benefit of each other. The next morning, the young men went to Jehai Station. It was time to head home. Even though the exhibition was over, Shu and old men Shi and Bai couldn't wait to earn money again, so they asked the guy not to forget about them. Cho Yufen escorted his colleagues to the train, promising to call them if there were any new deals in the future. After making sure the men had left, Yuifen began to formulate a new plan while they were gone. Upon reaching the nearest payphone, the protagonist immediately called Mr. Khan to ask him for a favor. The man was glad to hear Yuifeng and immediately inquired how he was doing. Planning to visit Mo Capital, the young man asked Mr. Kong to take care of Yu Zheng and Yu Yue. Mr. Kang told him to take it easy and mind his own business while he looked after the boys, for which Yuifen thanked him. The next day, early in the morning, the protagonist arrived at Mo's capital, pondering his next move. He decided to stop by the cafe first, ordering himself some noodles and rice to refresh himself. The window of the cafe had a good view of the fashion house in Mo's capital, where he was going to go next. As far as he remembered, this company was the first to organize fashion shows in the 80s in China, which greatly influenced the fashion industry. They made the public emphasize the beauty of the body by organizing a big model show in Jingbei in 1984. At the time, it was rumored that the clothes worn by the models were sold for a three-figure price. By obtaining quality certificates, the fashion house in Mo's capital has become a major player in the fashion industry. The entire year from 1983 to 1984 people were buying up the goods. So Yui Feng decided that it wouldn't be a problem to move the sales up a year. He figured that the 50,000 yuan he could earn would be enough to pay for the place, the models, and the costumes. So he decided to give it a try. Meanwhile, at the mall, Wenwen and Minmin were planning to buy a new batch of clashing jeans. The new supplier promised to sell at 44 yuan per pair only to them, but only this batch. The next ones would cost 50 yuan per pair. Having no extra money, Ming refused to give an advance of 10,000 yuan. The vendor had a goal to make as much money as possible, so he didn't give up that easily, saying that rich people like them should have extra money. He decided to offer to buy them jeans for half the amount, but then the price would be 46 yuan per pair. Thinking it was a favorable offer, Ming decided to consult with Wenwen about buying 5,000 yuan worth of jeans. After weighing the pros and cons, Wenwen decided that they would not save money and ordered 10,000 yuan worth of flared jeans. Minmin began to shout in an indignant tone, asking where would they get so much money from. Wenwen took him aside so that the supplier couldn't hear their conversation, asking him to calm down, saying that they would miss the opportunity to earn an extra 400 yuan. The guy understood it perfectly well, but the fact remains that they do not have such a large sum. With hope, the girl asked if he could borrow some money from his father again. Minming replied that his father would not give him any more money, and it would be selfish of him to leave Lianliang and Xiaohua without money. Even if Wenwen tried to help him earn money, he had already borrowed 5,000 from his father and failed to repay it. He could not come and ask for another 10,000. The girl's reaction was very strange. She started laughing like crazy in response to his words. She reminded him that the exhibition was over and their business was sure to go up. It would be a shame to miss such an opportunity. Confident that they would be able to repay the full amount, she asked to take the money secretly while his mom was in the hospital to avoid arguments. Hearing her seemingly successful plan, Minmin wondered briefly if it was possible to pull something like this off. Noticing that the guy was beginning to agree, the girl assured him that they could get rich very easily. After making a plan for the kidnapping, the couple came to visit Minmin's parents for dinner in the evening. The family sat down at a large table laden with delicious food. Mom told the gaunt Xiaodo to eat more meat. After learning what a bad man Liu Rui turned out to be, the father informed the girl that they wanted nothing more to do with him. Xiaodo was very happy about this. Now the girl could exhale. She wouldn't have to socialize with this person anymore. The girl had good news for her parents too. She informed them that she would soon get a full-time job. Mom was so overjoyed that she couldn't hold back her tears. She was happy for her daughter. Deciding it was time to put the plan into action, Wenwen suggested Xiaodo take a walk with her parents in honor of the reconciliation. After promising to clear the table and wash the dishes, she hurried out of the house. After making sure everyone was gone, the girl called Minmin over and started cleaning up herself. Setting off to find the money, he instructed her to stand guard to make sure no one suddenly walked in. After entering his parents' room, Minmin started going through his things looking for the cherished book. Soon he found what he came for. His father had 9,000 yuan in his account. Promising himself to pay it all back, he stole the book. Deciding that he needed to find a place to stay for the night, the protagonist went in search of a hotel. After choosing one, he went to the front desk, however. He was met there by a little girl. He asked the child to call his parents to discuss the price of an extended stay. This was clearly not the first time the little girl had met visitors, so she quickly called out to her mom. When the woman came out, Yuifen tried to negotiate to lower the price of renting the room because he wanted to stay for a longer period of time. He told her that the hotel across the street was asking 2 yuan a night, but he was willing to stay with her if she offered a better price. The woman offered him 1 and 8 yuan per night, saying that he could not find a lower price. However, when she learned that he was only going to stay for a week, she raised the price to 1 and 9 yuan per night. Yufen had no choice, so he agreed, recognizing that the woman was good at bargaining. After going up to the room and taking a shower, the guy immediately passed out on the bed, tired for the day. The next morning, the lad was to taste life in the capital to the fullest. The first difficulty started with trying to get on a crowded bus, trying not to be crushed. Yuifeng wasn't used to seeing so many people crammed together like fish in a jar. After getting out of that death car, the guy headed to his first destination. The protagonist decided to start with an organization affecting the entire beauty industry of the fashion house of the capital of Mo. When he approached the gatehouse, he informed the guard that he had come from another city to purchase their goods. Realizing it was another peddler, the man told him to turn right and then walk straight to the end. After thanking him for his help, Yufeng headed off in the direction indicated, and the guard was only surprised that all the youths had gone into sales nowadays. Walking along the specified route, the young man saw a large queue gathered near the cash register. Finding an extreme person, he asked if it was possible to buy goods for resale here. After receiving an affirmative answer, Yufeng took his place in line and waited for his time. After a while, it was Cho Yufeng's turn. The man sitting at the checkout counter asked with an important look, "What did he want to buy?" Saying that he wasn't from around here and didn't know what kind of merchandise they had, Yufeng inquired about the assortment. The man began listing white dresses with black bows, sleeveless blouses, white skirts. Yufeng had no idea what to get since he hadn't seen the clothes in his eyes, so he hesitated, causing the man sitting at the checkout to anger. The man raised a shout that he wasn't the only one and held up the entire line, rushing him to make his choice. A bewildered Cho Yufeng decided to butter the man up by offering him 2 cigarettes, asking him to show him the goods first. However, the man yelled at him, "Because you can't smoke here because of the flammable clothes that can easily turn into ashes." Causing himself even more embarrassment, Yufeng quickly hid the cigarettes, saying that he wasn't going to smoke, complaining that it was very difficult for private entrepreneurs. He began to ask to be shown the goods after all, for he planned to buy back a large quantity. Taking pity on him, the man agreed to his request, telling him to wait until everyone had finished buying. Overjoyed, Yufeng stepped aside so as not to disturb anyone, and began to wait for the last shopper to be stingy. While Yufeng was propping up the wall from idleness, he noticed one man, who had bought more than he could carry, accidentally dropped the goods. The young man immediately rushed over to help since he wasn't doing anything anyway, and the man thanked him. While they were carrying heavy bags of clothes, they had time to get acquainted, and the man introduced himself as Lu Pu. Since the man is a regular customer and probably knows everything, Yufeng asked him what the name of the man at the cash register was. Lu Pu replied that his name was Feng Baobao, concluding that the young fellow was not from around here and was here for the first time. Deciding not to give his real place of residence, Yufeng said he came from Jindu. Determined to help the inexperienced boy, Mr. Lu warned him that Baobao, the son of the logistics director, is a very straightforward type. If you insult him, you could get into trouble. Cho Yufeng was glad that he had met such a helpful man and thanked him for the warning. He helped him load his clothes into the cart and Mr. Lu left, saying goodbye to the young man. It's been a while. The protagonist decided to return, hoping the crowd had dispersed and he could inspect the merchandise. However, having heard about the cashier, he was sure Baobao would go to lunch or something, and then the line would gather again and he would have to wait again. If that were to happen, the young man decided that he would have to try and bribe Feng Baobao. Cho Yufeng was like water. As soon as the cashier noticed him, he said he was leaving for lunch. Standing up from his desk, Baobao tried to close the gate, but he couldn't reach it, and the young man gladly offered to help him. Baobao looked at Yufeng's actions with suspicion, but did not say anything to him. Cho decided to apologize to the man for the trouble he had caused this morning, trying to draw the man into contact. Baobao said should worry about the other buyers since they came from far away and he was only delaying them. Yufeng gave a look, but it infuriated him that the man knew he was also a foreigner, but still chased him away. Making a guilty look, Yufeng offered him lunch together so he could make amends. Feeling like the navel of the earth, Baobao didn't mind eating something simple, so he agreed. The young men went to the nearest establishment and ordered a lot of different food. Yufeng again tried to get the man to show him the goods. Baobao asked him a counter question, wondering how many goods he planned to buy from him. The young man replied that he planned to spend about 40,000 yuan on clothes. Cashier Feng didn't expect this guy to be such a rich customer, since the purchase would be wholesale, and for a large amount, Yufeng decided to ask for a price reduction, and the man agreed. But after that, he clarified that he would lower the price by a couple yuan on some things, and only a couple fing yuan on others.